Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the first part of WhatIf training to be a hero meant weekly villain attacks and struggling friendships. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Is everyone in position? One after the other, all of the heroes and sidekicks who had been mobilized for the operation confirmed. Sir Night-Eye kept his eyes locked onto the screen, carefully evaluating the situation from a safe distance thanks to the numerous cameras that had been secretly set up over the last month or so. Tonight's operation was one of the biggest he had ever participated in as of yet, and there was no telling when everything would quite literally go to hell. After all, while they had spent many weeks meticulously planning the raid down to the smallest detail, there was simply no chance that a plan of this scale wouldn't go off the rails at least once or twice. "Sir, everyone is in position and ready to begin the operation," suddenly announced Sidekick Centipter. "Awaiting your signal, sir." "Very well. We'll simply have to deal with each issue as they come up." "Begin." "You heard him, everyone. Give them hell," cheered Psychic Bubble Girl. About 3 months earlier, word of an illegal research facility had reached the ears of some particularly daring info brokers, who hadn't wasted their chance to win some brownie points and some actual cash with the hero agency. Sir Night-Eye had instantly taken an active role in the investigation of this research facility. Following a trail of mysterious disappearances, random memory wipes, and even a few seemingly unrelated murders, they finally managed to gather enough evidence to get an official warrant. After quickly rallying other pro-heroes to their cause, it took them another month or so to finally come up with a large-scale raid and rescue operation that had exactly 97.24% chances of success. Unfortunately, it would appear as though chance wasn't on their side tonight. There isn't anyone. The labs have been destroyed. All entrances are guarded. There's no way they could have escaped. They had thoroughly mapped out the facility, an abandoned military base. They had identified all of the potential escape routes and had carefully cut them off. They had set up cameras and all sort of detection equipment to ensure no one would get in or out without them noticing. They even made use of Sir Night-Eye's quirk to ensure their success. Damn it, they knew we were coming. There was simply no other explanation. All of the labs had been destroyed. Every single file and piece of equipment had been burned to ashes, and not a single person, researcher, guard, and victim alike, was left. Or at least, no one was left alive. Shit, there's a ton of corpses here. Over here too. They executed everyone. They didn't want to leave any loose end. We're too late. It was a harsh blow for everyone involved. All of their diligent work had gone up in smoke before they even realized it, but, most importantly, they had failed. They had wasted too much time planning. They wanted to be careful in order to avoid their targets using the victims as hostages. They had tried to do too much with too little time. We bit off more than we could chew. The thought left a bitter aftertaste on Eraserhead's tongue as he stood in the doorway of yet another burnt-down laboratory on the 3rd floor. There wasn't a single speck of blood on the floor despite the burnt bodies stacked up in the corner, but there was a fine layer of dust, and the distinct smell of rot filled the air. Obviously, they had arrived a few days late at the party. "Eraserhead, do you copy?" The buzzing of his earpiece along with the voice of his fellow pro-hero snapped him out of his morbid thoughts, and he quickly turned around to leave the room and return in the hallway, where the air was a tad easier to breathe in. "What is it, Midnight?" he finally asked. "We need your help down in the basement. We found something, but..." She trailed off for a moment, before heaving out a sigh. "You'll understand better once you get here. Please, just hurry up." "All right, I'm coming." The communication cutting off, Eraserhead spared one last glaze for the corpse-filled room, then shook his head and started heading downstairs, gritting his teeth. What a shitty day. A few minutes later, he found Midnight, Fatgum, and Edshot all gathered before a closed door. They were all discussing in quiet tones, obviously restless, but he couldn't exactly blame them. The night was not going as planned. When he arrived, though, Midnight perked up a bit, and she quickly gestured for him to approach. "What's the situation?" he simply asked. He wanted to be done with this shitty mission and go take a shower. For once in his life, the stench of dead people clung to him like a second skin, and he hated it. "Did you find anyone in there?" "Yes and no," answered the woman, biting her thumb. "There's someone inside, but they're apparently controlling the animals in there, so we can't get in without getting attacked." He only then noticed the large claws marks on Edshot's left arm, though the ninja didn't appear bothered in the least by his injury. "My quirk doesn't work on animals, and whoever's controlling them is too far for me to reach quickly. I'm gonna take care of the animals," then assured Fatgum, patting his large body. "You guys take cover behind me, and Eraserhead can do his thing once he's inside." "Sounds good. What kind of animals are in there?" he asked, a tad warily. "I couldn't say," replied Edshot, glancing at his injury. "All of the lights have been turned off, and I didn't see anything until I was attacked." If I was to guess, however, I would say dogs, or something of the like. Just great, grunted Eraserhead, readjusting his glasses. All right, let's just get this over with. Nodding, Fatcom then opened the door and went in. Thanks to his quirk, he could absorb powerful impacts, but he was also more resistant to damage caused by blades and guns or, in this case, claws and fangs. Violent snarling echoed throughout the dark room as he went in, effectively drawing the attention of whatever beasts were inside. Headshot, turn on the lights. I can't use my quirk without seeing the target. Right away, Fatcom started cursing loudly as a few of the wild animals pounced on him, their powerful jaws snapping shut on his arms and his oversized torso, but they barely managed to sink any deeper than a few inches, although it still hurt quite a bit. While Fatcom handled them, though, Headshot quickly moved inside and, in a matter of seconds, the light was turned on, blinding everyone for a brief moment. Gah, those dogs are ta big. What the hell happened to them? They're not dogs, they're wolves, warned Headshot, quickly putting some distance between him and one of the snarling beasts. There's 4 of them. Eraserhead, can you see who's controlling them? Exclaimed hurriedly Midnight, peering inside. It's not like there were many places where whoever was controlling them could hide. The room was fairly small, and the 4 gigantic wolves, 3 of which were currently attacking Fatcom while the last one stood between Headshot and a cell occupied most of the space. The lights were pretty weak, so they didn't reach the very back of the cell, but there was definitely a human shape laying on the ground. Now able to see his target, Eraserhead wasted no time in activating his quirk. After a few seconds, though, the wolf before Headshot pounced on the man, trying to tackle him and bite his head off. My quirk isn't working. That's impossible. No one can resist my erasure. He paused, his eyes narrowing at the person behind the bars. Although they were almost completely hidden in the shadows, he could see they were in a sitting position. But they weren't moving. No shifting, no tension, nothing. They're not awake, dead or unconscious, but they're not controlling the wolves, he realized. If whoever was behind those bars wasn't controlling the wolves, though, it could only mean one of 2 things. 1, someone else was present, which was most unlikely. Or 2, the wolves weren't attacking them because they saw them as the enemy, but because they saw them as a threat for whoever was still held in that cell. Plus, now that he was paying attention, he could see 2 bodies laying on the ground near the cell. They were in pretty bad shape, having obviously been ripped to pieces by those wolves. All of the victims have been killed, but they couldn't kill this one because of the wolves protecting them, suddenly understood Eraserhead, his heart pierced with the tiniest blade of hope. They think we've come to finish what they started, meaning there's a chance this one is still alive. Headshot, Fatcom, stand down, he immediately ordered. For once, the best way to win the fight was to not fight at all. They think we came here to kill their charge. They're protecting the kid who's inside that cell. What? That's crazy, you're crazy, snapped Fatcom, trying to shake off the wolf still holding onto his arm. Why would they think we've come to kill a kid? Because those 2 over there tried to, replied somberly the underground hero, jabbing his thumb at the 2 mangled corpses. Just stop struggling and calm down. The priority right now is to get the victim out of here and ensure that we save at least 1 life tonight. That did pacify Fatcom's temper a bit, and he finally stopped trying to hit the wolves. On his side, Headshot was now pinned to the floor with the wild animal still growling at him, his fangs a tad too close to his face, but the ninja kept his cool and stayed still. After a few seconds of absolute silence and tension, the snarling and growling finally started to quiet down, and Eraserhead carefully approached the wolf still pinning his fellow hero down. His hands held in the air as he came closer under the wary, menacing stare of the wolf. He only stopped once he was close enough to extend his hand in a non-threatening fashion, at first looking like he'd try to bite his hand off. The wolf then calmed down a bit as he carefully took in his scent. After a few more seconds, the wolf pulled away and stepped off Headshot, barking toward the other 3 wolves, who instantly released Fatcom. Wow, I didn't know you were so popular with dogs, mused Midnight, now standing in the doorway with her arms crossed over her chest. I thought you were more of a cat person. Chi-Chi. It's not like he liked dogs, or wolves, in this matter, but, for some reason, he had always been pretty popular with the canine folks. In the current situation, though, he certainly wasn't about to complain. Shaking his head, he then made a step in direction of the cell. But the 3 other wolves instantly started growling at him, once again ready to pounce. Enough, he snapped, his eyes flashing red for a second. Be it because of his intimidating aura, or simply because they didn't sense any killing intent, the wild beasts finally calmed down and allowed him to continue. They were obviously still tensed, but he was now certain that they wouldn't attack unless he made a rash move. So, careful not to trigger their paranoia, he finally reached the cell. Inside, the child, the form was too small to be anything but a kid, which made him sick, still wasn't moving, and he dreaded the worst. Headshot, he called out. Help me out with the lock. Roger. The wolves let him pass, and a moment later, the lock of the cell was broken, and Eraserhead quickly made his way inside, his eyes adjusting to the shadows as he kneeled before the prone form of the child. He felt his blood run cold when seeing the sorry state she was in. A little girl, too thin for her own good, with a metallic collar attached to her neck. She was clearly underfed, and only God knew what kind of chemicals they had pumped into her frail body, but as he checked her pulse, intense relief washed over him. Midnight took a hesitant step inside. "Is she? She's alive," he announced, and the tension in the room instantly dropped. "Deadshot, I'll need you to get that collar off. Midnight, contact Sir Night-Eye right away. Facum, make sure no one comes into this room. The wolves will get too agitated if more people come in." "You got it." As Deadshot also came inside the cell to use his quirk and break the lock on her metallic collar, Midnight activated her earpiece, her voice trembling with relief a little as she made her report. "This is Midnight, reporting in. We found a survivor in the basement, but she's unconscious and requires immediate medical assistance. Send no more than 2 medics to carry her out. She's a potential target, so we need to secure an evacuation route." As Midnight quickly passed on orders and information, Eraserhead gazed down thoughtfully at the little girl before him. There were animal ears sitting atop of her head, and he could also see a dirty tail, so that explained the wolves. Whoever was behind this secret lab had obviously been experimenting with her quirk using those wolves, which led them to form a bond. "I'd like to call it luck, but you've been anything but lucky, haven't you, kid?" 6 days later, the young girl, who had later on been identified as Inuzuka Rukia, had been urgently transferred to a special facility located in the middle of a forested mountain, a territory which was owned by none other than the Wild Pussycats, one of the top 4 pro-hero teams of the nation. The reason why she wasn't currently in a specialized hospital was that, as the only loose end left by her previous captors, she would surely become a target, and they couldn't risk losing the only person they had managed to rescue. So, under the careful supervision of the Pussycats, and under the careful and expert care of 3 doctors who had been sworn to secrecy, Inuzuka Rukia was now slowly on her way to a perfect physical recovery. Unfortunately, however, she had yet to wake up even once. "Ooh, Eraser, I didn't expect you to drop by. You and me both." "Mandalay," sighed the man, looking even more tired than usual. Only a handful of heroes were aware of her current whereabouts, which included him, since he had been the one to suggest for her to be taken to the Wild Pussycats headquarters in the first place. A bunch of annoying paperwork along with some regulations Sir Night-Eye had put in place in order to ensure the girl's safety had stopped him from showing up until now. But he was starting to wonder if coming here really had been a good idea, after all. "It's not like you to visit the people you save," mused knowingly Mandalay. Her eyes then softened a bit. "Though I can understand why this one is different. Because she's the only survivor. Because she's the only one who isn't dead. Because she's the only one he could save." "How is she?" he simply asked, not wanting to go down that particular path of self-loathing just yet. "Any progress in her recovery?" "She's steadily getting better. She was severely underfed when you found her, and there were distinct signs of overexhaustion when the doctors examined her, but she didn't actually sustain any sort of injury, or at least, none that hadn't already scarred," explained Mandalay, gesturing for him to follow her as she started guiding him upstairs. The chemicals were another matter entirely, and it took them a few days to fully pump them out of her system, but she's in the clear now. Whatever drugs they injected her with no longer have any influence on her, and there isn't supposed to be any lasting damage. "Physically, you mean?" he replied, a tad dryly. "Physically, yes," she confirmed, heaving out a small sigh. "If we're talking of her psychological state, well, honestly, I don't know what to expect. She hasn't woken up yet, but once she does, she'll find herself in an entirely new environment, surrounded by people she doesn't know, and there's no telling how she'll react." What about the wolves? Because if there was one thing they had been forced to go along with, it was letting the 4 wolves stay by her side. Almost as soon as she had been taken away from the illegal research facility, they had disappeared into the woods, only to show up 2 days later before the Pussycats' headquarters, practically demanding entry. It had scared the living hell out of the poor doctors, but after some discreet phone calls, it was agreed that the wolves would be allowed to stay with her. While they were wild animals still, they appeared to possess an almost human intelligence, and the girl would surely feel safer with them around once she woke up. "They haven't caused any trouble, if that's what you're asking," answered Mandalay with a light shrug. "We were a little worried at first, but I think they're starting to trust us. They won't leave anyone alone with the girl, but they no longer growl whenever we go inside the room, so that's a start, I guess. Without them, she'd be dead," he simply pointed out. "I suppose we ought to be thankful that she has such fierce protectors." A more somber thought then crossed his mind, and he was forced to ask, "What of her family? Any news on that front?" "She doesn't have any," answered Pixie Bob, suddenly showing up between them. She offered them an apologetic grin for startling them, but her smile quickly dropped as she handed Eraserhead a file with barely 5 papers in it. She was born here, but her mother died shortly after giving birth, and her father, Inuzuka Tetsuru, died 4 years later. He was a policeman killed in action. A friend of the family took her in, but after an incident involving the appearance of her quirk, she simply disappeared. After some investigation, it was determined that she had been kidnapped, and she was simply written off as never found. Pixie Bob lightly tapped the file with a sad sigh. She doesn't have any other living relatives, and the family who had taken her in moved out of the city a few years after her disappearance. I doubt they'd take her in again. What with this whole mess? A few years, echoed Eraserhead, a little tense. How old is she now? She was 4 when she disappeared, which was 5 years ago, so she's now 9 years old. There was a moment of heavy silence as they all took a moment to digest the information. She had been stuck in this hellhole for 5 years, and they only managed to rescue her now. Though, this also led to a much scarier thought. How many more people had gone missing over the years and had died in that very place, without the heroes ever taking notice? Someone was pulling the strings of this whole operation, someone powerful enough to keep this under wraps for years. But who? And why? Why now? Crash. The sound snapped the 3 heroes out of their thoughts, and they instinctively lifted their heads. The crashing noise came from the floor above, where the girls' room was situated. Not wasting a second, they instantly made their way upstairs as quickly as they could, fearing the worst as they heard someone scream and a door snap shut. When they arrived, though, they simply found the 3 doctors gathered before the door of the girls' room. One of them, a man, was holding his bleeding arm against his chest while another of the 2 doctors attempted to slow the blood flow. What happened? Asked urgently Mandalay. She woke up while I was treating her injuries, grunted the injured doctor, obviously in pain. I think she panicked, and she attacked me without thinking. Though, now, those damn beasts won't even let us in. She's surely using her quirk to control them. Arg, doctor, calm down, please, begged the woman beside him. I need to treat your wound right away. All right. Eraserhead narrowed his eyes a bit, but nodded. All right, I'll handle this. Stay on standby, just in case something goes wrong. Behind his back, he subtly signed something to the other 2 pro-heroes who had accompanied him. The women stiffened slightly, but didn't say anything, and Eraserhead took that as his cue to move. As soon as he opened the door, though, he was greeted by the strangely familiar sight of 4 snarling wolves standing between the door and the bed, and ready to pounce and tear out the throat of anyone who might pose a threat. As for the girl, she was now awake. She was holding her legs against her chest, her head buried into her knees, and her shoulders were trembling rather violently. Her ears were twitching, too, and there was blood dripping from her claw-like nails, most probably the doctor's. She probably hadn't even noticed him, though, for the wolves calmed down when seeing him, albeit still a little tensed. They stopped growling, which he took as his cue to fully step inside. Carefully closing the door behind him, Eraserhead then took a step forward, and the girl's head instantly snapped up. Yellow, beastly eyes clashed with his, and a guttural snarl clawed its way out of her throat as her fangs grew longer and sharper. Almost instantly, the wolves around her reacted similarly and became hostile again. So she really is controlling them. That or they did something to artificially enhance her quirk, which rendered her a lot more powerful than she should be at this age. That's enough, he simply said in a firm, no-nonsense tone. I'm not here to hurt you. She obviously wasn't convinced, though, for she bared her teeth once more. Then, all of a sudden, his head was filled with intense, painful pressure. He could almost feel his skull cracking under the unknown force, and there was this almost paralyzing fright slowly taking over his limbs as he felt the urge to fall to his knees and bow his head. Shit, understanding dawning on him. He somehow managed to regain enough strength to lift his head, looking at her right in the eyes. He activated his quirk. Red clashed with yellow and, at once, the pressure vanished. A strangled gasp escaped her as her fangs shrunk back and returned to simple, sharper than usual teeth, and fear crept up in her glowing irises as she gazed up at him. Her ears flattened against her skull, and she was the one who finally lowered her head, burying her face once again in her knees as she let out a low whimper. As if on cue, the 4 wolves also settled down, lowering themselves and putting their heads against the floor, as if they were some tamed dogs in the process of being scolded by their master. What the hell? He muttered, a bit taken aback. All he had been trying to do was stop her from making his brain implode, but he suddenly had the feeling that something else had happened. However, now wasn't the time for questions. While the girl no longer appeared like she wanted to throttle him, she was now shaking even more badly than before, as if she was expecting him to hurt her. Gritting his teeth a bit, he forced himself to calm down and slowly made his way to the bed. Crouching down so he could properly look at her, he instantly noticed the silent tears running down her cheeks. No sobs, though. She was eerily quiet. I'm not here to hurt you, kid, he finally said, repeating his earlier words. Ugh, I'm not good with kids. It should have been Midnight or Mandalay in here. The name's Aizawa-sensei. I'm a pro hero, and I'm one of the people who brought you here. Do you know why we brought you here? After a moment of silence, she lightly shook her head in a negative gesture, her eyes still shut tightly, and he sighed. To help you. We brought you here to help you, Rukia. She stiffened upon hearing her name. Then, slowly, she lifted her head and opened her eyes, now really looking at him. She had obviously panicked when seeing a man in a white coat towering over her, but the one before her wasn't like that. He looked different from all of the people she had seen before, but, most of all, he smelled nice. He didn't smell like blood. He's one of them, she finally choked out, her arms tightening around herself. I figured as much. His hand suddenly fell on her head, and her eyes widened at the contact. It doesn't hurt. Me and the other heroes are going to take care of him, so you don't have to worry, all right? None of them will ever be able to hurt you again, I promise. His hand fell from her head, and he extended it to her. You're going to have to trust me, though. I know it's a lot to ask from you right now, but do you think you can do it? She paused, now staring at his hand with dozens of thoughts and worries running through her still somewhat hazy mind. Everything was moving too fast, and she still didn't fully understand what exactly was going on. But what she did understand was that she could trust that man. She had to. I can. Wiping away her tears, she then grabbed his hand with a firmness that neither he nor she expected, a newfound determination blossoming in her chest. If she truly wanted to be free, it was now or never. Eraserhead finally stepped out of the room, carrying the child in his arms. She appeared to be unconscious, and the injured doctor bit back a grin. It would seem that he had managed to slip her enough of the drug, after all, and that meant his job here was done. She would die of an overdose in the next minute or so, and the heroes would be none the wiser. Now, all he needed was to make a clear getaway using his quirk. Why isn't my quirk working? Then, he saw them, the glowing red eyes of the hero he had attempted to fool. He was screwed. Wait. I can. Mandalay, Pixie Bob. The two women moved as one, effectively tackling the fake doctor to the floor and knocking him out before he could even try and defend himself. The two doctors beside him quickly moved out of the way, startled, and Eraserhead heaved out an annoyed sigh as he deactivated his quirk. His eyes were starting to feel seriously dry, but he couldn't do anything about it since he was still holding the girl. It's okay, Rukia. You can open your eyes now. A tad wary still, the child, however, did as told. Her sharp gaze landed on the now unconscious man with an unreadable expression, before she averted her eyes and wrapped her arms around the hero's neck, obviously eager to get away from the guy who had just tried to kill her. How'd you know he was a fake, anyway? Then asked Pixie Bob while Mandalay cuffed the villain. He said earlier that he had been treating her injuries, simply replied Eraserhead with a light shrug. She didn't have any to begin with, though. After leaving the cleanup to his fellow heroes, he then made his way downstairs, still carrying the little girl and the four wolves hot on his heels. After a minute or so, they finally stepped outside, and the child let out a startled gasp as the wind blew, messing up her already wild-looking white hair. Looking around with wide, round eyes, it took her a few seconds to properly formulate whatever she was thinking. I'm really outside. Her voice was hoarse still, breaking a little on the last words. She obviously hadn't spoken much in the last few years, and going outside apparently hadn't been a part of her daily activities either. The mere thought of her captivity made his skin crawl, and Eraserhead wasted no time in putting her down so she could explore a bit. Another gasp escaped her as her bare feet touched the grass, and she instantly crouched down, rubbing her hands over the damp soil, apparently unable to believe what she was actually feeling. Then, the wolves came along, gently nudging her forward, and, while she was still a tad too weak to walk properly, they helped her out. Using two of the wolves as crutches, she started walking around, delighted gasps escaping her at every little thing, every little feeling. As for Eraserhead, he simply stood aside, letting the girl enjoy her newfound freedom. After a few minutes, though, she returned to his side, plopping down on the ground next to him while the wolves all settled down around them. Not going any further, he remarked simply, "It's safer here." Safer with you went unsaid, but not unheard. He didn't comment on it, though, still a little unsure as to what kind of mess he just involved himself in, and she didn't say anything else for a moment. They simply stayed silent, enjoying the warmth of the afternoon sun and the light breeze still blowing, before she finally looked back at him. "Thank you," she then whispered, her voice cracking a bit, "for saving me, and also, for using my name." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she was smiling now. It wasn't big nor bright, but it was a real smile. It was a start. "I had forgotten it, so thank you for making me remember." "I won't let you forget it again," he replied, lightly ruffling her hair. "It's a promise, Rukia. So this is the school Shota-san works at." Rukia stared up at the somewhat imposing building before her, unsure of how to feel about the whole situation. While she had been the one asking to become a student there, she couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Never had she ever stepped foot into a school building before, let alone so as to pass an entrance exam, of all things. Though, I did refuse Shota-san's recommendation, so I guess that one's on me. She sweat dropped, her grip tightening a bit on the sports bag slung over her shoulder. He told me there was a practical exam and a theoretical exam, so no big deal, right? I've trained hard and I've studied a lot, so I'll be fine. Right. She shook her head so as to immediately get rid of the doubts creeping up on her. The last thing she needed was a clouded mind. She had to focus and do her best. She simply couldn't afford to fail. Not if she wanted to become a hero worthy enough of. Oi, don't stand in my way, extra. She startled a bit, turning around to find a young boy standing right behind her. She was a tad embarrassed about blocking the entrance, but the tone in which he had spoken rubbed her the wrong way. Did he call me an extra? He paused, glaring at her with fierce, challenging red eyes. Got something to say, mutt. She stiffened, instantly baring her sharp teeth. Don't call me that. Or what? He was looking down on her, that much was obvious. You gonna keep baring your fangs like a wild dog till I break them? She wanted to rise up to the challenge and show him just how much damage her fangs could deal, but she suddenly remembered where exactly the boy and she were, and why. If she caused a commotion now, they'd probably kick her out of the entrance exam before it even began. And then she could kiss her ambitions goodbye. Plus, I don't want you to cause any trouble, Rukia, warned Shota-san, putting on his boots. If I hear that you got into a fight with one of the wannabe students, why would I go pick a fight with someone? She protested, pouting a little. Have some faith in me, would you? He shot her a pointed look. I'm warning you because I know you. You're quick to throw a punch, so just make sure that it doesn't happen outside of the practical exam. So you're telling me I can punch another candidate as long as it's during the practical exam? Accidents happen. No, there was simply no way that she was going against Shota-san's warning. She wasn't suicidal. So, deciding to take the high ground, she released a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding and spun on her heels, effectively turning her back to the asshole. I don't have time to waste with people like you. On which she walked away without another look back. She distinctly heard him cuss her out, obviously pissed off by the holier-than-thou fashion in which she had just shrugged him off, but she had really just mirrored back his own attitude, which made her inwardly smile. That'll teach him not to be such a jerk. Hopefully, though, the other students wouldn't be as annoying to deal with. Exam ticket. Name, Aizawa-Rukia. Examinee No. 2246. Test location, Battle Center A. The ticket she had been given granted her entry into the large lecture hall where the debriefing about the practical exam would be held. To be cooped up in such a closed place amongst this gigantic crowd of people wasn't exactly a pleasant experience for Rukia. What with her enhanced hearing abilities, but she somehow managed to drown out most of the noise and pushed her way to one of the front rows, spotting a bunch of free seats. Once there, she sat down and pulled out a comic book she had brought along to pass the time. A few minutes later, though, a hand passed between her face and the comics, instantly drawing her attention. Looking up, she found a boy with messy black hair that brushed his shoulders, and he offered her a grin filled with sharp-looking teeth. Hi, is this seat taken? Shaking her head, she quickly removed her bag from the seat and placed it on the floor, between her legs. She had been hoping no one would come and sit next to her, but she now noticed how much more crowded the room was. The number of applicants present surprised her a little, but then again, this was UA. Hi, the School for Future Heroes. Thanks. The boy gingerly sat down next to her. I'm Kirishima Ijiro. And you? Aizawa-Rukia. There was a mildly awkward pause. Is there anything I can help you with? Sorry, it's just, I noticed that you were reading Sora, Hero of the Sky, so I thought it'd be nice to sit next to someone I could get along with, he admitted, rubbing the back of his head in a sheepish manner. He then peered at the comic book she was holding. This is the 7th volume, isn't it? It came out last week, right? Why, yeah, it is, she confirmed, relaxing a bit. Are you a fan, Kirishima-san? Oh, absolutely. I love the manga. His eyes started sparkling. Did you know that they're planning on making it into an anime? Oh, really? She gasped, surprised. I didn't know that. I thought the author didn't want to make it into the anime. Issues about the drawing style or something like that. Well, yeah, he was opposed to it at first, but then he managed to come to an agreement with an old animation studio, he confirmed excitedly. If everything goes as planned, the pilot episode will be released next winter. That's awesome. Right. It's, for all of you examinee listeners tuning in today, welcome to my show. Suddenly, all of the lights in the lecture hall were turned off, save for one spotlight that illuminated the center of the stage before them. Everybody say he. Out of nowhere, none other than Pro Hero Present Mike appeared on stage, his glasses reflecting the spotlight as he bent over backward and extended his mic to the crowd of candidates before him. Rukia couldn't help but facepalm as an awkward silence followed. Oh, Uncle Hizashi, what a refined response. Present Mike quickly straightened up, then spun on his heels in a theatrical gesture. Then, allow me to quickly present to you the rundown on the practical exam. Are you ready? Once again, everyone stayed silent, and he cleared his throat one more time. Yes, well, all right. As it says in the application requirements, you listeners will be conducting 10 minutes mock urban battles after this debriefing. You can bring whatever you want with you, and after the presentation, you'll head to the battle center specified on the entrance tickets you've received earlier. Okay. Silence. Okay. Oh boy. Now I understand why Shota-sen didn't volunteer to participate in the debriefing. He's a little intense, isn't he? Whispered Kirishima, a bead of sweat rolling down his forehead. He probably had one too many cups of coffee this morning, is all, she whispered back. Then, on the screen behind him, pictures of different buildings appeared, most probably the different battle centers. Around them also appeared shadowed pictures of different robots, which, she guessed, would be their targets. All right. There will be 3 different types of foe villains stationed in each battle center. You can earn points for each of them based on their level of difficulty, explained Present Mike, calming down a bit. Your goal, dear listeners, is to use your quirks to earn points by immobilizing the foe villains. Of course, attacking other examinees and any other unheroic actions are prohibited. May I ask a question? Present Mike paused at the sudden interruption, obviously not expecting one of the candidates to speak up so abruptly, and pretty much everyone in the room turned around to look at the bespectacled boy. He had slicked back dark hair, and he stood so stiffly Rukia was ready to bet there was broom shoved up his rear. Sure, go ahead. On the printout we were given before, there are 4 types of foe villains, he then stated in a rather imperious tone. If that is a misprint, then UA, the most prominent school in Japan, ought to be ashamed of this foolish mistake. We, examinees, are here in this place because we wish to be modeled into exemplary heroes, after all. Wow, now that's an intense guy, gulped Kirishima. Yeah, tell me about it, nodded Rukia, echoing the sentiment. Okay, examinee number 7111, called out Present Mike, raising his free hand in a pacifying manner. Thanks for the much obliged interruption. You're right, there is a 4th type of foe villain. It's worth 0 points. A sly grin graced his lips at that. That guy's an obstacle, so to speak. There's only one in every battle center, an obstacle that will go crazy in narrow spaces. It's not impossible to defeat, but there's no reason to confront it either. I recommend that you listeners try to avoid it. Yeah, I understand. Thank you very much. The bespectacled boy bowed stiffly, before finally sitting back down. Apologies for the interruption. Well, that's all for me. Then announced Present Mike, the screen behind him turning off. He then bent over forward, leaning closer to his audience. Now, before we depart, allow me to give you listeners a present, our school's motto. As the hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, a true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortunes. Go beyond, plus ultra. At once, the last 2 words appeared on the screen, and a shudder ran down Rukia's spine. All right, now, good luck suffering, everyone. Rukia couldn't help but snort at his departing words, and Present Mike sent her a subtle thumbs up, as if saying I believe in you, which she appreciated. She then noticed the leather bracelet he was wearing, which made her smile lightly, but she quickly focused back on the matter at hand. Now that the debriefing was over with, she did feel more confident about passing the practical exam, but she was still a little nervous. So, knowing she had an old friend supporting her from afar helped out. Hey, we're in the same battle center, suddenly remarked Kirishima. They compared their tickets, and she offered him a tentative smile. Well, looks like it. I guess we should get going. Oh yeah. Woo. He jumped to his feet, pumping his fist in the air. I can't wait to get started. Chuckling, Rukia also got up, grabbing her bag. The boy was full of energy and his cheerfulness was a little overwhelming, but she couldn't deny that she enjoyed his company. Now, here's hoping that I'm not in the same battle center at that jerk from earlier. I totally jinxed it, didn't I? The jerk glared at her, and she replied in kind, before turning away to focus on the battle center ahead of them. After getting changed into an outfit that was much more appropriate for a battle simulation, she had joined Kirishima outside, and the 2 of them had followed the rest of their group to the battle center upon arrival, though she made the unfortunate discovery that the blonde jerk was also a member of their group. As long as we stay away from each other, there shouldn't be an issue. And if I do end up punching him, well, as Shota-sen said, accidents happen. Hey, you all right? Then asked Kirishima, glancing between her and her brand new nemesis. Do you know him or something? Or something, she confirmed, scowling a little. We bumped into each other earlier, and he was less than pleasant. Feel free to get in his way. He's an asshole. He chuckled at that. All right, I'll keep that in mind. Do you? The 10 minutes start. Now, all of the examinees stiffened at the unexpected signal, and Rukia and Kirishima exchanged a surprised look, before immediately taking off toward the entrance of the battle center. It didn't take long for them to enter in, as they had agreed on earlier. They both ran in the same direction. After all, in such a simulation, there was no telling when something could wrong, and it was best to partner up with someone who could have your back. Up ahead, exclaimed Kirishima. I'm taking those on the right. With a burst of speed, Rukia was the first to reach the foe villains up ahead. Using a few empty boxes on the side of the street, she propelled herself at the nearest one and landed on its head. Without wasting a second, she activated her partial transformation. White fur grew on her hands and her forearms, and her nails grew longer and sharper until they turned into razor-sharp claws, which she used to destroy her target with a single move. Her claws tore through the steel with frightening ease, and, as it collapsed, she pounced onto the one just behind it. With a swift kick, she managed to completely obliterate the main body, and she then landed back on the ground, adrenaline already rushing through her veins. An explosion echoed to her left, and, turning around, she found Kirishima pulling his hardened arms out of the third foe villain, which soon collapsed into a heap of useless metal scraps. Not bad, she grinned, flexing her claws a bit. Same to you, he replied, hitting his hardened fists together. You're really fast. Enhanced speed. Think you can keep up? His eyes glinted at the challenge. Of course. The 10 minutes given to complete the practical exam were gone in a blur of utter destruction, explosions, and an intense adrenaline rush. Rukia had never participated in a combat simulation before, but it was absolutely exhilarating. And she actually had a fun time. Plus, fighting side by side with someone who could keep up wasn't half bad. Kirishima wasn't as fast as her, but he was definitely strong, and he took their targets head-on, without having to fear any kind of physical backlash thanks to his hardened body. So, it was panting and sweating like hell, but grinning like excited kids on a Christmas morning, that the two finally exited Battle Center A. How many did you get? He asked, grabbing one of the water bottles offered on their way out. Ugh, no idea. I forgot to count, she admitted, deactivating her partial transformation. The white fur quickly receded, her limbs returning to normal as her claws shrunk until they became nails again. Phew, I haven't had a workout like that in quite a while. Your quirk's pretty cool, though, remarked the boy, glancing curiously at her now human arms. Can you make a full transformation like Rukia, the dragon hero? Man, my body can't keep up with that kind of shapeshifting. I know, I've tried, she sighed, gratefully accepting the water bottle she was handed by a volunteer. The stress was too much and I fell unconscious, and I was so sore I could barely move for the next 2 days. Ouch, he cringed sympathetically. He then shook his head. Well, one way or another, you were amazing in there. I'm sure you'll pass amongst the top students. Well, I don't know about the top, she replied, mildly embarrassed. She hadn't expected such sincere praise from a boy she barely knew, after all. Anyway, you were pretty great too. I'm sure we both passed the practical exam. You think so? He rubbed the back of his head, averting his eyes. I mean, my quirk isn't flashy or anything, but it's pretty useful, right? Well, one way or another, though, we still have the theoretical exam left. I hope, Aizawa-sensei. Her shoulders slumped as a dark cloud started hovering above her head. The theoretical exam. I forgot about that. It's going to be all right, Aizawa-sensei. I'm sure you'll be fine. Kirishima instantly tried to cheer her up. You'll do great, and we'll both pass the test and become students here, all right. He suddenly extended his fist to her, grinning from ear to ear. Let's work hard and become classmates, all right. Let's become heroes, Aizawa-san. A little taken aback by his sudden statement, she gazed at him for a moment. He was smiling so brightly, so genuinely. She couldn't help but feel drawn to his warmth and sincerity, and, without thinking, she slowly moved, bringing up her fist to meet his. All right. He froze as, for the first time since they met, she offered him a smile wide enough to rival his own. It's a promise, then. Unfortunately enough, they got separated for the written exam. Apparently, the school committee wanted to ensure that no one would attempt to cheat, hence why they had completely switched up the previous groups and why each examinee already had a seat with their name on it when they entered their given classroom. Once settled, the candidates had the following hour and a half to complete the written exam, which tested their general and advanced knowledge in the 4 compulsory subjects taught in every single course offered by the school: Japanese, math, science, and foreign language, English. I can do it. I've studied a lot, and Shota-san, Uncle Hazashi, and Aunt Nimari helped me get prepared for this. Grabbing her pencil, she glared at the sheets of paper piled up on her desk. I can do this. I have to. I won't let their efforts go to waste. And, begin. I can make it. I didn't make it. Rukia was exhausted, both physically and mentally. She had gone a little over the top during the practical exam, and the theoretical exam had turned her brains to mush. Now, while she was fairly confident that she had at least managed to get a passing grade for Japanese, and while she knew for a fact that she had a perfect score in English, the other 2 subjects had always been a little more difficult for her to understand. She had spent the last 6 years being homeschooled in order to catch up on her studies, and while she worked hard and was supported by many talented and passionate teachers, it wasn't easy to get on the same scholarly level as other teenagers her age. I couldn't complete all of the math questions, and I'm pretty sure I invented a formula or two for science. Ugh, I completely messed up, didn't I? She paused before the door of the apartment. The thought saddened her. She knew that Shota-san wouldn't hold it against her if she failed to enter UA. But she wanted to. Because she wanted to become a hero. Because she wanted to become. Yo, how'd it go today? Shota-san, you're home early. She hadn't expected the man to come home before later in the evening. Well aware that he would be filling up paperwork and working on the examinee's evaluations in both the practical and the theoretical exam. And yet, there he was, standing before her with his usual aloof expression and dressed in his civilian clothes. He then lifted his arm, showing off the plastic bag he was holding. I bought sushi, he simply said. So, you're going to open the door, or are we standing here till night falls? All right. Still a little surprised. The young girl, however, quickly unlocked the door and made her way inside, kicking off her shoes as she did so. Neither she nor Shota-san actually cared about keeping the place clean, since cleaning was a hassle, so they lived with the bare minimum and with an organized mess, as they liked to call it, just to annoy Aunt Nimuri. You didn't answer me earlier, he then pointed out, going to their small table to set the sushi down. How'd it go today? Well, I almost got into a fight at the beginning, she admitted, taking out some clean plates from the dishwasher. The guy was an asshole. I tell you, I really hope he ends up in your class if he somehow passes the entrance exam. Why do you want him to be in my class if he's an asshole, as you put it? You know I hate dealing with difficult brats, he grunted, sitting down. Because you'd scare the shit out of him, and then he'd stop being an asshole, probably, she replied, joining him at the small table. Anyway, so I almost got into a fight with him, but then I remembered what you told me, and so I dropped it and went inside. He smirked a bit at that, breaking his chopsticks. So you do listen to me. Sometimes. I always listen to you, Shota-san, but sometimes I simply elect to ignore whatever you say, she replied, a tad cheekily. He rolled his eyes, and she chuckled, before pursuing. Right, so I went inside and found my way to the lecture hall. I met another boy. And that one was really nice. We ended up sticking together through the practical exam. He was super strong, and I had a lot of fun, too. Those robots didn't know what hit them. Yeah, we noticed, he drawled, shoving a piece of sushi in his mouth. A few of the examiners mentioned how you were having a tad too much fun. But it's not like it was against the rules or anything. I couldn't help it, she admitted, sheepish. But then, her amusement died down, and she lowered her head, clasping her hands together. Shota-san, I'm sorry, but I think I really screwed up the theoretical exam. I swear I tried my best, but I don't think that was enough. I'm sorry. What are you apologizing for, silly girl? He huffed, lightly poking her forehead with his chopsticks. He then grabbed another piece of sushi, shaking it before her eyes. I wouldn't have bought this just for the hell of it, you know. She straightened up, her eyes wide. Wait, I'm not sure I understand. You're saying that this is... Yup, this is celebratory sushi. Smirking again, he ate the one he had been holding. You passed. Congratulations, Rukia. Wait a moment. I thought we weren't supposed to receive the results for at least a week. How did you? It's just a formality. It's to allow the committee in charge to properly fill out the paperwork and plan everything down to the last detail, he shrugged. It generally takes 2 days at most to compile the results of all of the examinees. But your candidature was one of the firsts that were brought up since there was a matter of potential bias. Right, because you're my legal guardian. And I have a personal connection to 2 of the school's teachers. After a moment, she smiled, placing a hand over her heart. So, I passed. I see. I'm glad. I'm really glad. Though, you did luck out a fair bit on the theoretical exam. He then remarked, pointing his chopsticks at her with a serious expression. Had it not been for your perfect score in English, you wouldn't have passed, so don't let this get to your head, all right? You'll have to work even harder from here on out if you really want to earn a diploma from UA. All right, I'll definitely do my best, Shota-san. Good. Now, are you eating or do I get to keep all the sushi to myself? Why, no, it's my celebratory sushi. Leave me some. Maybe, but I'm the one who bought it. Shota-san. Yo. Congratulations on passing the exams, Rukia-chan. Uncle Hizashi. Hey, now, don't forget about me. Aunt Nimuri. Shota-san heaved out a sigh as the 2 noisiest people he's ever known waltzed into his apartment like they owned the place. He had been hoping he wouldn't have to deal with them before at least another day. But it would appear that news traveled fast, and, barely an hour after he and Rukia finished up with dinner, those 2 showed up. You were amazing out there, Rukia-chan, beamed Nimuri, kissing the girl on the forehead. A sly grin then graced her lips. And I noticed that you were sticking real close to that boy. Kirishima Ijiro-kun, right? Why, yeah, we met in the lecture hall, confirmed Rukia, quickly taking their coats. She then noticed the large, white box Hizashi was carrying. It smelled sweet. What's that? Celebratory cake. He shoved the box in her hands, grinning from ear to ear. Chocolate and strawberry, your favorite. And some sake too, for the grown-ups, grinned Nimiri, lifting up 2 paper bags containing bottles of alcohol. That seemed to pacify Shota-san, who heaved out a sigh. Ugh, just don't stay too late. Yeah, it's party time. Are you even listening to me? Moo, lighten up, Eraser. We're all here to have a good time. Beamed Nimiri. Get out. Watching from the sidelines, Rukia couldn't help but smile at the sight of the 3 pro heroes bickering. Despite what Shota-san said, she knew that he considered them his friends, and seeing them like this always warmed her heart. Herself had been rather wary and distrusting when she first met them. They were so loud, and they kept on touching her. But, over time, she had grown to really appreciate them, both as people and as heroes. Hey, Rukia-chan, come over here so we can split that cake already, grinned Nimiri, waving her over. You can also have some sake. You are not giving her alcohol, warned flatly Shota-san, already gulping down his second shooter. At that, another round of lighthearted bickering started. Laughing a little, the young girl wasted no time in joining the 3. They were a little cramped, the 4 of them gathered around such a small table. But as laughter filled the air and cake was shared, she couldn't help but feel like this was simply perfect, noisiness and non-existent personal space included. 2 weeks later, Rukia was at the market buying some groceries when it happened. The villain attack, that is. Run, it's coming this way. Run away. She and many other clients quickly gathered before the large windows of the grocery store to try and get a glimpse at what could possibly be causing such a ruckus, but, frankly, it should have been obvious from the start. Rukia's blood ran cold as she saw a gigantic, bear-like monster making its way down the street and destroying everything in its way. Around her, people started frantically running around, trying to escape by the back door of the store while other people fled from the street and rushed inside in hopes to find shelter. What do I do? What can I do? Heroes would show up soon enough. They were in the middle of a civilian district. After all, those were always more heavily monitored. And yet, as the bear-like monster started getting even closer, she quickly noticed something was wrong. There wasn't even a single police officer in sight. For one reason or the other, the local authorities were nowhere to be found, and not a single hero nor sidekick was showing up to save the day. Damn it, I need to call Shota-san. However, as soon as she pulled out her phone, she realized it wasn't working. The signal was scrambled, which explained why help had yet to arrive, since no one could call the police nor the heroes. That meant the civilians were left to their own devices. Ooh, boy, this isn't going to end well. Someone is definitely going to get hurt. Isn't there anyone who can help? Isn't there anyone who can do something? Who? Suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, a gigantic wall of ice rose in the middle of the street and completely trapped the bear-like monster. There was a moment of stillness as all of the onlookers could only gape, and Rukia snapped her eyes to the source of it. A few meters away from the villain stood a young boy, probably around her age, with his hair split up in the middle, one half red and the other half white. He also had a pretty gnarly burn scar over his left eye, and a mild layer of frost was now covering the right side of his body. He stopped that villain without even breaking a sweat. Talk about a crazy strong quirk. But, just as the rest of the civilians were about to rejoice, a loud crack echoed, effectively silencing everyone. Rukia's eyes widened when she noticed that the large block of ice in which the villain was trapped was now breaking apart, and the next thing she knew, it practically exploded, ice shards flying all around and damaging many of the buildings. Windows flew in pieces and people screamed, and Rukia had to practically throw herself under a nearby stall in order to avoid being skewered. This is bad. This is really, really bad. Help me. Rukia stiffened, her ears flickering back and forth as, throughout the chaos, she somehow managed to hear a plea for help. It was feeble, but not too far away, and despite all of her instincts screaming at her to stay down and stay safe, she slowly rose back to her feet. Help me. It was still pretty faint, but louder. Ignoring the roaring of the villain and the shouts of the civilians, she focused on that little, desperate voice, doing her best to locate it as quickly as possible. There, it was a woman, probably in her mid-30s or so. She was stuck underneath a larger block of ice, almost completely buried underneath it, and only her head and half of her upper body weren't stuck. She seemed to be having difficulties breathing, though, and the ongoing fight between Ice Boy and the villain was too close. The poor woman would soon be caught in the crossfire, and that's assuming she didn't die from asphyxia first. Help me. Crap. Going against every single instinct she had learned to rely on, Rukia ran out of the store without thinking twice. Almost as soon as she stepped into the middle of the street, though, a freaking car was sent flying her way. Her eyes went wide as she realized she wouldn't be able to avoid it in time. But something suddenly rammed into her from the side, effectively knocking her out of the car's course. She crashed on the ground and made a few barrels, before stopping with something heavy weighing down on her chest. What? Her eyes widened when seeing a familiar mass of black hair. Kai Kirishima-san. Are you okay, Aizawa-san? He gasped, quickly getting off of her. He helped her back to her feet, worried. That was dangerous. Why did you run out like that? There's a woman, over there. She pointed at the large block of ice, which was now barely a few meters away. Come on, I'll need help removing that thing. His eyes widened, then narrowed with determination. All right, let's do this fast. Nodding, Rukia then quickly closed whatever was left of the distance between them and the trapped civilian. Tears sprouted from the woman's eyes when she saw them. Please, help. We're gonna get you out of there, all right, assured Rukia, gulping a bit. Just stay calm and do your best to breathe. Kirishima-san. Right. Using his quirk, he hardened his arms and planted them into the ice block in order to get a grip, while Rukia grabbed the woman underneath her arms. Then, exchanging a nod, Kirishima then started lifting the block of ice. Unfortunately, it was a lot heavier than what they first expected, and despite their best efforts, they couldn't lift it high enough to free the poor woman. God damn it. Just as Kirishima was about to drop it, though, another boy suddenly showed up. With a loud yell, he helped lift the ice block and, at last, Rukia managed to drag out the woman. The two boys instantly dropped the icy weight, panting a little, but the trembling ground soon snapped them back to reality. We need to get her back inside, exclaimed Rukia, helping the woman sit up. She didn't seem too hurt, thankfully enough, but she couldn't stand on her own. Kirishima-san, can you take her on your back? Here, I'll do it, volunteered the other boy, quickly joining them. Long, messy gray hair and thick, jagged, tan-colored eyelashes that almost looked like glasses were what really stood out about his appearance. However, he was obviously very strong, seeing as he didn't even flinch when Kirishima and Rukia put the civilian woman on his back. We'll cover you, so make your way back inside that shop, over there, urged Rukia, pointing to the clothing store just a few meters away. You got it, offering them a thumbs up and a confident grin that showed off his pointy teeth. He then instantly spun on his heels and ran toward the shop, carrying the woman as he did so. Rukia and Kirishima immediately reported their attention to the villain, against whom Icy Boy was obviously struggling. No matter how many walls of ice he put up, the bear-like creature broke them down without breaking a sweat, and a much thicker layer of frost was now covering over half of the boy's body, a clear sign that he was reaching his limit. Damn, he's not going to last much longer, frowned Kirishima. Why are the heroes not here yet? Something's killing the signal, answered Rukia, biting her lower lip. Attacking it head-on would be reckless, and there's something wrong about that villain. We can only try and support that guy in slowing it down till the pros show up. What do you mean, there's something wrong? His eyes, her own narrowed, her yellow irises glowing eerily. They're bloodshot, unfocused. If I had to take a wild guess, that guy's under the influence of a quirk-enhancing drug. What? But that's ROAAAR. All of a sudden, the villain broke through yet another wall of ice and, this time around, the boy wasn't fast enough to avoid the backlash. He was practically blown away by the powerful impact and landed on the ground a few meters away. Grunting, he managed to push himself up, and blood dripped down from the wide gash on his forehead. The villain raised his razor-sharp claws, ready to tear him apart. Stop. Time came to a halt, and Kirishima snapped his eyes to the wolf girl beside him, startled. Her fangs were bared as she shook in place, and she was glaring intently at the villain. The latter was completely frozen in place by the intense pressure that just kept on building up between the two, and Kirishima unconsciously backed away, his guts churning painfully. Fear, he noted mildly. I'm scared. Why am I scared? The pressure just kept on growing, almost making his knees buckle, but the girl didn't seem to see anything but the villain. Her face was turning red, and veins were bulging on her forehead and around her eyes as her fangs grew even longer, and she unconsciously activated her partial transformation. I told you to stop. Unable to resist the pressure any longer, the villain let out a pain roar that soon turned into a whimper as he fell to his knee. The fur and the claws receded, his form shrinking until he was back to a normal, slightly hairier than usual human. His eyes rolled in their sockets and foam dripped around his mouth before he completely collapsed, a cloud of dust rising as he harshly hit the concrete. I did it. Aizawa-sensei, panting harshly. Her legs gave out underneath her weight as blood trickled down her nose, her partial transformation deactivating on its own. Kirishima was quick to catch her and he helped her stand up, obviously worried. Are you all right? What was that? Something I'm not supposed to do. Oh God, Shota-san is going to skin me alive. Please, don't tell anyone. He frowned, but nodded. All right, I promise I won't tell. Now come on, sit down for a bit. You look like you're about to pass out. Well, she couldn't really refute that. However, now obviously wasn't the time to fall unconscious, so, allowing herself to take a break and sit down, she decided to let someone else handle the cleanup. Further away, Icy Boy wasted no time in encasing the body of the previously rampaging villain in ice, before walking up to them with furrowed brows. What did you do? He asked, blood still dripping down his face. Something that could have gone really wrong, she admitted, her eyes suddenly widening, She lurched forward and most ungraciously emptied the contents of her stomach. Kirishima was kind enough to hold her hair back in, apparently just as exhausted as she was. The dual-haired boy dropped on the ground beside her without asking any more questions. Hey, you guys. None other than the gray-haired boy who had helped him out earlier arrived, and he handed Rukia a bottle of water he had apparently grabbed from the store. She gratefully accepted it and wasted no time in washing her mouth and getting rid of the terrible taste, while Kirishima handled the introductions. I'm Kirishima Ijiro. Thanks a lot for helping us out. Of course, seeing you guys risk yourself like that to help someone was really manly, superhero-like. He gingerly extended his hand to the black-haired boy, grinning from ear to ear and showing off similarly pointed teeth. I'm Tetsu. Also, I'm a future student at UA's hero course. Really? So am I, gasped excitedly Kirishima. So you passed the entrance exam then, Kirishima-san? Feeling a little better, the white-haired girl offered him a smile. That's great to hear. It looks like the three of us will be classmates then. I'm Rukia, and thank you for coming to help us. You passed too. I knew you could do it, Aizawa-san, grinned Kirishima, offering her a thumbs up. I'm also going to be joining UA's hero course next year. All three snapped their eyes to the dual-haired boy, who heaved out a small sigh. Todoroki Shouto. Well, talk about an incredible coincidence, sweat dropped Kirishima. He then shook his head and extended his hand to him. Well, it's great to meet you, Todoroki. You were really awesome, You didn't hesitate 1 second to go after that villain. It was pretty reckless, though, then pointed out Rukia, frowning lightly. Why not wait for an actual hero to show up? You could have been killed. There's a hospital at the end of that street, he answered after a small pause. Tetsu then handed him another bottle of water, which he accepted with a nod. If we didn't stop him here, he could have hurt a lot of people. So when you realized you couldn't contact anyone for help, you decided to at least try and slow him down, understood Tetsu, looking inspired. That's awesome, Todoroki. Even if it was pretty dangerous, you acted like a real hero. And you, Aizawa-san, was it? Yeah. Tetsu was suddenly in her face, his eyes sparkling. You were awesome too. You rushed out ahead of danger to help that woman. And then Kirishima saved you from that flying car, and then, it was amazing. Got my blood pumping and all. Well, someone's high on adrenaline, she snorted nervously, though somewhat amused. Glancing at the three boys around her, she then smiled. Though, can't deny we all make a pretty good team. Now there's just hoping that we won't get into too much trouble for it. At that, all three boys visibly cringed, even Todoroki. They had all pretty much reacted in the heat of the moment, without really thinking about the consequences. While things had turned out all right in the end, it could have taken an entirely different turn if they had been any less lucky. Plus, while they were all aspiring heroes, they hadn't even started school, let alone earned their provisional license yet. Before they could sink any deeper in worry, though, a clapping sound echoed. Surprised, they looked up and found numerous civilians slowly coming out of hiding and surrounding them. Soon enough, loud applause and cheers were filling the destroyed street, and the relief and joy of the people around were enough to reassure them. In the end, no matter the consequences, they knew they had made the right choice. Well, wasn't this an interesting experiment? Have you gathered the required data? Oh yes, no need to worry. I certainly didn't expect so many wannabe heroes to show up. But I suppose they wouldn't really fit the bill if they hadn't interfered. And Akuma, promptly taken care of, as expected. Man, those future heroes are pretty promising, aren't they? And I heard they all got into UA, too. Lucky. There is no need to linger around any longer, then. Yes, sir. The communication was cut off, and the hooded figure sitting on the edge of the building's roof smirked when seeing the pro-heroes show up in a hurry. Right there and then, it felt like his illusions were shattered once again, but this time around, it wasn't painful. In fact, it was eerily satisfying. Heroes, all the same. They'll snatch the glory even though they weren't even there in the first place, and those poor little students won't even notice the unfairness of it all. Suddenly, a warp portal opened behind him, and a man in a suit, with a metallic collar and a head made of shadows appeared. Are you ready to leave? Yes, I wrote down everything I needed, confirmed the hooded figure, gingerly getting up as he tucked away his notebook. Let's go, Kurogiri. Seeing as they mostly suffered from exhaustion and light wounds such as scratches and the like, the 4 future UA students were immediately taken to the police station in order to deliver an official report about the situation. The villain was also quickly taken into custody, still frozen and unconscious, and they were later on informed that the woman they had rescued earlier would be fine and that she only suffered from minor injuries and shock. Once their report was delivered, though, they were all forced to sit in the waiting lounge because, of course, the police had contacted their respective legal guardian. Ugh, I'm gonna be in so much trouble, groaned Kirishima, leaning back in his seat. Ma, it's not like you actually got involved in the fight, then pointed out Tetsu, patting his shoulder. If anything, Todoroki's the one in the most trouble. The dual-haired boy glanced at him but didn't say anything, and Rukia heaved out a sigh, rubbing her temples. Now that all of the excitement had died down, a nasty headache had settled in, but she mostly blamed it on the stress. I guess we should just be thankful that there won't be any legal consequences, she then pointed out. Acting out without a hero license like we did today could have very well led us to penal sanctions. Though I guess Tetsutetsu-san and Kirishima-san would have been fine. Man, I just hope the word doesn't get to UA. Then pointed out Kirishima. Do you think they could end up kicking us out because of this? We didn't do anything too illegal. And we're not even students yet, reasoned Rukia. I don't think they could kick us out. Oh, they could, but they won't. All 4 teenagers startled at the new voice, instantly looking over at the door, where a man with a disheveled appearance and a scowl etched on his face was now standing. Shota-san, gasped Rukia, jumping to her feet. She looked positively terrified. I can explain, I swear. We just... Enough. We're going home. All right. He spun around and left without another look back, knowing that she would follow him. Gulping a bit, Rukia grabbed her bag, which she had recuperated before coming to the station, and, with a quick wave of the hand to the 3 boys, she then went after the man. Silence fell in the room as the door closed behind her. Do you think she'll be all right? That guy looked scary, then remarked Tetsu, a bead of sweat rolling down his forehead. Well, it looked like she knew him. Ah, crap. I forgot to ask for her number again, groaned Kirishima, slapping his forehead. I wanted to keep in touch, but it looks like that won't happen. Well, you'll see each other at school, won't you? Tetsu pumped his fist in the air, grinning. Hopefully, we'll all be classmates then, right, Todoroki? We'll see. What's with the lack of enthusiasm? To say the ride home was stressful would be an understatement. Shota-san didn't say anything, simply keeping his eyes on the road ahead, and Rukia kept her mouth shut, not really knowing what to say. Then, once they got home, Shota-san got started on making dinner. Problem was, Shota-san never cooked. He only made food when he was upset. Shota-san, sit down, biting her lower lip. The girl dropped off her bag and went to sit at their small table, not saying anything else. The silence was starting to become really suffocating. But there was simply nothing to say, at least, not until he spoke first. When he finally left the kitchen carrying 2 bowls of ramen and 2 pairs of chopsticks, he let out a heavy sigh upon seeing her. Her ears were flattened against her skull, her head lowered and her tail nervously whipping against the floor. Still not saying anything, he placed the 2 bowls on the table and took his seat. Why did you do it? I don't know. I panicked, she admitted, lowering her head even more. I know you said not to use it, but Todoroki-san was in danger and I didn't think it. That's not an excuse, Rukia, he frowned. There was an edge in his tone. Panicking isn't a reason to put yourself ahead of danger like that. You know what could have happened. Imposing your alpha will is a double-edged sword. What if you hadn't won? What if your will hadn't been strong enough? Then what? I'm sorry, she whispered, tears now brimming her eyes. I know that. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. I'll be more careful, I promise. I'm sorry. Shaking his head, his shoulders finally relaxed a bit, and the tension that had been lingering in the air vanished. He handed her a pair of chopsticks, and she accepted them, hesitantly looking up. After a few seconds, he reached out and roughly ruffled her hair. You were pretty reckless, and I can't condone you using your quirk like this, he warned, though his tone was softer now. But, for what it's worth, good job out there. You focused on the rescue rather than the enemy. And you acted responsibly, at first, anyway. So you're not mad anymore? She dared to ask, hopeful. His menacing smile, however, crushed those hopes. Whoever said that? I'm downright pissed. How more reckless can you get? So, I'm doubling your training routine. I better not hear you whining, got it? Gaping for a few seconds, she then bit back the grin that threatened to split her lips, though her wagging tail was a dead giveaway of how she really felt about her punishment. Yes, sir. Good. Can't have a weakling as my future sidekick. Can I? This time around, she couldn't stop herself from grinning. Right. Rukia-chan, why do you want to be a hero? The little girl, at the time 10 years old, paused. Then, she offered a toothy grin at the woman she had started to call Aunt Nimari barely a month earlier. Cause I wanna be Shota-san's sidekick. Wah, that creepy guys. The woman pouted. Why not become my sidekick, Rukia-chan? Because he's the best, of course. Her grin then turned to a softer, somewhat sadder smile. And because I don't want to lose him, too. Before Nimari could reply, though, she instantly perked up. Plus, Pac gotta stick together, you know. So that means I'm never, ever leaving him. I'll become a hero and stay with him forever and ever. It's a promise. Rukia's grip tightened on the strap of her bag, her school bag. Dressing up into a uniform was a very strange experience, but she couldn't say she disliked it, and there was no denying that she was excited to get started. On the other hand, though, she was even more nervous now than she had been on the day of the entrance exam. Pulling some strings had allowed her to join Shota-san's class, but she didn't know what to expect from her future classmate. Will Kirishima-san be there? Will Tetsu-san and Todoroki-san be in my class? Ugh, will the jerk be there too? Damn it, Shota-sen refused to tell me anything and told me to come here on my own so I could get familiar with everyone, but this is nerve-wracking. Breathing in deeply, the girl then steeled her resolve, and, without wasting any more time, she made her way through the gates. Inside, numerous students were already gathered, greeting each other cheerfully or already chatting about what kind of classes they'd be sharing this year. There are even more people than there were at the entrance exam. She couldn't help but gawk, taken aback by the literal sea of students. I know there's only a small portion of those students who are actually in the hero course, but it's still very impressive. Are all schools like that? Too busy looking around, she didn't notice that someone was standing before her until she practically rammed into them. So sorry, she gasped, instantly stepping away. I wasn't looking. It's all right. The girl she had just bumped into spun around to face her, a cheerful grin on her face. Ooh, look at that. Are those real ears? And is that a real tail? What kind of animal traits do you have? And is your hair naturally white? It's really wild looking, you know. Say, are you a first year? I've never seen you around before. Aye. She gulped, a little intimidated by the onslaught of questions. Yes, I'm a first year. And yeah, my appearance is because of my quirk, wolf. That's so cool. So you're a wolf. Can you fully shapeshift or is it only the ears and the tails? Oh, and your teeth are so pointy, too. Say, are you in the hero course? Who's your favorite hero? I don't. Now, don't go scaring off the first years on the first day. Nejire teased a blonde boy, suddenly appearing beside her. He offered a smile at the girl before them. Sorry about her. She can get a little intense, but she doesn't mean any harm. Oh, no, I don't mind, assured Rukia, a little embarrassed. I didn't mean to bump into her or to interrupt you guys. Sorry about that. Aw, you're so cute. Without any warning, the periwinkle-haired girl pulled her into a tight hug, laughing. Mirio, can we keep her? Please. She's not a stray you can just pick up on the side of the road, sweat dropped the blonde. Now let her go, would you? She looks like she's about to pass out. Sorry. Releasing her, the cheerful girl then beamed. I'm Hado Nejire, and this is Tagata Mirio. We're both third years in the hero course. It's fine. Still a little overwhelmed, Rukia stumbled back, before offering a slight bow. I'm Aizawa Rukia, a first year in the hero course. It's very nice to meet you, Hado-senpai, Tagata-senpai. Oh, she's adorable. Nejire's arms were, once again, latched around her as she pressed the poor girl against her chest. Rutan. Let's be friends, all right. Call me Nejire. Aizawa. Tagata tilted his head. Would you happen to be Aizawa-sensei's daughter? Well, he's my legal guardian, she confirmed, still blushing because of the sudden attention she was receiving from the older girl. Nejire-senpai. She was now poking at the girl's ears, only half paying attention to whatever was being said around her. What is it? Do you mind letting me go? I don't want to be late to class on my first day. Awa pouted her senior, though she did release her. Then, her cheerful, almost childlike smile quickly returned as she patted the girl's head. Well, don't be a stranger, all right. Come and say hi from time to time. Rutan. Right, I will. Come on, Nejire, we have to go find Tamaki, then remarked Tagata, offering a quick, subtle wink to his junior. Run while you still can, he mouthed, grinning. If you need anything, don't hesitate to come and find us, all right? All right, sure. So, your class. Just ask for the big three. Later, Aizawa-chan. With a wave of the hand, the older boy then started walking away, practically dragging Nejire by the collar while she cheerfully waved goodbye to her new friend. Rukia stood there for a moment, awkwardly waving back until they disappeared amongst the crowd of students. That was intense, she sweat dropped. Here's hoping not all of our seniors are like that. Ooh, Aizawa-san. The familiar voice instantly caught her attention and she turned around, finding herself face to face with someone she didn't know. Her brows furrowed in confusion as she stared up at the red-haired boy who had called out to her. Said red hair spiked up in the most unnatural way, but then she saw the familiar sharp-toothed smile hanging to his lips, and it clicked in her mind. Kirishima-san. I hadn't recognized you, she admitted, surprised. Well, I wanted to try something new, he replied, rubbing the back of his head in an embarrassed fashion. Does it stand out too much? It suits you, she simply replied, a relaxed smile now gracing her lips. It's nice to find a familiar face. Are you in class 1A, by any chance? Oh, yeah. He perked up, obviously pleased by her compliment. I take it you're in 1A too. That's great. Now all that we're missing is Tetsu and Todoroki. Oh, right, I haven't seen either of those yet. She then noticed the pamphlet he was holding, and her eyes widened. Wait, you have a map. Where'd you find it? It was sent along with all of the paperwork. Did you not get one? Shota-san. You got rid of it on purpose, didn't you? I'll definitely get you back for this. Must have gotten lost in the mail, she huffed, now a little annoyed, but she quickly shook it off. Anyway, do you mind leading the way to the classroom, then? Sure thing. The door is huge. Think it's for accessibility. Rukia simply shrugged, not really having an answer, and Kirishima finally slid the door open. Inside, already a few students were present, including the jerk from the first day, the stiff bespectacled boy from the lecture hall, and none other than Todoroki. Their eyes met, and Rukia offered him a small smile and a hesitant wave of the hand. He acknowledged her with a nod, but didn't say anything and reported his attention to the window. Probably not much of a talker. We should leave him be. Oh, Todoroki, fancy seeing you here, exclaimed cheerfully Kirishima. Well, never mind. She was well forced to follow the red-haired boy to the back of the class where Todoroki was seated, feeling the gazes of the few other students present weighing on them. She honestly felt a little intimidated. What with being in an unfamiliar place surrounded by unfamiliar people, so she decided to simply stick with the people she knew. Upon joining the dual-haired boy, she offered him an apologetic smile, but he simply shook his head in a not-your-fault manner and, not noticing anything, Kirishima grinned at him. How have you been? Did you get into any trouble? After all, my old man was lenient. And her injury? Rukia couldn't help but ask, distinctly remembering the blood dripping down his face the last time they saw each other. Minor and quickly healed. He then glanced at her, his brows furrowing slightly. Speaking of which, I was meaning to ask, but how did you defeat the villain? Your quirk. I can't talk about it, she warned, lowering her voice so the others nearby couldn't hear them. And here I was hoping he had forgotten about it. It's not. I wasn't supposed to do that. I'm sorry, I really can't talk about it. I'm sorry. Well, there's no need to apologize like that. Sweat dropped Kirishima, patting her shoulder. We get it, right, Todoroki? If you say so. Todoroki didn't seem convinced, but let it drop, and Rukia released a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. She hadn't expected him to bring up the subject, so she had panicked a little, but it looked like he wouldn't pry anymore. Before any of them could say anything else, though, two girls approached them. One was actually invisible, and the other was pink. There was simply no other way to describe her. Would you guys happen to be the students who got involved in that bear villain attack a few weeks ago? Asked excitedly the pink one. Wasn't that info supposed to be classified? Asked quietly Rukia, unsure. So it is you. The invisible girl suddenly showed them her phone, on which was displayed a picture of them, surrounded by police officers and civilians alike. A friend of mine sent me that picture, telling me I'd surely run into at least one of you guys once school started, and she was right. You're not allowed to share this picture, warned Todoroki, his voice cold and his tone curt as he gave her a hard stare. The police put in a lot of effort to ensure our identities wouldn't be revealed to the general public. It's a matter of privacy and the overall protection of our civilian identities since we're future heroes. The invisible girl obviously deflated at that, lowering her phone. All right, of course. I wasn't going to do anything like that. We were just curious. Don't worry about it, grinned the pink girl, unperturbed. She then extended her hand to Rukia. I'm Ashido Mina. It's really nice to meet you. I am Aizawa Rukia, she replied, hesitantly shaking her hand. Nice to meet you too. And I'm Hagakure Toru, added the invisible girl, perking up. You're Kirishima Ijiro-kun, right? Then remarked Ashido, turning to the red-haired boy with a smile. We went to the same school, remember? Why yeah, I do. He was apparently surprised that she remembered him. He then jabbed his thumb at the dual-haired boy next to him. And the quiet but scary guy is Todoroki Shoto. He's not too bad when you get to know him, though. We've only met once, remarked flatly Todoroki. Wah, don't be so cold, man. There was a moment of silence. Then Rukia snorted, and she instantly slapped her hand over her mouth when the others looked at her, red spreading on her cheeks like wildfire. Kirishima grinned at that, obviously pleased that at least one person appreciated his pun. And Todoroki pinched the bridge of his nose, lightly shaking his head. Before any of them could add anything, though, loud exclamations from the front of the class caught their attention, and, at once, they turned around to see what the matter was. Rukia wasn't all that surprised when she saw the jerk and the bespectacled boy from the first day in the middle of an argument. Don't put your feet on the desk. Don't you think that's rude to the UA? Upperclassmen and the people who made the desk, warned the bespectacled one. Nope. What junior high did you go to, you side character? Retorted the blonde jerk, an arrogant smirk stretching his lips. I attended Sumi Private Academy. My name is Ida Tenya. Sumi, so you're a damn elite, taunted the blonde, leaning further back into his seat. Even sitting like he was, he somehow managed to look down on the boy standing before him. Looks like I'll have fun crushing you. Crew crushing? How terrible. Do you truly aim to become a hero? Sure thing. I'll become the #1 hero. And not a single one of you extra will get in my way. Oi. What's with the unheroic attitude? Sweat dropped another blonde boy, who had just entered. He then grinned when noticing the others staring at him. Yo, I'm Kaminari Denki, and I'm Shiro Hanta, added another boy just beside him. More people are coming in. Come on, let's go grab our seats, suggested Kirishima, nudging Rukia forward. Our seats? Rukia paused, tilting her head in mild confusion. Do we just pick whichever one we want, or is it already decided? Before Kirishima could reply, the one who had introduced himself as Ida Tenya practically marched over to them in a mildly robotic manner, as stiff as the first time she saw him. There is a seating plan on the front desk. As expected, UA leaves no room for error and is thoroughly organized down to the last detail. But doesn't every school uses seating plans? Wondered a girl, suddenly entering the classroom. She was quite pretty, with short purple hair and earphone jacks hanging from her earlobes. Another boy entered just after her, easily noticed because of his height, but also because of his rather muscular stature, and mostly his 6 arms. Each limb was attached to each other with a web of skin, and he was also wearing a mask that covered the lower half of his face. I believe it would depend on the teacher, he simply remarked in a strangely soothing voice. Behind them, even more students were arriving, and Ada was quick to go and greet them at the door. He was rather energetic, albeit he still moved pretty stiffly, and his hands were moving up and down like a programmed robot. Welcome, I am Ida Tenya. I look forward to our year together. He was gesticulating so weirdly, Rukia had to swallow a smile. Please, take your seats in an orderly manner. Well, looks like someone's taking the lead, mused Kirishima. We should probably do as he's saying before his brain bursts, suggested Rukia in a lower, teasing tone. He chuckled at that, and they slowly made their way back to the front. There was a crowd now, with more and more students slowly filling the classroom, so it took them a minute or so before they could finally see the seating plan. Oh, looks like we're next to each other, Eru-chan, beamed Ashido, throwing an arm around the white-haired girl's shoulders. Let's get along. AI Eru-chan. Yeah, your last name and your first name put together. Isn't it cute? She then deflated a bit, her smile turning into a pout. Don't you like it? Oh, no, I was just surprised, is all, Rukia replied, feeling bad. Now, I don't mind at all. Mina-chan, then. The pink girl instantly found back her smile. Yeah, let's be friends. Oh, I'm just behind you, Aizawa-san, suddenly remarked Kirishima. Looks like we're sticking together. She offered him a smile at that, genuinely relieved. Although everyone appeared to be very friendly so far, save for that jerk who had yet to introduce himself, she was still a little nervous, not really knowing what to do or how things worked. So, quickly taking the seat she had been assigned, right up in the front, meaning there would be no slacking off in class, which she was certain Shota-san had planned, she then started taking a better look at all of the students are her. She could catch snippets of introductions and greetings all around, and the sheer amount of new noises and new scents was making her head spin a little. I'm in a classroom, in a real school, with classmates and teachers that I'll spend 6 days a week with, and there'll be classes and homework and exams. This is really intimidating. I think I'd feel better facing off against a villain. Are you all right? Startling a bit, Rukia looked to her left, where a much smaller girl with long green hair tied in a cute little bow was sitting. Her features somewhat reminded her of a frog, so she guessed her quirk was amphibian-related. You look a little nervous, then added the frog-like girl. It was said in a somewhat flat tone, but there was an edge of genuine worry in it. You don't have to worry, though, it's the first day for everyone. My name is Asui Tsuyu, but you can just call me Tsuyu. Oh, I'm Aizawa Rukia, but, you can just call me Rukia, quickly replied the white-haired girl, bowing her head. And I'm not worried, just a tad overwhelmed, is all. This is all. Very new for me. School, I mean. Asui tilted her head at that. School. Just as the green-haired teen was about to question her some more, however, the door slid shut with a loud CLAC, instantly startling the students into a heavy silence. Then, without any warning, a man in a cocoon-like, yellow sleeping bag rose up from under the teacher's desk, up at the front. Everyone could only stare in astonishment as the sleeping bag was slowly unzipped from the inside, and the strange, disheveled man stepped out with the most tired and exasperated look on his face. He brought a box of juice to his lips as the sleeping bag fell on the floor, offering a flat stare at the students before him, and Rukia refrained the urge to facepalm. Oh, Shota-san. Just behind her, though, Kirishima and Todoroki tensed up a bit, easily recognizing the man now standing before them. Although they had only seen him once, his unkempt appearance and his killing glare were a little hard to forget. But what is that guy doing here? Wondered internally Kirishima, staring at Rukia's back with growing confusion. He's the one who came to pick her up at the station, right? She called him Shota-san, or something. Welcome to the hero course, he drawled out, throwing his now empty juice box aside. You guys were taking a while to shut up, so I just decided to take matters into my own hands this morning. Time is precious, though, so don't waste any more of it. Most of the students gulped, intimidated by his flat, uncaring tone. Oh, and I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota. Nice to meet you, I guess. Well, I knew he was in a bad mood this morning, but I didn't think he'd be that bad. Sweat dropped Rukia, rubbing her temples. He's always hated the first day of school, but now I understand better why Aunt Nemuri keeps on complaining about his attitude. Alright, I know this is a little sudden, but put this on and go out on the field. He pulled out a sports uniform from his sleeping bag. You'll find those in your lockers. You have 10 minutes to find the changing rooms, get changed, and go outside. Now get moving. And, not even waiting for an answer, he walked out of the classroom without another look back. A little shaken up by that first impression, it took a few seconds for his instructions to fully sink in. Once they did, the students jumped to their feet in a panic. Duh, quick, we gotta get changed. Do you know where the lockers are? Hey, those uniforms are cool too. Get moving, get moving. Not wanting to fall behind on her first day, Rukia quickly grabbed her own sports uniform, though she was starting to get nervous again. Shota-san had refused to say a single word about what they'd be doing. While she wasn't going to ask for some favoritism, she knew him. He'd surely make them do something just stressful enough that it'd make the weakest wills break, and just scary enough to traumatize the rest. And, while she was fairly confident that she could take whatever he threw at her, things would be different from here on out. She was no longer his protege, but a full-fledged student, meaning she didn't know what to expect anymore. Hey, she was pulled out of her thoughts as Kirishima tapped her on the shoulder, his brows furrowed in the utmost confusion. That guy is the one who came to pick you up at the station the other day, right? Oh yeah, he's Eru-chan. Ashido suddenly pounced on her, linking her arm with hers and pulling her toward the door. All of the girls are heading to the changing room together. Come on. Alright, sorry, Kirishima-san. I'll see you outside. Wait. But she was already gone, literally dragged along by the cheery pink girl and the 5 other girls of their class. Kirishima scratched his hand, troubled. In the end, he didn't get an answer. While it was fairly obvious that the two were related in some way, even if they looked nothing alike, he knew there was something he was missing. After all, if they were actually related, why would she be in his class? Rukia-chan, you said earlier that your name was Aizawa, right? Recalled Hagakure while they were changing. Are you related to Aizawa-sensei, then? The other girls looked up at that, and Ashido gasped. That's right, I completely forgot about that, but now I understand why the name was familiar. Rukia-san couldn't possibly be related to him. After all, Yue wouldn't have allowed her to be in his class if that was the case. Then rationalized Yaoyorozu Momo, a very beautiful girl with long black hair pulled into a ponytail. There'd be bias and potential favoritism. Unable to help it, Rukia snorted as she zipped up her uniform. Trust me, favoritism is the last thing I expect from him. So you do know him? Blinked Jiro Kyoka, the girl with the purple hair. Well, he's my legal guardian, confirmed the wolf girl, biting her lower lip as she faced the rest of the girls. We're not related by blood or anything, but he took me in when I was younger, and he's been looking after me for years, so. She then noticed Yaoyorozu's frown, and she quickly realized how it may look like. It's fine, though, really. I took the entrance exam like everyone else, and Shota-san, Aizawa-sensei is a very professional man despite appearances. He wouldn't let our history cloud his judgment, and he'll treat me like any other student of his. Though the headmaster is well aware of the situation and he's even the one who suggested it, and calm down, Rukia-chan, Asui chuckled, patting her shoulder in a comforting manner. No one here was accusing you of anything. We were merely curious. She instantly flushed in embarrassment, lowering her head. So sorry. Well, I was surprised, but it's not like we have anything to really worry about, right? Then pointed out Uraraka Achako, a nice girl with short brown hair. We're in UA. I doubt something like that would have been overlooked. Yes, well, if the headmaster himself suggested it, then I suppose it can't be helped, relented Yaoyorozu, still not convinced. She soon dropped her frown, though, and offered a mildly apologetic smile to the girl. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot like that, Rukia-san. I didn't mean anything by it. No, I'm the one who overreacted. I guess I'm just getting used to people, she admitted, a tad lamely. I was actually homeschooled before, so this is all a very new experience for me and I'm just a tad nervous is all. Sorry, homeschooled. Sounds fancy, gasped Uraraka. Well, I guess that explains some things, mused Jiro, twirling one of her earphone jacks around her finger. I was wondering why you were fidgeting so badly in your seat. It was that obvious. There was a moment of silence as all of the girls instinctively looked at the girl's tail, which was wagging back and forth, up and down, and was overall pretty much restless. Rukia's blush deepened even more and she instantly grabbed it, hoping it'd stop moving on its own. Seeing this, the other girls could only laugh, and whatever was left of the previous tension disappeared. Well, we should probably get going if we don't want to be late, then pointed out Ashido, shuddering a bit. I don't know about you guys, but I'd rather not get on Aizawa-sensei's bad side on the first day. Alright, yeah, let's go. Rukia-chan, is he like that every day? Then asked Hagakure. What she actually means is he always this scary? Corrected Gyro, smirking a bit. Rukia simply shrugged. You get used to it. Ew, what a scary answer. Rukia simply chuckled at their pale, downright distraught expressions. They appeared to be a somewhat overdramatic bunch, but it looked like they'd be getting along just fine, after all. Thankfully enough, they didn't arrive late, though they did almost get lost. Thankfully, they had run into the guys on their way out, so they all simply found their way to the field together, and once they got there, they found their new teacher already waiting for them. He didn't look any better than he did when they first saw him 10 minutes ago, save for the fact that he appeared just a bit more awake. Alright, now that you all finally deigned to show up, we'll get started on the quirk assessment test, he announced, looking a tad too bored for someone who just dropped a metaphorical bomb. The quirk assessment test, echoed the students, taken aback. Isn't that a little sudden? Gulped Gyro. What about the entrance ceremony? The orientation? Asked Uraraka, visibly worried. We barely managed to find our way here in time. Aren't we at least going to be shown around the school a bit? Added Kaminari, scratching the back of his head. If you're going to become a hero, you don't have time to waste on such leisurely events, retorted flatly Aizawa, unperturbed by the looks he was receiving. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are, and that principle is also applied to the teachers and how they run their classes. He then gestured lazily to the field before them. You guys have been doing these since junior high, haven't you? Physical fitness tests where you weren't allowed to use your quirks. The country still uses averages taken from results from students not using their quirks. But that's stupid. It's not rational at all. The Ministry of Education is just procrastinating. He then turned to the blonde jerk. Bakugo, you finished at the top of the practical exam, right? In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? 77 meters, answered the boy, tensing up a bit. Then, try doing it with your quirk. The other students around her started muttering amongst themselves, while Rukia simply watched everything unfold with mild confusion. Would that happen to be what Shota-san was talking about when he said that physical tests weren't rational enough? Herself had done those twice a year ever since she started actively training to join UA. But she had always been allowed to use her quirk. What was the point of testing an individual's strengths and weaknesses if they had to purposefully handicap themselves? Shota-san was right. It was stupid. Alright, you can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle, announced Aizawa when Bakugo took position on the field. Hurry up. Give it all you've got. Nodding mutely, the blonde stretched his arms a bit, before juggling with the ball a little, gauging its weight. Once ready, he lowered his upper body, bent his arm backward, and his focused expression suddenly flew in pieces as a mad grin split his lips. Die. He threw the ball, and a literal explosion followed. A blast of wind blinded the rest of the students for half a second, but by the time they reopened their eyes, the ball was already gone, having simply vanished into the horizon. After a few seconds, though, it reappeared, much further away, and dropped back on the field. Know your own maximum first, simply stated Aizawa, checking his phone. That is the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero. He then showed them his phone, and on the screen was displayed Bakugo's result, 705.2 meters. Startled gasps and cheers instantly followed as the reality of the situation finally sunk in for the rest of the students. They would be passing the physical tests while using their quirks, something they'd never done before. It was the perfect opportunity to test their actual limits and see where truly lied their strengths. So far, really. Is that even possible? This is awesome. Wow, this looks fun. We can use our quirks as much as we want. As expected from the hero course. This looks fun, was it? Silence instantly returned as the excitement of the students died down under the judging glare of their teacher. You'll have 3 years to become heroes. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? Some lowered their heads, and a sadistic smile graced the man's lips, a terrifying aura now emanating from him. All right, whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and will be punished with immediate expulsion. We're free to do what we want about the circumstances of our students. Welcome to UA. As hero course, everyone was now holding their breath, unsure of what to say or how to react. The man was scary as hell, and his creepy smile wasn't giving away anything. Was he joking? Was he serious? Was he even allowed to do that? There was simply no way to make sure, and the pressure instantly grew tenfold. Last place will be expelled. Uraraka was the only one brave enough to speak up. It's the first day of school. No, even if it wasn't the first day. This is too unfair. Natural disasters, big accidents, and selfish villains. Calamities whose time or places cannot be predicted. Japan is filled with unfairness, and heroes are the ones who reverse those seemingly impossible situations, replied calmly Aizawa, dropping his creepy smile. If you wanted to go talk with your friends at Mickey D's after school, too bad. For the next 3 years, UA will do all it can to provide you with hardships you've never even dreamt of facing before. Go beyond, plus ultra. Overcome it with all you've got. His students tensed up at the challenge, and he smirked. Now, the demonstration's over. It's time to get started on the real thing. They didn't have much of a choice in the matter, and the situation was too serious for them to consider joking around any longer. This was UA's hero course, and they shouldn't have expected it to be easy even on the first day. None of them wanted to be that one person who, at the end of the day, would have to go home and never put on the uniform again, meaning they would have to give it their best shot and go beyond their known limits. "Oh, Eru-chan, would he really do that?" whispered worriedly Ashido as they started heading over to where the first test would be held. Rukia shrugged. "Knowing him, I wouldn't be surprised." "Jay, how can you be so calm about this?" protested Hagakure, just next to her. "It's not like he's doing this to antagonize us. If we can't even give proper results on such a basic assessment test, then we obviously don't belong here," calmly pointed out the wolf girl. "Being a hero isn't all fun and games. There's real blood that's going to be shed, and real lives will be at stake. If we can't even manage to give over 100% today, then what does it say about our future as heroes?" "Well, when you put it that way, I guess it does make sense," grumbled Uraraka, still a little miffed about the whole situation. "I was really hoping for a cool, one-of-a-kind entrance ceremony, though." Rukia didn't add anything, knowing that whatever she said wouldn't be able to lift the girl's spirits. In the end, she spoke the truth. She really had no idea if Aizawa-sensei was actually going to go through with his threat, meaning she couldn't afford to get lazy. Of course, there was the matter that he'd beat her black and blue in their next training session if she didn't give it her all. But now there was a serious risk that she wouldn't even have any training anymore if she failed today. "I won't fail. I definitely won't fail. Everyone here seems pretty amazing and strong in their own rights, but there's no way I'm getting expulsed after working so hard on getting in. I'll definitely make it." "All right, the first test will be the 50-meter dash," announced their teacher, turning to face the group once more. "Make pairs and take position. Exploit your quirks and your natural abilities as much as you want, and don't hold back. Make pairs." Without really thinking, she turned around and spotted Kirishima. He was apparently thinking the same thing as her, though, because their eyes met a second later. He grinned, offering her a thumbs up, and she nodded back. Eru-chan, let's pair up," grinned Ashido, shaking her arm. Sorry, but I've already paired up with Kirishima-san," apologized Rukia, while said red-haired boy was coming to join her. "But we can pair up for the next test." "All right." Ashido didn't seem all that bothered, though. I don't mind. After all," she suddenly leaned in closer with a sly grin, lowering her voice. "You're going for Kirishima-kun? And on the first day, too. I didn't think you were so bold, Eru-chan." "Bold?" echoed Rukia, confused. "With what?" But Ashido quickly skipped away to pair up with someone else, without answering her question. "Hey, Aizawa-san," called out Kirishima, only then reaching her. He suddenly felt a piercing stare in the back of his head, and he gulped, realizing his mistake. Right, that might get a bit complicated here. Do you mind if I just call you by your first name? With Aizawa-sensei around, I mean." Oh, yes, of course," she quickly agreed, looking a tad sheepish. "I get that it might lead to some confusion. Just call me Rukia. Then, just call me Aijiro." He grinned. "Aijiro-kun?" He nodded eagerly, and she relaxed a bit. "All right, then. So, are you ready for the assessment test?" "Oh, yeah, I'll give it my all. 100%, he assured, pumping his fist in the air. "Good. Shota-san, Aizawa-sensei wouldn't tolerate anything less," she mused. He blinked at that, suddenly remembering his question from earlier. "Right, about that. Are you and Aizawa-sensei?" "Oi, less chatting, more running," suddenly barked their teacher, making them stiffen. "Get in line. I don't want to be here all day." A tad embarrassed at being called out of the sort, the two quickly went to join the other students in the forming lines. It didn't take long before Asui and Ada's turn came up, and the boy blew practically everyone's records with only 3.04 seconds. "Well, he's got literal engines in his legs, so there's no beating that," sweat dropped Kaminari just before Aijiro. "Being allowed to use our quirks has both its pros and its cons," nodded Zero. Next up was Ajiro Mashiro, a boy with a monkey-like tail, and Uraraka, who could apparently control gravity. Then, there was Ashido, who simply ran normally and still managed to beat Aoyama Yuuga, whose quirk wasn't amongst the most useful, to speak nicely. After what, it was up to Bakugo Katsuki, the jerk's full name, and a little guy with strange, grape-like spheres attached to his head, Minda Minoru. To say the latter was completely blown away by his partner's result would be an understatement. Using his explosions, Bakugo managed to score 4.13 seconds, while the poor boy got a measly 12.06 seconds. "Whoa, talk about a monstrous quirk," gaped Kaminari, stretching his legs. It was his turn now. It was pretty impressive earlier, too. Hopefully, We'll never have to actually fight him, pointed out Zero, taking place at the starting line. The signal was given, and the two boys took off at once. Neither of their quirks was really useful in such a test, unfortunately, but they still managed to score better than a few others. Once they cleared the tracks, Rukia and Kirishima positioned themselves. "Ready?" he asked, a tad challengingly. A somewhat ferocious grin graced her lips at that. "Sorry, but I'll be leaving you in the dust." We'll see about that." Set, ready, go. 1 second, Rukia was to his right. The next, dust was clouding his vision. 2.56 seconds. A heavy silence ensued as the dust finally settled down. And Kirishima suddenly realized that not only had the girl already reached the finish line, but that himself still hadn't moved an inch. "Oi, Kirishima, you're supposed to run too," called out Aizawa in a bored voice. "So sorry, sir. Just start over. You have one more shot." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." He finished the first test with a score of 6.32 seconds before joining Rukia, who was waiting for him on the sidelines with a sheepish expression. "You know, when you said you'd be leaving me in the dust, I didn't think you meant it literally," he remarked in a lighthearted tone. I'm sorry. I always get a little competitive." It's fine, he assured, patting her shoulder. "In fact, you were great. We have to give it our all, remember." He then realized something. "Though, I didn't see your arms shift. Were you holding back or something?" "Oh, no, my partial transformation is mostly to give me an edge in combat situations," she assured, shaking her head. "My physical abilities are naturally enhanced. While they may appear greater when I use my partial transformation, it's mostly because it actually enhances my instincts and my reaction time." It was quite impressive. Out of absolutely nowhere, Ida suddenly appeared beside them. "I've never seen someone attain such speed without the use of special gear or an adapted quirk. I thought for certain that I would come out on top in this particular test, but it would seem you have me beat." Well, you were pretty good yourself," she replied, somewhat intimidated by his overwhelming personality. "If you don't mind me asking, in what place did you come into during the practical exam?" "Place?" At first confused, she then understood what he was asking. "Oh, I got second." "See second," gawked Kirishima. "Ah, I understand better now," nodded Ida. He then bowed deeply. "Thank you for indulging my curiosity. Apologies for the disturbance." Not at all." As he walked away, Kirishima turned to her. "You got in second." "Yes, well, that's pretty much what allowed me to make it into UA," she admitted, cringing a little. "The theoretical exam didn't go as well, I'm afraid." "Who cares? You're incredible, Rukia." She gaped at him for a few seconds, taken aback by the genuine praise and the sincerity in his eyes. They had only spoken a few times before, but she had quickly understood that he was a very outspoken and honest person, which she respected greatly. Still, though, it always surprised her whenever he started praising her of the sort, even though they barely knew each other. It was a little embarrassing, but at the same time, it warmed her heart. She didn't really know what to do or say in return, but for once, she didn't panic about it. Instead, she settled for offering him her biggest smile as of yet, and he simply grinned back. The grip strength happened in pretty much the same fashion. While Shoji claimed the first place by a rather large margin, Rukia still managed to score high enough to classify in the top 5, and Kirishima wasn't too far behind her. Then again, his quirk was mostly centered on defense rather than physically enhancing his physical abilities. So that he managed to score so high was simply proof of his continued hard work and training. The third test, the standing long jump, went like a breeze for Aoyama, Asui, and Bakugo, who simply used their quirks to get across without breaking a sweat. As for Rukia, well, she miscalculated the strength she put into her jump, and she ended up propelling herself high instead of far, though she still somehow managed to make it on the other side of the sandbox. Repeated sidesteps were, surprisingly enough, dominated by Minta. Even though his quirk was really weird, for a lack of better terms, he proved to be creative enough to use it to his advantage during this particular test, and he managed to claim the highest score. This time around, Rukia's enhanced abilities weren't of much use, so her own score was much more amidst the average than she would have liked, but she didn't stress over it too much, considering her previous results. The highest score for the long-distance run was disputed between Ada and Rukia, but the latter managed to claim it with a 2.04 seconds less than the bespectacled boy. He once again praised her for beating him, before going off on his own while muttering under his breath about how he needed to examine her moves more closely and learn from them. And Rukia didn't have the here to tell him that he couldn't possibly learn anything from her, or at least, not in that particular field. She was just running fast, after all. The sit-ups weren't much of a challenge for anyone who had received preemptive training or who simply enjoyed muscular exercises. So, after a few minutes of continued push-ups between Kirishima, Bakugo, Shoji, Todoroki, Ashido, and Rukia, None of them felt like giving up, but after they all reached 200 push-ups, Aizawa decided to put an end to the show and gave them all first place. Else they'd probably be at it until they pushed themselves to exhaustion out of sheer stubbornness and pride. The girls absolutely dominated the toe touch test. Rukia and Ashido claimed the first place, soon followed by Yaoyorozu and Hagakure. And Ajiro and a certain Takoyami Fumikage were both also surprisingly flexible. Finally, the last test, and probably the one they had all been secretly itching to try, arrived, the ball throw. Bakugo had already raised the stakes to an incredible height, and most of the more challenge-loving students couldn't wait to try and beat his record. Despite all of their efforts and all of the strength they put into their throw, however, no one could possibly beat Uraraka. She got infinity. But, then again, with a quirk that could control gravity, that was to be expected. However, that didn't stop the other students from giving it their best shot, and soon enough, it was Rukia's turn. Positioning herself in the center of the circle, she spun the ball in her hands a few times before grabbing it firmly. As far as I can. The last time I did this test, I scored 604.2 meters. This time, I'm aiming for 700. Gathering all of her strength, she bent her arm backward and, without a second thought, she threw it at the ground. A tremor ran through the field and made a few pebbles shake as the ball embedded itself a good few centimeters into the ground, which cracked under the impact. What did I just do? Rukia, I said to throw it far, not deep, deadpan Aizawa. So sorry, I got a little too fired up. You get another shot. Don't waste it. Right, a little fired up, echoed Kaminari, pale. He was standing in the back, but he could still see the fuming hole at the girl's feet. Can you imagine if that had hit someone in the face? Ignoring the whispers and the few, muffled laughs of her peers, Rukia breathed in deeply to try and regain control. She had focused too much on the strength in hopes to prove herself and had completely forgotten about the aiming part. Quickly correcting her mistake, she took position once more, and, after a few seconds of stillness, she threw it again. This time around, it flew far and wide, until it almost disappeared from sight. 694.7 meters. Not bad. Next, Rukia released a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding, before heading back toward the group. She hadn't reached the 700 meters like she had been first aiming for, but she still managed to beat her old record by a fairly large margin. There's no doubt, next time around, I'll definitely beat the 500 meters. Good job, Rukia, grinned Kirishima, holding up his hand. She high-fived him, kind of glad that she was done with the tests, even if, secretly, she found them fun. She had been a little nervous, but, as it turned out, she doubted she had anything to worry about. She had scored above average in pretty much all of the tests, so she knew she'd fine. Now, though, she was starting to worry about something else. If I'm not the one leaving, then who is? Almost everyone I've spoken with so far is really nice, and I don't want to see one of them leave at the end of the day. I mean, there's the jerk, but we haven't spoken once since the day started, so maybe it was just a bad first impression. She bit her lower lip, glancing at everyone around her. One way or another, someone's bound to be expulsed. Should I try and talk to Shota-san? No, he won't change his mind so easily. Maybe. All right, everyone, gather around, suddenly ordered Aizawa, pulling out his phone. I'll quickly tell you the results. The total is simply the marks you got from each test. It'd be a waste of time to explain verbally, so I'll show you the results all at once. Here you go. Above him was suddenly projected a blue screen with everyone's names and scores. Rukia exhaled in relief when seeing that she had come in first, with Yaoyorozu and Todoroki just behind her. Bakugo was fourth, with Ida in fifth and Kirishima in sixth. Then there was Shoji, Anjiro, Ashido, Takoyami, Uraraka, Kota Koji, Sato Rikido, Asuitsuyu, Aoyama, and Shiro. In 17th place was Kaminari, in 18th place was Jiro, in 19th place was Hagakure, and in 20th place was Mainta. Gah, I came in last, gasped the boy, horrified tears already brimming his eyes. That's it, I'm being expulsed. I was lying about the expulsion. Looking as bored as ever, Aizawa turned off his phone and the score screen disappeared. Then, a wide, sadistic grin stretched his lips. It was a rational deception to draw out the upper limits of your quirks. However, he then looked over to the purple-haired boy, his creepy grin growing even more. Mainta, we'll have a chat later. The poor boy looked like he was about to piss himself. Why, yes, sir. All right. On that note, we're done here, the teacher then announced, his face returning to his usual bored expression. You'll find handouts with the curriculum and such in the classroom, along with maps of the school. Make sure to grab those before leaving. The students answered positively in a chorus, still a little shaken by the abrupt revelation that, in the end, the teacher had lied about the whole ordeal. After a few seconds, though, Rukia let out a small laugh. Rukia-chan, what is it? Asked curiously Uraraka. It's just, you guys should have seen your faces, she replied, unable to stop herself from laughing. She was trying to muffle it, but her shoulders were shaking. You all looked really scared, is all. Well, that took me by surprise, admitted Zero, a bead of sweat rolling down his forehead. We were scared because it was scary, added Kaminari, looking on the verge of panic. I thought for sure that my heart was going to stop. What's up with that terrifying teacher? I really thought I was done for, admitted Hagakure, a hand over her heart. Well, look at this the bright way. Since he didn't kick out any of us, that means he considers we all have enough potential to actually make it as heroes. Her laughter died down, but she was still smiling as she faced the others. That simply means he believes in us. Pretty cool, right? Kaminari calmed down at that. Well, when you say it that way. I see. So the tests had such a purpose, nodded Ada, pushing up his glasses. Had any of us failed to meet his expectations, the scores wouldn't have mattered, be it the first place or the last. He'd have expulsed us, meaning we'll constantly have to give it our all, as expected of the hero course, grinned Kirishima, pumping his fist in the air. Man, that teacher sure is cool, after all. At that, Rukia's smile simply widened. Yeah, he's the best. As it turned out, they were given the rest of the day to familiarize themselves with the school grounds and their classmates. A few of their teachers dropped by to greet them and introduce themselves and their curriculums, and they even received a quick visit of Headmaster Nezu. They received documents to fill out along with some school materials sporting UA's colors and name, and they even received another sports uniform. Also, seeing as it was the first day, said day had been shortened so that the first years would have enough time to get accustomed to their new environment, meaning they now had more than enough free time on their hands to get to know each other. So you and Aizawa-sensei have that kind of relationship? Obviously, it was only a matter of time before everyone found out about Rukia's link with their teacher. However, seeing how she had performed today in the quirk assessment test, and how she was also supported by Kirishima, who talked of her performance during the practical exam, everyone seemed to quickly accept the situation. After all, they had faith in UA. They wouldn't let favoritism get in the way, even for a teacher's daughter. And, seeing how Aizawa acted today, well, they doubted he was even capable of showing even a hint of affection or anything of the like. We've got a lot of interesting people in this class, mused Kaminari, leaning back in his seat. And we've got a bunch of interesting teachers, too, added Zero. I'm quite curious about how classes given by pro heroes will go, remarked Asui. Would it be really that different from normal teachers? Wondered Rukia, curious. Definitely. It's pro heroes we're talking about, replied excitedly Uraraka. The classes are sure to be fun and interesting. It's completely different from a normal high school, added Ashido, the others around her nodding their heads in agreement. UA is the most renowned high school in Japan, stated imperiously Ida. Of course, it's only to be expected that classes will be a lot different than those of a regular high school. I don't really know about that. I mean, math is math, no matter who teaches it, pointed out Ajiro, sweat dropping a little at their excitement. The shadow of disappointment is bound to engulf you, predicted Takoyami in a somewhat somber tone. Right, shaking her head, Ashido then jumped to her feet, grinning excitedly. Hey, I know. We all have Sunday off, so why don't we go and hang out together Saturday after school hours? We could go to a restaurant or something, get to know each other better. What a wonderful idea, instantly agreed Yaoyorozu, clasping her hands together. There's this nice 5-star restaurant that opened up a few weeks ago, and the sushi is delicious. I don't think I have the money for a 5-star restaurant, sweat dropped Uraraka. Ooh, I know a place. It's cheap and has lots of good food, and it's about 20 minutes from the school, suggested Kaminari. Sounds like it'd be fun. Nodded Gyro, smiling a bit. Well, since we're going to spend the next 3 years together, might as well learn to get along properly, mused Sato. That sounds great. I'm in, exclaimed cheerfully Hagakure. This looks like it'll be interesting, nodded Kirishima before glancing at Rukia. You going too? She paused. You want me to come? Of course, everyone's invited. Ashido grabbed her hands, bouncing in place. Come on, please come. It's going to be fun, I promise. Well, if you'll have me. Obviously, Kirishima lightly bumped her shoulder, before turning to the two who had yet to join the group at all. Oi, Todoroki, Bakugo. You coming too? I'm busy, simply answered Todoroki, obviously uninterested in such an activity. I have no intention of wasting my time with extras, grunted Bakugo, slinging his bag over his shoulder. I'm going to be number 1, so you better not get in my way. On which he then left the classroom. The others exchanged unsure glances, before shrugging it off and resuming their previous conversation. Rukia couldn't help but stare at the now closed door for a few seconds, wondering if she should try and talk some sense into the boy, but she quickly gave up on the idea. She didn't even know him, so why bother? Hopefully, he'll come around soon enough. As Sato-san said, we'll be together for the next 3 years, and we might even end up working together as heroes, so we should try and get along. Seeing how all of the other students happily chatted and planned their Saturday evening, though it surely wouldn't be that hard. A few hours later, she was waiting for Shota-san at the gates when, out of nowhere, Mineta came running out of the building as if the devil himself was hot on his heels. There were tears streaming down his cheeks, his face was scrunched up in a terrified expression, and he didn't even seem to notice her as he passed the gates and quickly disappeared down the street without another look back. Well, if he had run like that during the test, he'd have had a better score. Shota-san. She quickly reported her attention to the man who had just appeared behind her, and she scowled a bit. What did you do to the poor boy? Nothing. I told him to come find me in my office later, but when we crossed paths in the hallway, he panicked and ran away. He answered, scratching his cheek. Looks like he's dropping out after all. Dropping out? You mean you're kicking him out? He was weak, and the only reason I didn't expulse him on the spot was that I wanted to give him one last chance to prove himself, admitted Shota-san as he started to walk, and she quickly fell in step with him. As it turned out, he ran away with his tail between his legs, and that's not the kind of student who'll make it as a hero. So, he's out. I see. That's too bad, but I suppose you'd know better than me. What do you think of the rest of the class? He then asked, glancing at her with mild curiosity. She thought it over for a moment, before looking up at him with a smile. I like them. His lips briefly quirked up at that. They're not half bad, I'll give you that. A week passed. As it turned out, classes taught by pro heroes were just like classes taught in any other high school, save for the fact that the teachers were a lot more extravagant. To say most of the students were disappointed by the sheer normality of those classes would be an understatement. But they quickly got used to the routine, and, on Saturday, the last day of their first week of school, they finally got started on the afternoon classes, the hero basic training. We've only been doing all sorts of physical fitness tests, and we covered some theory, but we're finally getting started on the practical. I can't wait. Everyone was obviously excited at the prospect of an actual hero course class. Hopefully, this would make up for the boring morning classes. Hey, who do you think our teacher will be? I don't know. They didn't come to introduce themselves on the first day. Think it's Aizawa-sensei. Eru-chan, you have connections in UA, right? Recalled Ashido leaning over so she could whisper to the girl to her right. Do you know who our teacher is? Aizawa-sensei wouldn't tell me, admitted Rukia, internally berating herself for her almost mistake. She had to learn to call him more formally when they were in school. He does all of his work at school, and I'm not allowed to look at the paperwork he sometimes brings home. I do hear him complain about his colleagues from time to time, for not saying all of the time. But, other than that, I don't know anything. I heard there be a new student, then recalled Ajiro, just behind them. Is that true? Well, they do need to fill Mineta-kun's seat, remarked Asui. All eyes turned to the desk that had been empty for a week now, before turning back to the front. None of them really minded the boy's absence, because they didn't know him and he had been acting rather perverted on the first day. Before anyone could ponder over it any longer, though, the door of the classroom slid open. All right, class, I won't be here long and your teacher for the afternoon hero basic training class will be here in a few minutes, announced Aizawa, coming in. I'm just here because, as your homeroom teacher, it's apparently my duty to introduce you to the new student joining this class. You can come in. Everyone held their breath as the new student entered the classroom, but quickly deflated when realizing it was a rather normal-looking fellow, save for his purplish hair that flared out in large tufts around his head. He looked just as bored and tired as Aizawa, making a few wonder if that guy was somehow related to him. I'm Shinso Hitoshi, formerly from the General Department Studies, Class 1 degrees Celsius. He introduced himself in a drawl. Nice to meet you. He's so normal, gasped internally the rest of the students. Well, that's it for me, announced Aizawa, already walking out. Play nice, kiddas. The door slid shut behind him, and he was gone as quickly as he arrived. There was a moment of very awkward silence as all of the students stared at their new classmate, who was still standing at the front with the air of someone who really couldn't care less. Well, we welcome you in our class, Shinso Hitoshi-kun then greeted Ida in a very formal tone, extending his hand to him. Don't care. I'm not here to make friends. Where's my seat? It's over there, quickly answered Uraraka, pointing at the empty seat in the back. With a simple nod, the boy then left a very flustered Ida and made his way to the back without sparing another glance for the rest of the students. Another heavy silence befell the group as everyone tried to wrap their heads around the unexpected turn the situation had taken. Unable to help it, Rukia subtly glanced back at the boy. That guy. What are you doing, Shota-san? Checking out some students' files. A tad curious, Rukia came over to the table and looked at the papers displayed before him. There were only a few, 5 or 6 at most, and each had a picture along with basic information about each individual. As she looked them over, though, she noticed one that didn't seem to stick out much, but the quirk looked interesting. With a quirk like that, what is it? Someone who caught your eye? She startled, suddenly remembering Shota-san was next to her. Oh, I was just thinking that this guy's quirk. Well, it looks pretty powerful, but there's no way he could have used it in the practical exam. The practical exam is, unfortunately, focused on the flashy and physically powerful quirks, he sighed, grabbing the file she had been looking at. People like that boy, with quirks that are more subtle, don't have much of a chance to pass it. She scrunched up her nose at that. That's sad. I mean, with that kind of quirk, he could do amazing work as a hero, right? There's so much potential that's being wasted or overlooked. Well, couldn't have said it better. On which he put it away into his bag and quickly gathered the rest of the files. Now stop looking at my paperwork. You're not allowed to do that. Oh, sorry. I forgot. I'm certain of it. Now, that guy's the one we talked about a few days ago. Hey, Rukia. She quickly snapped her attention back to Kirishima, who had apparently noticed her staring. He offered her a reassuring smile. Don't worry about that guy. I'm sure he'll come around eventually. I just wish everyone could get along, she admitted, glancing at Bakugo. He glared when noticing her, and she quickly averted her eyes. I don't understand people like that. I guess I'm just not used to it. Well, from what you told us, you never really had a chance to interact with other people your age before joining UA. Right, remarked softly Asui. Don't worry about it. Rukia relaxed a little at that, offering the frog girl a smile. While she had spent the last week or so getting used to interacting with her classmates, there were still many things she had difficulties getting accustomed to, such as sudden physical contacts and overly friendly and cheerful attitudes. Of course, she was used to dealing with randomly extravagant people thanks to Aunt Nimuri and Uncle Hazashi. But they were adults and, as such, there was still a certain distance that was kept between them. Even though everything's new, even though it's sometimes stressful. I can't deny liking the change of pace, she mused internally. It's loud and sometimes overwhelming. And I don't always know how to react or what to say, but I like it. I am. Without any warning whatsoever, the door suddenly, loudly slid open, coming through the door like a normal person. Whoa, no way. It's All Might, the #1 hero. Ah, now I understand why Shota-sen kept on grumbling about twice the amount of blonde and loud idiots for the last few days. I never thought he'd show up here. So he really is a teacher. He's wearing a costume from the Silver Age, right? So cool. Hello, everyone. Reaching the front of the class, All Might faced them with his hands on his hip, his trademark smile stuck to his lips. I will be teaching you hero basic training. It is a subject where you train in different ways to learn the basics of being a hero, and you'll be taking the most units from this subject. He suddenly spun around, before pointing a finger at the students. Let's get right into it. This is what we'll do today. Combat training. For real. Awesome. And to go with our first class together are these. He pointed at the wall to his right, much to everyone's surprise and awe. 4 racks containing silver suitcases with large numbers imprinted on them slid out. Those are the costumes made based on your quirk registrations and the requests you sent in before school started. Now, go get changed, then gather in ground beta for your very first hero basic training. He disappeared in a flash, and everyone instantly rushed to the front to grab the suitcase containing their hero costumes, eager to try them on. Just as Rukia picked up her own suitcase, though, she suddenly remembered the new student who had just arrived. Right, Shinso-sen probably didn't have the time to put in a request. She blinked a few times, surprised, when realizing he was already gone. Did he go ahead? Eru-chan, come on, let's go try them on, urged Ashido, suddenly pulling her toward the door. All right, this is my hero costume. She finished tying the black bandana around her forehead, then grinned at her reflection. It was exactly like she imagined it would be, which pleased her greatly. She had taken inspiration from pro hero Mirko's costume, except that she had a skirt to wear with the sleeveless leotard. It stopped at about 3/4 of her thighs, so it didn't hinder her movements in any way, and her arms were completely bare. After all, if she wanted to use her partial transformation, then gloves and sleeves would only get in the way. She was also wearing high boots that stopped just underneath her knees, but they were open-toed so, that way, she wouldn't hurt herself when shifting forms. A belt made of fake fur was also attached around her waist, though it was mostly for the style, and the bandana around her head stopped her hair from getting in the way since she didn't want to tie it. I don't really like having my arms exposed like that, but I guess there's no helping it, she mused, examining herself. It's surprisingly warm and comfortable, too. Rukia-chan, are you done? We're all ready to head out, called out Hagakure. Right, coming. Putting away her sports bag, she then quickly joined the other girls outside. They were all wearing costumes that surprisingly fit their respective personalities, but then again, they had helped design them. When seeing her, Gyro grinned. Wow, looking wild, Rukia. The girl offered a sheepish grin. It's kind of the look I was aiming for. I don't really like flashy and complicated stuff, so. Still, did you have to make it all black? Pouted Ashido, who greatly stood out with her purple and blue costume. I mean, the added fur is cute and all, but no one will look at you. Well, that's kind of the point. What? With a body like that, of course you should show off. Just look at Yamomo. The girl in question flushed a little when the others turned to look at her. Well, I would have made it even more revealing had it not been for the regulations. But it's the best way for me to use my quirk to its fullest. You look great, Momo-chan, assured Asui, as calm as ever. Still, I didn't know you were so ripped, Rukia, then remarked Gyro, a bead of sweat dripping down her face as she looked more closely at the other girl. Is that a six-pack? Right, you're super muscular, gasped Ashido, only now noticing. She started poking Rukia's arm, and her eyes widened. Well, it's so firm. You're really strong. Well, my quirk naturally enhances my physical abilities, and I've been training a lot, too, she replied, growing a little embarrassed. But anyway, we should get going if we don't want to miss the training. Come on, let's go. The others laughed a bit at the red now tainting her cheeks, but they laid off the teasing and simply followed her outside, making their way to ground beta. Hey, looking good, girls, complimented Kaminari, waving their way. Upon seeing her, Kirishima offered Rukia his usual toothy grin and a thumbs up, and the blush she had somehow managed to get rid of on her way to ground beta returned at once. She tried to ignore it, though, and simply smiled back. His own costume looked good on him, and the wired guard around his face somewhat reminded her of a lion's jaw. Looking around, though, she quickly noticed that everyone actually looked pretty good. Only Shinso wasn't wearing a costume, but the standard sports uniform issued by UA. After all, his transfer had been a last-minute decision, so it was surely still in the process of being made. They say the clothes make the man. Young men and ladies, then stated All Might, standing a little further away. His trademark smile conveyed a certain pride as he looked them over. Be fully aware that, from now on, you are heroes. That's great, everyone. You all look very cool. And now, shall we begin? It's time for your first combat training. Sensei, instantly called out Ida, looking good in his armor-like costume. This is a battle center from the entrance exam, so will we be conducting urban battles again? No, we're going to move 2 steps ahead, answered All Might, unperturbed by the interruption. Most of the time, fighting villains takes place outside. But if you look at the total numbers, atrocious villains appear indoors at a higher rate. Imprisonment, house arrest, backroom deals. In this society filled with heroes, truly intelligent villains hide in the shadows. Rukia cringed a little at that, unconsciously rubbing the back of her neck. Seeing as Shota Sanaka Eraserhead was what they called an underground hero, he more often than not dealt with the kind of villains All Might was now talking about. While she wasn't always privy to the details, she knew enough to concur with the number one hero, both from what she had learned and what she had experienced herself. Those who work in the shadows are often the cleverest, and a clever enemy is a lot harder to deal with. For this class, you'll be split into villains and heroes and fight 2-on-2 indoor battles, then announced All Might, without any basic training. Wondered Asui, surprised. This is a real battle to understand those basics. However, the key this time is that there's no robot you can just beat up. How will wins and losses be determined? Asked Yaoyorozu. Can we beat them up anyway? Added Bakugo, cracking his knuckles. Will the punishment be expulsion like Aizawa-sensei? Paled Uraraka, shifting nervously. How shall we be split up? Inquired Ida, raising his hand. Isn't this cape just amazing? Added Aoyama, showing off his sparkling, purple cape. I'll somehow answer all of your questions. All Might looked positively overwhelmed, and Rukia could simply sigh in sympathy. It was his first time teaching a class, after all. He then pulled out a small notebook and started reading what was written in it. The situation is that the villains have hidden a nuclear weapon somewhere in their hideout. The hero's job is to stop the villains and secure that weapon. To do that, the heroes need to catch the villains or get the nuclear weapon back in the allotted time. The villains need to protect the nuclear weapon for the whole time or catch the heroes. Getting rid of the ridiculously small notebook, he then pulled out a yellow box from absolutely nowhere. Teams and opponents will be determined by drawing lots. They're being decided so haphazardly. Gasped Ida, apparently outraged by the notion. Albeit his reactions and his manner of speech were always a little too intense for Rukia's liking. She had learned over time that the boy was simply very earnest. But it was still a little annoying from time to time, even if she was getting used to it. Pros often have to work with heroes from other agencies in the midst of dangerous and unplanned situations. Then pointed out Yaoyorozu. Some teams are created for the purpose of leading specific operations, but daily happenstances will often lead pros to work with fellow heroes they've sometimes never even met before. Ah, I see. Nodding, Ida then bowed deeply. Please, excuse my rudeness. It's fine. Now, let's do this quickly. Lots were drawn and teams were made. After a minute or so, everyone regrouped with their respective partner, and Rukia gulped slightly when she slowly made her way towards Shinso, who had stayed in the back up until now. She hadn't expected to end up partnered with the new guy, but she was sincerely hoping that they would get along and manage to work together. Hi, I'm Aizawa Rukia, your partner. He didn't even glance at her, and she steeled her resolve. We need to work together. So I was thinking we could try and start working on a strategy, maybe figure out a way to exploit both of our quirks. That won't be necessary, he assured flatly. She frowned at that. But we need to. You don't need to do anything. Just listen to what I say and we'll win. And, on this charming note, he walked away. She gaped at his retreating back, honestly taken aback by his attitude. He was as arrogant as Bakugo, but in a different way. It was colder, sharper, and it felt dangerous. However, she had met her fair share of dangerous people, and she had lived with Aizawa, of all people. So, as intimidating as the new guy was, he wasn't anywhere near as scary as her legal guardian. If he doesn't want to talk, then I guess we'll just have to figure something out once we're on the field, she reasoned, taking a deep breath to calm her rising temper. We can do this. Once we start fighting, he'll have no choice but to work with me anyway. Nodding to herself, she steeled her resolve and quickly went back to join the group, where the first two opposing teams had been announced. Team A, consisting of Yaoyorozu and Uraraka, would be the heroes, and they would be facing off with Team D, which consisted of Ida and Bakugo. While the two teams made their way to the indicated location in Ground Beta, All Might ushered the rest of the group toward a nearby building, inside which they would be watching the simulation and analyzing the fights. Hey, you all right, Rukia? Asked Kirishima as they made their way inside. Yeah, just thinking. Shinso-sen doesn't look like he's willing to work with me, so I'm trying to figure out a plan of action, she admitted, frowning a little. Right, you got stuck with the new guy on the first go, realized Kaminari, shooting a quick glance at Shinso, who was walking further ahead. You don't know anything about him, not even his quirk. Tough luck for you. She, however, shook her head. I wouldn't say that. I think there's a lot of potential that our teamwork could bring out. But it's difficult to work with someone who wants to do everything on their own, is all. Kaminari simply sighed. You're too nice, Rukia. You can just say he's a jerk, you know. No one would blame you for complaining. Before she could reply, they finally reached the monitor room, where numerous screens had been set up in order to allow a full and thorough observation of the future fights. Going up at the front, All Might activated a microphone, and his voice soon echoed throughout the entire Ground Beta, carried over by numerous hidden speakers. Very well, let's not waste any more time and begin the indoor person-to-person combat training with Team A and Team D. Battle, start. Deactivating the microphone, he turned to the rest of the students behind him. Okay, everyone, you all should think as well. This may only be training right now, but sooner than you think, it might become the real deal. You'll have to take this very seriously. Yes, sir. They chorused at once. On the screen, Tima entered the building at last, successfully infiltrating through a window thanks to Uraraka's quirk. They then slowly started making their way upward, where the weapon was located. However, barely 30 seconds after they started making their way through the dark hallways, an explosion blinded the screen for a second. Startled shouts followed, but, thankfully enough, both of the girls had managed to evade the attack in time. A surprise attack from the start. Winced Gyro. Bakugo, that's cheating, protested loudly Kirishima. A surprise attack isn't manly at all. A surprise attack is a strategy, too, simply pointed out All Might. Don't forget that they're in the middle of a real battle right now. At once, though, Yaoyorozu suddenly created a large blanket and threw it in the air. Blinded for a second, Bakugo quickly blasted through it, but couldn't avoid in time the small, spherical explosives Uraraka had sent flying his way at the same time. They weren't powerful enough to really hurt him, but it did win them a few more seconds, and by the time he got back to his feet, the two girls had split up and ran off into two different hallways. Letting out a frustrated yell, Bakugo instantly took off after Yaoyorozu. Ooh, I see. Yamomo created those explosives before and gave them to Ochako-chan at the beginning of the battle so they could use them as a diversion, realized Mina. Knowing Bakugo's brash and impatient personality, it was a given that he would rush ahead and attack them head-on, remarked quietly Takoyami. Though, Momo-chan's in trouble now. If he catches up to her, he'll definitely blow her up, exclaimed worriedly Hagakure, probably gesturing wildly to emphasize her statement. There is no need to fret, young lady. If things go too far, then I'll step in to stop them, then assured All Might, never looking away from the screens. It's only natural to grow enthused and sometimes go overboard, but that's why you are training now, so that, in a real combat situation, you learn to stay level-headed under any circumstance. Back on the screen, Bakugo was having a hard time catching up with Yaoyorozu. He kept on running into traps and explosives she left in her trail, and he was growing more and more frustrated, blasting away every single thing that got in his way. Then, he abruptly paused and started yelling, before taking off again, even more enraged. What was he saying? We can't tell with just the cameras in a fixed position and no sound, grumbled Kirishima. Ada asked him what he was doing, and Bakugo told him to fuck off and focus on defending the weapon. Rukia scrunched up her nose a bit. He's really got a terrible attitude. Hey, can you read lips or something? Rukia blinked Gyro, surprised. What? No, I heard them. She pointed to All Might, and the man tapped the earpiece stuck into his ear. They're using those wireless radios to communicate, and All Might can hear everything they're saying. And since Bakugo's so loud, it's kind of hard not to hear him. Right you are, young lady. You are allowed to use two radios along with a plan of the building's floors. And you can also bring this capture tape. He pulled out a small, white tape and showed it to the students. Once you wrap this around your opponent, it shows that you've successfully apprehended them. The time limit is 15 minutes, and the heroes don't know where the nuclear weapon is located, right? Then the heroes are clearly at a disadvantage, realized Ashido, frowning. Heroes should be able to turn the tables on whatever predicament they're in. Besides, didn't Aizawa-sensei tell you, too? His grin widening slightly, All Might threw his fist in the air. Here we go. Plus ultra, exclaimed cheerfully the rest of the students. Gah! He caught up to Momo-chan. Suddenly exclaimed Hagakure. At once, everyone reported their attention to the screens. As told, Yaoyorozu now appeared to be cornered, having run into a dead end, and Bakugo had caught up to her. He pounced, clearly planning on blowing her up in smithereens. But Yaoyorozu suddenly threw 3 Matryoshka dolls of varying sizes. Having apparently learned from his previous lesson, Bakugo instantly kicked the nearest wall to try and put some distance between them. But what he hadn't expected was the sudden, blinding flashes of light that followed. Flash bombs, gasped Ojiro. Then that means she's trying to capture him, realized Rukia, her tail wagging excitedly. Go, Momo-chan. They watched, some cheering along, as Yaoyorozu used Bakugo's temporary blindness to her advantage. Running up to him as she pulled out the capture tape, she was about to tie it around his wrist when he suddenly lifted his arm, the engine attached to his forearm powering up in the span of a second. Although he still had his eyes closed, he had sensed her approach and was ready to greet her with double the amount of explosion they had thrown at him earlier. Thinking fast, Yaoyorozu dropped to her knees without stopping her mad dash, and the momentum sent her sliding between his legs. Bakugo's following attack rocked the entire hallway and blew away chunks of the walls surrounding them, but she had successfully avoided it and, at the same time, had managed to tie the capture tape around his ankle. She got him, cheered Ashido, pumping her fist in the air. Whoa, that was awesome. He didn't even see it coming. Gawked Zero, as expected from someone who got in thanks to official recommendations. I suppose, remarked quietly Shoji. Wait. As the dust settled down on the screen, Rukia had noticed how neither Bakugo nor Yaoyorozu was moving, and after taking a closer look, she realized why. Momo-chan got captured too. What? No way. On the screen, Yaoyorozu slowly rose back to her feet and brought her hand up to her hair with a somewhat startled expression. In the heat of the moment, she hadn't thought twice about getting closer to him, assuming he had become powerless upon losing his sight, but he had actually calculated her movements. When realizing he could no longer see, he also understood her plan, and he had forced her to use the only opening available in such a narrow hallway, between his legs. While she tied the capture tape to his ankle, though, he had managed to tie his own around her ponytail using his free hand. Talk about crazy good reaction time, paled Kaminari. What an unexpected twist, mused Sato, rubbing his chin. If they both caught the other at the same time, though, what happens now? Wondered Asui. All Might simply activated his own earpiece. Young Bakugo, young Yaoyorozu, the both of you are out for the rest of the match thanks to a draw. Please evacuate the building and come join us to the monitor room to watch the rest of the simulation. Bakugo visibly cursed at that, before relaying the message to Yaoyorozu. The girl heaved out a sigh, but nodded, and they simply started heading back outside without another word. They were both obviously miffed about how things had turned out, but there was no helping it. Up on another screen was Ida, who had also heard All Might's instructions. He started pacing, obviously troubled by how things had turned out. But he didn't have much time to ponder over the situation. Uraraka finally reached the room where the weapon was located, although he couldn't see her yet. She was shaking a bit, having grown nervous upon learning that her partner had been disqualified, but she couldn't give up now. The heroes needed to win. But then, she realized that she couldn't use her quirk. It would appear that Ida removed everything that was laying around, therefore rendering it impossible for Uraraka to use her quirk, stated calmly Takoyami. Instead of lazing around while Bakugo ran off on his own, he made sure to incapacitate at least half of their opponents before they even showed up. Understood Zero. Oh, no, Ochako-chan is in trouble then, realized Ashido, biting her lower lip. What will she do? With Yamomo out of the race, she won't have anything to use her quirk on. Oh, look, she's trying something, exclaimed Hagakure, since Ada had yet to see her. Uraraka decided to use the effect of surprise to her advantage, and she started running toward him head-on. Surprised by her sudden appearance, Ada failed to react immediately, which gave her a few seconds of lead. Just as he started running toward her in hope to stop her, she used her quirk on herself. Jumping with all of her might, she managed to bypass his defense and started floating toward the weapon. Just as she was about to land on it, however, Ada returned to his senses and used his own quirk to move faster and remove the weapon, placing it at the complete opposite of the room in the span of a second. Well, there goes the surprise effect. Sweat drop gyro. Uraraka landed back on the floor and made a barrel, hitting the wall. Her helmet fell off at the impact, making a few cringe. This hadn't been a soft landing by any mean. I wonder what'll she do now, frowned Kirishima, arms crossed over his chest. She's lost the effect of surprise, and she can't use her quirk. All Ada has to do is either capture her, or wait for the time to run out. That may be so, but Ochako-chan is a determined person, replied Rukia, gazing thoughtfully at the screen. She's creative, and she won't just give up because something appears impossible. I'm sure she'll figure out a way to win. Kirishima glanced at her, surprised, and Kaminari snorted. You know, you usually talk all shy and stutter-ish, but you get pretty confident when you talk about someone else. I do. I hadn't noticed, she admitted, her focused expression breaking and leaving place to a more sheepish one. I guess I just get a little caught up in the moment from time to time. Look, she's going at him again. But he knows what to expect now, doesn't he? She doesn't stand a chance. As Uraraka ran toward Ada and the weapon once more, though, she tried to get even closer before using her quirk. When only 3 meters were left between her and the weapon, Ada apparently decided to put an end to the simulation by capturing her. Hiding the capture tape in his back, he activated his engines and ran up to meet her halfway, well aware that her focus was entirely on the weapon behind him. She'd use her quirk again to try and bypass him, and he'd use that opportunity to tie the capture tape around her leg, thus claiming the victory. Just as he thought, she activated her quirk once he got close enough, but not on herself. Wait, what? What is she? Out of nowhere, Uraraka's helmet dropped onto Ida's head. The impact was hard enough to make him lose his balance and focus, and she used that opportunity to cross whatever distance was left between her and the weapon. Just as Ida regained his senses, her hand fell on the weapon, therefore securing it. There was a moment of silence. Then, All Might grabbed the microphone. Hero team wins. Whoa, awesome. That was unexpected. She did it. As the rest of the students started cheering, All Might urged the 2 students to quickly join them in the monitor room just as Yaoyorozu and Bakugo arrived. There was a distinct scowl on the boy's lips, but he didn't say anything and simply went to stand in the back. Well, I'll be damned. Looks like you were right, Rukia, mused Kaminari, running a hand through his hair. That was crazy. I really didn't think she'd make it. She simply smiled at that. I knew she'd figure out something. As if on cue, Uraraka and Ida finally entered the monitor room. Many of the students congratulated them on a job well done, and All Might urged all 4 students who had participated in the first simulation to join him at the front in order to review the battle. Very well. As surprising as this first battle was, there can only be one winner. Congratulations, Team Hero. The 2 girls shared a grin, while Ada lowered his head, and Bakugo's scowl deepened. As for the MVP of this battle, I believe the title would best belong to young Uraraka. No one seemed really surprised, but he took the time to explain. Every single one of you showed overwhelming talent and potential. Young Yaoyorozu, you planned ahead and exploited your opponent's weaknesses. However, you also left yourself wide open. The moment you believed you had won was the moment you stopped thinking, and that led to your capture. She nodded, graciously accepting the critic. Young Bakugo, your reaction time is on par with that of most pro heroes, and you showed a great ability to think and act under pressure. Upon realizing you couldn't win, you made the most logical choice and decided to at least bring down your opponent with you. However, you underestimated your opponents from the start and ran off on your own without consulting with your partner. Chi-Chi, grunted Bakugo, averting his eyes. His fists were clenched, and he was obviously still ruminating his loss. Whatever. All Might deflated a bit at the attitude, but quickly found back his usual energy. Now, for young Ada. Thinking ahead, you managed to almost fully incapacitate your opponent, which gave you a clear advantage in the following battle. However, this advantage also got to your head and blinded you to your opponent's own resources. You instantly assumed she would be powerless and acted accordingly, therefore leaving yourself wide open to a surprise attack. I understand, sir. The poor guy looked like he was about to cry, apparently ashamed of his mistake. It won't happen again. Good, good. And finally, young Uraraka, albeit at a clear disadvantage, you managed to exploit your quirk in a creative way and used young Ida's assumptions against him. While a somewhat risky move, you didn't give up, which allowed you to claim this victory. He offered her a thumbs up. Good job. Thank you, sir. As happy as she was about the praise, Uraraka's adrenaline-induced energy had finally abandoned her. Now, she just looked exhausted and on the verge of throwing up. It was the downside of overusing her quirk, and using it on her own body put an even greater strain on it. Very well, now that you all understand how these battles function, we will change locations and begin the second match, announced All Might, drawing new lots. Then, Team B will play the heroes, while Team I will play the villains. Get in position, everyone. We start again in 5 minutes. Yes, sir. Team B consisted of Todoroki and Shoji, while Team I consisted of Hagakure and Ajiro. As soon as the signal was given, Shoji rushed ahead and used his tentacle-like quirk to create ears at the extremities of his limbs, while Todoroki slowly followed behind him. After a few seconds, one of the ears turned into a mouth. "What is he saying?" asked Kirishima, turning to Rukia. She closed her eyes in order to focus on what she could hear through the wireless radio, and after a moment, she managed to catch bits and pieces. "I think he's telling him about the coordinates of their opponents," she answered, straining a little to hear everything. They weren't as loud as Bakugo, after all, and they weren't using their radios directly. "I think Toru-chan is trying to ambush them, too." And Todoroki-san told Shoji-san to step back. "Wow, so you can really hear everything," mused Kaminari, reaching out to touch one of the furry ears on the top of her head. "It looks soft." "Oh," she huffed, having slapped his hand away. "Don't touch my ears. I'm not a pet. So sorry." "Hey, look, Todoroki's making his move." They all instantly reported their attention to the screens. While Shoji stepped outside, Todoroki froze the entire building. From the basement to the roof, inside and outside, not a single space went unfrozen. In a matter of seconds, everything was covered in ice and frost. Both Hagakure and Ajiro were also frozen in place, ice encasing their legs. Oh, and the monitor room was now freezing cold, too. Well, that was FFF fast, stuttered out Mina. Someone turn on the heat, pleaded Sato, rubbing his arms. Rukia was also cold, but her body was more accustomed to this kind of weather. Although she didn't have any fur, her skin was still naturally impervious to the cold. So, save for a few chills and mild goosebumps, she was unperturbed by the abrupt drop of temperature. He did not cause any damage to his partner or the weapon. And on top of that, he weak immobilized the enemy, summarized All Might, also trembling in place. On the screen, Todoroki claimed the weapon. Hero team wins once more. Upon hearing this, the dual-haired boy used his quirk to emit heat. Steam rolled off the walls and the floor as the ice quickly melted away. In barely 10 seconds, the entire building was back to normal, save for the numerous puddles of steaming water left on the different floors. So he can control both heat and cold? Talk about a crazy strong quirk. Someone scoffed in the back. Furious, Rukia appeared behind her and found Bakugo, leaning against the wall. He had his arms crossed over his chest, and he looked absolutely pissed. Like what? He was finally realizing that he wasn't the top dog anymore. While he may have been at the very top of the food chain back in junior high, UA was different. Here, everyone was incredible and had the potential to become number one. He glared when noticing she was staring at him, and she quickly averted her eyes, instead looking over at Shinso. He hasn't said a word since we got here. He was staying away from the group, watching with a bored expression the battles on screen. He didn't mingle at all, though she could see the tenseness in his shoulders. He was pretty arrogant earlier, but could he actually be a little intimidated by everyone? He acted all confident, but now that he's seeing everyone in action, it puts things back into perspective. Or at least, I hope it does. If not, we're in trouble. The following battle was between Team G, which consisted of Takoyami and Isui, and Team J, which consisted of Aoyama and Mina. The latter were acting as the villain's team, but against a boy who could control a monstrous, sentient shadow, they unfortunately didn't stand much of a chance. Almost as soon as they located the weapon, Takoyami went ahead to distract their opponents, and Aoyama's naval laser along with Mina's acid couldn't do much damage to him. They lost before even realizing it, Isui using her tongue to claim the weapon from afar. The fourth battle between Team C and Team F went a little more surprisingly. Gyro used her quirk to locate their opponents and the weapon, and they quickly found their way to the room where Koda and Sato had taken a defensive stand. Kaminari instantly used his quirk to send a violent discharge through the floor, effectively electrocuting their opponents. While Koda and Sato dropped unconscious, however, Kaminari turned into a fried-brained idiot and became utterly useless. Cursing under her breath, Gyro quickly ran over to the weapon, but just as she touched it, Sato tied a capture tape around her ankle. He was apparently more resilient than they first expected, and he had woken up just as she ran by him. Therefore, with 2 participants incapacitated, another captured, but the weapon also claimed, the match ended in a draw. Then, at last, it was time for the final battle of the day. Rukia entered the building alongside Shinso, rubbing her hands nervously. They had 5 minutes to prepare for the hero team, and her partner still had yet to say anything. Once they reached the weapon room, though, he finally opened his mouth. "Let's formulate a plan." Relief washed over her and she instantly turned to him. Yes, we should. Her voice got caught in her throat. Her eyes widened as she failed to emit a single sound. And mist started clouding her vision, her brain, her judgment. She could feel her control slipping away. Her body growing heavy, not collapsing to the ground, as if it was being held on strings, and there was simply nothing she could do. No, she gripped her head, somehow managing to break out of her daze. Shaking her head a few times and trembling a little, she then looked back to Shinzo who, for the first time since they met, showed something other than boredom or disdain. He was shocked. She bared her teeth, showing off her fangs. "Do not try that shit with me," she growled, her fingers trembling as she slowly straightened up. "I've had enough of people trying to mess with my head. How did you? Your quirk is brainwashing, right? But really, it's more than that. You impose your will upon that of another." For the first time in a long while, now, Rukia felt pissed. She was used to controlling herself and holding back. But this wasn't a matter she was ready to take lightly. You can't just do that to someone who's on your side. Don't go using your abilities so thoughtlessly. "It's my quirk," he replied defensively. "It's what I do. To villains. You want to be a hero. Then don't go treating people like tools," she snapped, roughly poking his chest. "You have an incredible quirk, one that has the potential to help people, but for that to happen, you need to get your priorities straight." Her anger mellowed out a bit at that. With a power like that, you have a greater responsibility than many other people. There are choices you have to make, and the line between what's right and what's wrong is even thinner. However, that simply means you'll have to work even harder in order to ensure you don't ever cross that line. She straightened her back, looking at him right in the eyes. "We're fighting on the same side, and that means we need to work together. If you don't think you can do that, then I'll give up here and now, and we'll lose this battle without even trying to win it. Do you understand?" He narrowed his eyes at that, obviously gauging the seriousness of her threat. After a few seconds, though, he realized that she meant it. If he didn't agree to work with her, she'd give up. And that meant he wouldn't get to show off his skills and wouldn't get to train like all of the other students. And where would that lead him? Certainly not toward becoming a hero. "Fine, I'll do it," he gave in. He still didn't understand how she managed to resist his quirk, or why she even knew so much about it, but they didn't have any time left. "I take it you have a plan, then?" She nodded firmly at that. "I do. Follow my lead." "Wow, I don't think I've ever seen Rukia angry before," mused Kaminari. "What do you think he said to make her react like that?" Whatever it was, she obviously set him straight. Sweat dropped Gyro. "Well, at least it looks like they're working together now," pointed out Uraraka. On the screen, they could see Rukia quickly explaining something to the purple-haired boy whom, after a few seconds, simply nodded. Nodding back, the girl then took off at once and left the room. "Very well. Without further ado, let us begin the final battle of the day," announced All Might for all to hear. "Start. They don't know about your quirk, which puts us at an advantage. Can you use it on more than one person at the time?" "Yes, but it can't happen simultaneously, and they need to verbally answer to me. In that case, I'll separate them. You stay here to protect the weapon, and I'll go ahead and force them to split up." "Man, this is scary," gulped Zero, nervously looking around. "Rukia's pretty strong, and we don't know anything about the new guy. And don't you feel like we're being watched?" "So you've noticed?" Both boys practically jumped and spun around to face none other than Rukia, who had somehow sneaked up behind them without making a single noise. She simply stared at them, the silence stretching for a moment, before she grinned, and a chill ran down their spines. Then, fur grew up her arms as her hands turned into paws, claws as sharp as razor blades growing out. At once, she pounced on them with a beastly snarl, and, seeing as they had been standing at a crossroad, they instantly split off in opposite directions. Without wasting a second, Rukia started pursuing Kirishima, not even sparing a thought for Zero. She knew Shinzo could handle him. "Well, I didn't expect her to go after them like that," admitted Yaoyorozu, examining the ongoing simulation with a mild frown. "It's pretty reckless. Kirishima-kun's faster than I thought, though," remarked Hagakure, bouncing in place. "He's easily staying ahead of Rukia, and he's drawing her away from the weapon room. It's not that he's fast, she's letting him get away on purpose." All eyes snapped to Todoroki at that. He hadn't really participated in the analysis up till now, so they were surprised. He's not the one drawing her away from the weapon room, she's the one winning time. "Now that you mention it, I thought it was strange for her to not have caught up to him yet," admitted Gyro, reporting her attention to the screens. "She scored even better than Eda when it came to speed, remember? However, if she's hoping to capture Kirishima-kun, then there's no point in drawing things out," frowned Eda, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Why not engage directly?" "Because she can't," grunted Bakugo, still in the back. His previous anger had simmered down and, while he still looked pissed, he was now paying close attention to the ongoing battle. He'll use his own quirk to harden his body and cut the capture tape before she can tie it around him. And if it gets cut in two, it won't be long enough for her to capture him. I think that's the first time I've ever heard you say something without being a downright jerk about it. Sweat dropped Kaminari. What was that? Bakugo-san is right. Cut in Yaoyorozu before an argument could break out. She's being cautious, and she's surely planning something else. We can only wait and see for now. Oh, it looks like Shiro-san made it to the weapon room. Although he was still a little miffed at having being told off by the wolf girl, Shinso could see the merit in her plan, and, since she could apparently resist his quirk, he didn't have much of a choice but to go along with it. So, as instructed, he simply stood before the weapon, awaiting the arrival of the boy she had identified earlier as Shiro Hanta. He didn't have to wait for too long. Found you. Shiro sent his tape without wasting a second, obviously aiming to immobilize him before he could use his quirk. Shinso didn't even bother trying to avoid it, and got caught. Well, that was easy, sweat dropped the boy, pulling out the capture tape. What's your name? Simply asked Shinso, unperturbed. His opponent stopped moving. I don't know your quirk, so I can't risk telling you. But, unfortunately for him, Shinso didn't need his name, he only needed him to talk back. Shiro instantly fell under his control and, with little effort, he freed himself from the tape. Well, time to get this over with. The target has been acquired. Rukia stopped running, activating her radio. How much time do you need? 2 minutes. You got it. It was a good thing the pieces were finally starting to fall into place, because Kirishima was obviously done running too. He had probably been thinking about keeping her away from Shiro so the boy could go and try to secure the weapon, but what he didn't know was that they would have had a better chance at making it had they both gone after it. They faced each other in the narrow hallways, claws out and skin hardened. I didn't think we'd end up fighting so soon, remarked Kirishima, taking a defensive stance. I won't hold back, though. Good, me neither. She pounced, eager to strike first. There was no denying that she enjoyed fighting, and the adrenaline rush was a high she didn't get to experience all that often. Sparring and training with Aizawa and a few other pros had been a good way to learn, but she still lacked experience. Experience she now had the opportunity to gain in facing off with people as inexperienced as her, with people she wasn't used to fight, with people who definitely wouldn't hold back their punches in fear of hurting her. Here, she was standing on equal grounds with her opponent, and she intended to make the most of it. She moved too fast and he raised his arms in order to defend himself, but she used those amine to propel herself above him before landing on the other side, a little confused by her sudden action. He then noticed the radio she was now holding between her claws. That's yours, she confirmed, smirking a bit. Without much of a thought, she crushed it. You won't need it anymore. What happened to Shiro? What is he doing? Could it be that new guy's quirk? Look, Rukia took away Kirishima's radio. Gah, she broke it. I hope it wasn't too expensive. There's too much stuff happening at once, despaired Ashido, not knowing where to look. Shiro's acting weird and Eru-chan's being a badass, and Kirishima is pretty cool too. And that new guy is super creepy, yet apparently super powerful. What's going on? Brainwashing is the name of his quirk. It allows him to control one or many people, and make them do whatever he commands, then explained All Might. The downside of such a powerful quirk is that it can only work if the target verbally responds to him. Wah, that sounds more like a villain's quirk, gaped Kaminari. So he can make anyone do anything he wants, added worriedly Hagakure. It can only be done intentionally. If young Shinso does not wish to use it, then it will not take effect, just like many other quirks, corrected calmly All Might. He understood their reactions, but they were in the wrong, and it was his job as their teacher to correct them. Any quirk can be evil if wielded by evil people, and any quirk can be good if wielded by good people. A quirk does not make the hero or the villain. It is an individual's will and intentions that decide how a quirk will be used. Do not forget that it is nothing more than a tool, and while some quirks can affect people's appearances or personalities, no one is born inherently good or bad, and a quirk does not define someone's nature. All right, sorry, apologized Kaminari, properly chastised. Oh, look, Kirishima tried to capture her. Instantly, everyone looked to the screen on the left, where Rukia had just barely managed to avoid getting caught. It looked like their own fight was still going strong, what with neither of them willing to give up any ground. Then, probably getting too caught up in the heat of the moment, Rukia miscalculated the distance between her and the wall, and she harshly hit her head when she tried to back away from him. She stumbled back, obviously a little stunned by the unexpected blow, and her opponent didn't waste any time in throwing another punch. Much to everyone's surprise, though, she didn't even attempt to avoid or deflect it, and took it right in the face. Whoa, ouch, that's going to leave a mark. Rukia stumbled back some more, blood now trickling down her face. Kirishima instantly dropped his stance, worry taking over. Shit, are you okay? You hit harder than I expected, she groaned, before shaking her head. But don't lower your guard in the middle of a fight. Before he could reply, she pounced on him once again. He managed to block her punch, but that left his lower body wide open, and she kicked him in the guts without a second thought. While his hardened body softened the blow, it was still enough to knock the air out of him, and he stumbled back, pain throbbing in his abdomen. It might sound a little crazy, but getting hurt gets my blood running wild. She was grinning like she never did before, an animalistic, dangerous aura now emanating from her, and the blood still trickling down her nose and her face made her look even scarier. Ready for round 2. That was unexpected, he admitted, a little out of breath. He hardened his body once more and hit his fists together, a feral expression that could almost match her own on his face. All right, give it all you've got. Then everything's in place. We only have a few minutes left, so get moving. Shinso's voice suddenly snapped her back to reality. In the midst of the fight, she had completely forgotten about the actual goal of the simulation. His sudden announcement helped her clear her head a bit. Without another look for Kirishima, she took off in the opposite direction. What? Come back here. You can't just run away after saying that. Sorry, but you'll have to catch me if you want that round 2. She taunted, already way ahead of him. She paused at a corner, smirking. Though, looks like that won't happen anytime soon. What with how slow you are? I'll show you slow. Phew, that sudden hit scared me, but it looks like she'll be fine after all, sweat dropped Kaminari. Still, to bypass Kirishima-kun's quirk, she must have hit him hard enough to shatter a normal person's ribs, remarked Asui in a slightly too casual tone for someone who spoke of breaking bones. Well, she scored pretty high in the strength test too, recalled Sato. She almost beat my own record. And she wasn't too far behind Shoji, too. Why did she run off so suddenly, though? Wondered Uraraka, puzzled. Because they're done setting up the stage. Answered Ida, a tad cryptically. I believe the battle will soon draw to an end. What do you mean? What do you mean? Asked excitedly Hagakure. Contrarily to what some might believe, Rukia wasn't trying to lose Kirishima. In fact, she was just slow enough to ensure he was still pursuing her. After a minute or so of the chasing game, they finally reached the last floor, where the weapon was situated. Incoming, she warned through her radio. Roger. She passed through the door and entered the room, diving to the left. A few seconds later, Kirishima also ran through the door and rushed ahead without thinking twice, and instantly got tangled up in an incredible amount of tape. What? He then noticed Zero, who was standing on the side without moving. Oi, Zero, what are you doing, helping the other team? He's not aware of anything right now, simply stated Shinso, walking into his field of vision. The boy was barely a meter ahead, and the weapon was just behind him. It was so close, you won't be able to move at all, and you'll only get more tangled up if you struggle. Damn it, it was true. With the amount of tape that had been set up in a protective barrier around the weapon, he had no hope of breaking free once he got caught. In that very moment, he understood how a fly felt when it got caught in a spider's web. Sorry, Ijiro-kun. Rukia suddenly appeared beside him, careful not to touch any of the tapes. She then wrapped her own capture tape around his arm. Looks like the villains win this time around. Without a word, Shinso also placed his tape around Zero. He had waited until now to do so, since All Might would have surely announced the boy's disqualification for everyone to hear, meaning Kirishima would have heard and wouldn't have acted as recklessly. Villains team wins. Congratulations on a job well done. Come join us in the monitor room at once so we can have our last battle review of the day. Well, that was a lame way to lose, sighed Kirishima, deactivating his quirk. Sorry. Rukia quickly helped him free himself and offered him a sheepish smile. We'll fight again later, and I'll make it up to you, all right? Well, you got me fair and square, so I guess I don't really have any room to complain. Stretching his arms a bit, he then frowned when noticing the blood still covering her face. I'm really sorry about that. I didn't think you wouldn't even try to dodge. Are you okay? It's only natural to get hurt when fighting, Ijiro-kun, she chuckled, quickly waving off his worries. I'll be fine. Don't feel bad, all right. It was a great fight and, well, I had fun. He relaxed a bit at that, returning her smile. Yeah, me too. Let's spar again later, all right. Will do. Then, she turned to her partner and smiled. Good job, Shinso-san. Everything worked out thanks to you. It was your plan, he replied flatly. And it wouldn't have worked had you not been there, or had it not been you, she retorted without missing a beat. I still don't really get what happened, but good job, praised Kirishima, grinning. Welcome to the A class. Ugh, my head. What happened? At Zero's confused inquiry, Kirishima instantly rushed to his side to explain everything. While he did that, Rukia approached Shinso, who appeared lost, for a lack of better terms. Deciding to leave him mull over his thoughts for now, she simply turned to the other two. We shouldn't make the others wait any longer, she simply stated. Let's go. Nodding, albeit Zero was still very confused, the others then followed her outside. And the MVP for this battle was young Shinso Hitoshi-kun. Can someone explain why? Because he acted rationally and managed to handle the situation in an efficient, quick maneuver. He worked in tandem with Rukia-chan and set up a foolproof plan in a matter of minutes, therefore allowing them to claim the victory, instantly explained Yaoyorozu. Shiro-sen underestimated his opponent and got caught too quickly. Kirishima-sen fought well and could have won, had he not lost his cool and rushed ahead without thinking. As for Rukia-chan, she also did a good job of working in a coordinated manner with Shinso-san, but she acted recklessly and got hurt because of it. She also lost herself in the heat of the battle, which could have very well turned the situation against them had Shinso-san not been there. Once again, a very thorough and very correct explanation. Nodded firmly All Might. It is as you've said. The heroes were caught without suffering a single injury, and the building didn't suffer any damage either. It was truly a well-fought battle. Congratulations, young men and young lady. He then turned to the rest of the students. In fact, good work everyone. We didn't have any major or serious injuries, and you guys took this seriously. You all did a very good job for your first hero basic training class. He pulled out a slip of paper and handed it to Rukia. Go and have Recovery Girl take a look at your injury in your head to make sure there's no issue. The rest of you, go get changed and return to the classroom. Goodbye. On which All Might disappeared with a blast of wind, startling the students. It took them a few seconds to realize he was actually gone. Well, to have a proper physical class after Aizawa-sensei. Somehow, it feels a little anticlimactic, pointed out Asui. Still, it was pretty fun, and All Might was amazing. Gasped Hagakure. He left in quite the hurry, though, remarked Ajiro, a tad puzzled. What was that about? Everyone, we shouldn't waste any more time and do as we were instructed. Then urged Yaoyorozu, hands on her hips. Right, we have to get going. The faster we return to the classroom, the faster we get to leave, and then we can finally go hang out together like we planned last Monday, exclaimed excitedly Ashido, pumping her fist in the air. She then paused, before gasping. That's right. Me, Shinso-kun. Do you want to come with us? We're going to a restaurant together after school to get to know each other better, explained Shiro, patting his shoulder. You're welcome to join us. At that, Shinso shot him a puzzled look. Aren't you afraid of me? Nan, your quirk was fair game. After all, shrugged the boy, grinning a bit. I'll just be more careful next time we fight each other. I mean, I was a little creeped out at first. But All Might's right, the quirk doesn't define a person's nature, added Kaminari, nodding to himself. Plus, it's a super useful quirk for a hero, added cheerfully Uraraka. You can immobilize villains in the blink of an eye, and reduce property damage and injury hazard to the bare minimum. With the proper costume, there are many ways you could exploit your quirk even more, added Ada, pushing up his glasses. There's truly a lot of potential to be found. Shinso paused, obviously unsure of what to say. For the first time since he joined their class earlier, genuine surprise was apparent on his face. Then, he instinctively looked over at Rukia, her earlier words echoing in his head. You want to be a hero? Then don't go treating people like tools. I think I'll pass for tonight, he finally answered, averting his eyes. I have other plans. All right. Ashido visibly deflated, but she quickly found back her usual cheer. Well, no matter. You can always join us next time around. Right. Very well, everyone. Let us head back to the classroom at once, urged Ada, marching toward the door. And Rukia-san, please head to the infirmary immediately. A hero shouldn't overlook their injuries, no matter how small or insignificant they may appear to be. You've hit your head pretty hard against the wall, too, recalled Uraraka, frowning a bit. You really should go see Recovery Girl and make sure there isn't any problem. So you're politely telling me to get my head checked? Uraraka instantly started trying to correct herself, but Rukia simply laughed. I'm teasing. I'll be going, then. I'll see you guys in a few minutes, all right. Wait, I'll come with. Kirishima trailed off as the girl passed the door without another look back. She, too, was apparently in a hurry. Ugh, I still feel bad about that hit. With the strength she put into that kick earlier, you really shouldn't, snorted Kaminari, patting his back in comfort. Let's just go. She'll be fine, and she'll be back before we know it. Right. As it turned out, Rukia did not, in fact, make her way to the infirmary. Instead, she went to the teacher's lounge, where she knew she would find her legal guardian. Once there, she knocked at the door, then entered. Upon seeing her, Aizawa instantly gave her a flat stare. The infirmary is down the hall. I know. I also know that you always keep a first aid kit around, Shota-san, she replied, quickly walking up to his desk. Thankfully enough, he was alone in the room right now, so she could allow herself some familiarity. You have 3 at home, so I wouldn't be surprised if you've got twice the amount here. You're a little paranoid like that, says the girl who doesn't want to go to the infirmary. She pouted, but didn't say anything else and sat in the chair in front of him. Heaving out a sigh, he got up, knowing this wouldn't be a battle he was going to win. Opening a drawer, he pulled out a first aid kit before coming to join her, and he checked her injury. There was a lot of blood, but mostly because it was a head wound, and it was already coagulating. Quickly wiping it away, he soon found the source of it, a small gash right in the middle of the bridge of her nose. This is going to scar if you let it heal naturally. he warned, carefully cleaning it with some alcohol. All right, he sighed again at that. Stubborn girl. But that was probably a trait she had acquired after so many years of living with him, so, really, he was the only one to blame. Finishing cleaning the small wound, it was about half a thumb's length. He then placed a bandage on it. There, done. Now get out of here. Didn't you have something planned with your friends? All right. She jumped to her feet, then paused. Friends? After a moment, a small smile graced her lips, and she ran toward the door. Just as she reached it, though, she paused in the doorway and looked back to Aizawa, who was already back behind his desk, the first aid kit nowhere to be seen. Thanks, Shota-san. I'll see you later. On which she left. It's only once the door slid shut behind her that Aizawa allowed his lips to twitch upward as he returned to filling his paperwork. He couldn't deny that it was nice to see Rukia finally making some friends. I am back. Sorry for making you wait. Todoroki, Bakugo, and Shinso were gone, not much of a surprise there. The others, however, were all present and accounted for, and Rukia couldn't stop her smile from widening upon seeing them all waiting for her. Friends, was it? Oh, Eru-chan, didn't you go to the infirmary? Why do you have a bandage on? Frowned Ashido, worried. It's fine. She wasn't there, so I simply did what I could with what I could find, she answered quickly. Kirishima clasped his hands together, bowing. I'm really sorry about that. Stop apologizing already, Aijiro-kun, she chuckled, shaking her head. I'm fine, more than fine, really. Don't worry about it. All right, everyone, let us waste no more time. Suddenly exclaimed Ida. Let's go, if we wish to follow our respective schedules. Even outside of school, he's a little intense. Sweat dropped Kaminari. Gosh, let's all go and have some fun, guys, cheered Hagakure, jumping in the air. Yeah, chorused the others. As everyone started walking out, Rukia got swept up in the flow and soon found herself walking alongside Uraraka, Ashido, and Kirishima. Everyone was chatting excitedly about their previous training class, or talking about some moves they wanted to try out. And isn't it cool to have All Might as a teacher? And it was noisy and full of people, but for once, Rukia didn't dislike it. Friends, has a nice ring to it. Isn't this nice? All of those future heroes, getting along so nicely. Are you envious? No, nothing like that. I was simply thinking that they should enjoy their precious peace while it lasts, is all. They're all so blind, still. It hurts to see them so ignorant, you know. Let's just go. Seeing those wannabe heroes makes me want to puke. On which the two hooded figures walked away from the restaurant, one madly scratching his neck and ripping off skin while the other wrote something down in his notebook, grinning. In the restaurant, the students of Classa kept on laughing and enjoying their time together, unaware of the dangerous attention they had garnered. The evening spent with everyone had been nice. The food had been good and cheap, and everyone had a good time. Spending time with her classmates outside of school showed Rukia just how little she knew about them, and she had a fun time getting to know them better. By the time everyone decided to call it night and headed back home, she was tired, but satisfied. So that's what having friends is like. Her good mood spread over to the next day. Waking up in the morning with unusual cheer, she quickly got dressed and ready for the day. Since it was her only day off now that she had started attending UA, she had many chores to accomplish and homework to do. Deciding to do it later in the day, she instead decided to start with the grocery shopping. When she arrived, she suddenly recalled that fateful day when the villain attack happened. That's where I ran into Aijiro-kun, Todoroki-san, and Tetsu-san. Speaking of which, though, I wonder how he's doing. We haven't seen him once since school started. As she slowly made her way through the different aisles to pick up the groceries she needed, though, a familiar name caught her ears. Thank you so much, Katsuki-kun. Don't mention it. Curiosity getting the best of her, she peered over the shelves and looked in direction of the doors, where none other than Bakugo Katsuki was standing. He was holding two heavy-looking grocery bags, and there was a woman beside him. She was hunched over, with green hair tied in a somewhat messy bun, and she looked incredibly tired. No, I'm really thankful for your help, insisted the woman. Pain shone in her eyes, and she lowered her head. Ever since my little Izuku went missing, you're the one who's been helping me. You and your family have been so good to me. It's only natural, Inko-san. Come on, let's go. You always get sick when you come shopping with me, you know. You should be more careful. It was strange. There was no other way to describe the situation. In the week they had spent together, without ever really conversing, she had come to know him as a loud, vulgar, and brash boy who couldn't care less about what other people thought or felt. He wasn't the type of guy who helped old ladies carry their groceries. But then again, what do you actually know about him? Replied a little voice in the back of her head. Seeing him so calm and subdued put him in a whole different light. He was talking softly, softer than she ever thought possible for him, and he looked genuinely caring about the woman. She wasn't his mother, that much was obvious, so why was he acting like this? What piece of the puzzle was she missing? Should I go say hi? It'd be awkward, but I really want to know. But then, Bakugo and the woman left the store, and Rukia realized that it would probably be better if she didn't question him about it. For one reason or the other, he acted differently with that woman than he did with the people at school, both students and teachers alike. Whatever bond they shared was surely special, and it simply wasn't Rukia's place to question it. So, forgetting about the strange occurrence, she simply returned to her shopping. Well, looks like you were right, Shota-san. What about? It did scar. Rukia healed faster than most, and the wound hadn't been deep. However, the way the skin had been cut had left a small, overturned crescent-shaped scar on the bridge of her nose, and a light purplish bruise had also bloomed all around it. It wasn't big, and it'd be gone in a day or two at most, but the scar would be there to stay. I hope Ijiro-kun won't feel too bad. That's what you get for not going to the nurse, sighed Shota-san, running a hand through his hair. Why do you always do that? I just don't like places like the hospital. I know that, but you've met Recovery Girl before, so why is it still such an issue? She heaved out a sigh, leaving the bathroom to join him in the living room. She wasn't too sure of the answer herself, so she took a moment to think it over while she settled at the table just in front of him while he sat on the couch. He was busy reading the newspaper, but she knew he was paying attention. I know I can trust her, but I'm still scared, she finally admitted, lowering her eyes. It's stupid, I know that, but I can't help it. Every time I see a white coat, every time I smell the antiseptics, every time I set foot in a room that's filled to the brim with drugs and white eye, I remember everything and I just get this irrepressible fear that freezes me in place and forces me to think back to that time. It wasn't the first time she mentioned that particular issue, and Aizawa knew it was the kind of trauma that would follow her entire life. Who could blame her for that, really? She was already lucky enough not to suffer from actual PTSD, but it looked like there were still a few psychological scars bothering her. Looking up from the news he was reading, he found her with her head hanging low, in shame, with her ears flattened pitifully against her head. Sighing again, he put away his newspaper and opened his arms. Come on, get over here. She didn't have to be told twice. Albeit a little childish, she wasn't about to pass up the opportunity. Shota-san wasn't a touchy-feely person by nature, and he rarely offered physical affection, save for the occasional pat on the head. So, she didn't waste any time in going to sit next to him and wrapping her arms around him, his own closing on her. They stayed like that for a moment, neither of them saying anything. I'm tired of being scared, she finally admitted. It's normal to be scared, he simply replied. And it's only been 6 years, Rukia. It's not the kind of experience you'll forget so easily. I know that, but it's frustrating. She pulled away, clenching her fists. I've already lost so many years of my life because of those people. What I went through. I don't want this to hold me back. I'm training to become a hero, damn it. I shouldn't be so scared anymore. Aizawa's hand fell on her head, warm and comforting. His head pats were always a little rough and awkward, but she had grown to like them. Being a hero doesn't mean not being scared of anything, he then stated. It means overcoming our fears to do what's right. For other people, yes, but for ourselves too. Pulling his hand away, he then picked up his newspaper again. Drop by the infirmary to say hi to Recovery Girl once a day. Keep it short and simple, and you'll eventually get used to it. It won't be easy nor fun, but that's the best way to give the middle finger to your past. Unable to help it, she laughed. Count on her precious mentor to make it sound so simple, seriously. However, it felt as if a switch had been flipped, and she felt a lot lighter now. Thanks, Shota-san. I'll do that. Good. I have no intention of becoming your personal nurse. He was saying that, but she knew for a fact that, if she ever showed up injured, be it at his office or at home, he'd treat her wounds without a second thought. He'd curse and whine and scold her, but he'd do it anyway, and she'd assuredly do the same if the roles were reversed. They were pack, after all. Gah, I'm so sorry. Your face. Now, I told you not to make a big deal out of it, chuckled Rukia, shaking her head. She then grinned, pointing at his own scar, the one above his eye. Plus, you've got a similar one right there. We match now. After a few seconds, Kirishima returned her smile, albeit hesitantly. I guess so. Still, I'll find some way to make it up to you. She simply rolled her eyes but nodded, understanding he wouldn't be deterred so easily. And they started making their way to the school together. All right, welcome back everyone. I understand this morning was a little hectic, but forget about it and let's move on to more important matters. It was time to start the second week of school. However, upon arriving at the gates, all of the UA students had been forced to shove their way through a crowd of journalists and paparazzi who had apparently gotten wind of All Might's status as a teacher. Thankfully, none of them could actually enter the school's grounds, seeing as anyone who tried to pass the gates without a special ID would cause them to automatically shut down. But it had still been pretty annoying to deal with. Many students had been late to class that morning. Let's get down to some homeroom business, announced Aizawa, looking even scruffier than on the first day of school. Sorry about the late notice, but today I'll have you decide on a class representative. A normal school activity. That's great, though I want to be class rep. Pick me, exclaimed Kirishima, eagerly jumping to his feet. Me too, concurred Kaminari. I want to do it too, added Gyro, raising her hand. It's a job made for me, assured Aoyama, as sparkly as ever. I'll be the leader, shouted gleefully Ashido. Let me do it. Me, yelled angrily Bakugo, slamming his fist on his desk. Silence, please. At Ida's exclamation, the chaos instantly died down. Class representative is a job with the serious responsibility of leading others. It is not a job for just anyone who wants to do it. It is a calling that requires the trust of those around you. If we want to use democracy to decide on a true leader, then we should hold an election to choose one. But your hand is raised the highest, protested some of the students. Guys. All eyes turned to Rukia, who shyly raised her hand. What's a class representative, exactly? Hey, you don't know that. Oh, right, you were homeschooled. I heard what Ida-san said, but what does that position entail, specifically? I just don't know what kind of duty a class representative has to fulfill, she admitted, a little embarrassed. A class representative is a person who represents the views of their classmates about academic matters and the likes, explained Yaoyorozu with a small, understanding smile. It's someone who is present for the students and who looks out for them. If something is the matter with the quality of the education received, for example, or if the students feel slighted by a teacher or any other issue that is school-related, then the class representative handles it. I see. Thanks, Momo-chan. She then scrunched up her nose. Sounds like a pretty bothersome job, though. Why would anyone want to do that? Isn't it just adding to your academic workload? Well, you're not wrong about that, sighed Takoyami, his arms crossed over his chest. However, a class representative, even in a normal school, is a greatly respected and yearned for the position. It basically tells everyone that you're a trustworthy and dependable person, and it looks good on a resume when you apply for a job, added Anjiro. And since we're in UA, it's even more of a big deal, exclaimed Hagakure. I understand. Now, nodded Rukia, glad she wasn't being mocked or judged for her ignorance on such an allegedly important matter. Thank you. Are we done wasting time or what? Name me class rep already, snapped Bakugo. No way. Choose me. No, pick me. Everyone, calm down, urged Ida, quickly stepping in before chaos could take over again. As I said earlier, we should do this in an efficient way and hold an election. Even if you say that, though, won't we all just end up voting for ourselves? Pointed out Kaminari. We haven't known each other for that long. It's only been a week, after all, added thoughtfully Asui. That is precisely why whoever receives the most votes here can be considered the most suitable person for this position, insisted I think we should do it, then stated Rukia. Everyone writes their names at the top of a paper, and then they write the name of the person they believe would be best suited for the job, someone other than themselves, that is. That way, the person with the most votes is definitely the person deserving of that role, right? Whatever you do, do it before homeroom is over. If not, I'll pick someone myself and you'll have to deal with it, mourned Aizawa, snuggled in his yellow sleeping bag. You have 10 minutes to figure something out, on which he laid down on the floor to catch a 10-minute nap. Upon hearing this, everyone quickly agreed to the method suggested by Rukia, and 5 minutes later, all of the papers were gathered at the front. Since it was her idea, Rukia volunteered to count the votes and quickly wrote the results on the board. In first place was Yaoyorozu, in second place was Ida, and in third place was herself. Why did I get votes? She asked, puzzled. Herself had voted for Yaoyorozu, but she hadn't expected to end up in third place, with 5 votes to her name. Thankfully enough, though, being third place didn't mean anything. Yaoyorozu was named class representative and, albeit a little miffed about losing the title of class rep, Ida graciously accepted his second place and the position of deputy class rep that came with it. After what, Aizawa concluded homeroom, looking as bored as ever. Very well, now that that's been dealt with, let's move on with our day. Phew, talk about boring classes, groaned Kirishima, taking a seat. In the end, they're just like any other schools, added Ashido, slumping back in her chair. And, after a while, even pro-heroes become your usual teachers? Mused Gyro, sitting to her right. Present Mike's too intense. I don't get a word he's saying, whined Kaminari, taking the seat next to her. Rukia, you're pretty good in English, right? Pointed out Siro. How come? I was homeschooled by Aizawa-sensei. But he couldn't possibly teach me everything I needed to know, so he asked some of his colleagues to drop by a few times a week to give me proper lessons, answered Rukia, sitting down next to Kirishima. Present Mike and Midnight are good friends of his, although he'd never admit it out loud. So you're saying that you have a lot of connections amongst pro-heroes? Blinked Mina. Well, not connections, more like close acquaintances. She frowned a little. I don't want to think of them like that. For me, heroes are normal people too, so I always had a hard time idolizing them as others do. Oh. She stopped when noticing a familiar mess of purple hair passing by. Shinso-san, come and sit with us. The others startled a bit at her unexpected offer, and the boy stopped walking, apparently surprised at being called out so suddenly. After a moment, noticing her eager eyes and the friendly grins the others were giving him, he gave in and took the last seat. Hey, I've been curious about it since you joined our class last week. But are you and Aizawa-sensei related by any chance? Instantly asked Kaminari. No, why? You look a lot alike. And you talk the same, too, replied Ashido, pointing at his hair. You have similar hairstyles, and the same scruffy, I couldn't care less look. I was born that way. Mina, stop scaring him. Sweat dropped Gyro, patting the girl's shoulder. Though, I was meaning to ask, but how come you weren't in the hero course in the first place? At that, his traits hardened a bit. Because the practical exam is a joke. Destroying robots. A quirk like mine doesn't work that way. Not everyone has the chance to be born with a flashy, physically powerful quirk, but that's unfortunately what society focuses on when it comes to producing heroes. Hopefully, that'll change soon enough, replied Rukia in a surprisingly firm tone. I've spoken about it a few times with Aizawa-sensei and some of his friends, and everyone I've talked to agrees that our current system is flawed, or at least in that sense. She started playing with her food a bit, not really hungry. Many people with great potential are being overlooked every year, and that's a serious loss for our society. That's why, as future heroes, I think it's our job to ensure that things start changing. Wow, I didn't think you could get this passionate about this sort of stuff, mused Kaminari. She instantly flushed red, the strange solemnity of the moment broken. So sorry, I tend to get a little carried about that subject. It's fine. It's good to be passionate about some things, Rukia, grinned Kirishima, offering her a thumbs up. And I think you're right. I never really thought about it before, but that's clearly an issue we have to resolve as future pro heroes. And if what you're saying is true, then there's already Aizawa-sensei and many other pro heroes supporting that cause, pointed out Gyro, smiling a bit. If we all start working on it, turning things around doesn't sound like a completely crazy idea. Flashy quirks are strong quirks, and heroes need to be strong in order to save everyone, stated Zero, thinking it over. It's not entirely wrong, but it just makes me think of what All Might told us the other day. You know, how a quirk doesn't define a person. Even if you say that, it's kind of hard to believe it, even more so for civilians. So you're saying that the best way to make things change would be to change the general public's idea first. Understood, Kaminari, scratching his head. Sounds complicated enough. Then maybe we should start testing a person's character instead of a person's quirk. And without means as biased as a simple destroy and conquer simulation, remarked lightly Rukia, before glancing at the one who had stayed silent throughout the whole conversation. What do you think, Shinso-san? You're pretty close to Aizawa-sensei, aren't you? He asked, a little out of the blue. He looked unconcerned, but his eyes were sharp as they bored into her. And you share the same name, too. Are you his daughter or something? Well, we're not related by blood, but he's my legal guardian. Why? What does that have to do with anything? She wondered, confused. He simply scoffed at that. Nothing. I simply thought that, for all of your mighty talk, you got it pretty easy. Raised by a hero, grew up surrounded by heroes, a powerful quirk atop of that, and just enough connections to get you anywhere you'd like, even UA. If you ask nicely enough, do you play vigilantes at night too? And they let you off the hook when they catch you? She frowned at that, and a certain tension fell upon the group. Hey, it's nothing like that, man, quickly assured Kirishima, frowning too. She went through the practical exam just like everyone else, and she got second place thanks to her own efforts. Her relations have nothing to do with where she is now. And you saw firsthand what she was capable of during training, remember, added Ashido a little defensively. Rukia is already one of the top students of our class, and that's all on her. Aizawa-sensei doesn't treat her any differently than the rest of us, added Kaminari, for once not feeling like joking around. Had it not been for her last name, we wouldn't even have known they were related in the first place. We were a little worried at first, too, relented Zero, sparing a brief, apologizing glance for the wolf girl. She simply shook her head, not minding it. Everyone thought the same things you're thinking now. But we've quickly come to realize that she's simply not the kind of person who'd have accepted the easy way, and even if it had been given to her. Gyro smiled at Rukia, who smiled back. She's a hard worker, and she deserves her place in this course just as much as the rest of us. Maybe not, finally replied Shinso, leaning back in his seat. Then, a taunting smirk graced his lips. One way or another, it sure is great to be born lucky. That struck a chord. Rukia's head snapped up and her fangs grew a bit, her yellowish eyes gleaming eerily. Before she could say anything, though, some sort of alarm suddenly started ringing in not only the cafeteria, but apparently the entire school. All of the students froze in place, unsure of what it meant. There has been a level 3 security breach. All students, please evacuate outdoors promptly. What does that mean? gasped Ashido, looking frantically around in hopes of finding an answer. All around them, the rest of the students were in a panic, rushing out of the cafeteria in order to evacuate the grounds. Chaos had taken over, the alarm was still ringing, and there was simply no way to make head or tails of the situation. It means there's someone who broke into the school, then informed Rukia, jumping to her feet. A trespasser who got in without using an ID and somehow managed to bypass the sensors and the first level of security. It was written in the pamphlet. Right, I didn't read the part about the emergency procedures, admitted sheepishly Kirishima. I didn't think I'd ever need to know that. Anyway, we should hurry up and get out of here, urged Gyro, looking rightfully worried. If everyone's panicking like that, then there must be something wrong. Come on, let's get out of here, urged Kaminari, leaving their lunches and their previous argument behind. They also quickly made their way toward the exit. However, with everyone panicking, the hallways were literally filled to the brim with students shoving each other left and right, some crushed against the walls while others fell on the floor and got trampled a bit. This is madness. There's no way we're getting out of here like that. Guys, follow me, urged Rukia, gesturing for them to come back inside the cafeteria. I know another way out, come on. Having no better options, the others followed her, quickly making their way across the now empty cafeteria. They, however, stopped when Rukia opened the doors leading to the kitchen. Wait, we're not supposed to go in there, protested Kaminari. It's fine, we're just passing through. There's another door that leads to the hallway where the teacher's lounge is located, she explained in a calm, leveled tone. There's an emergency exit on the floor below, so we'll simply have to go down 2 flights of stairs once we've exited the kitchen, and then we'll be outside. How do you know all that? That's not on the map, is it? I found it last week, by accident. I had forgotten something in the teacher's lounge and, upon coming back, I ran into Lunkrush. Now, are we going or what? In the end, they didn't really have much of a choice. It was either that or getting crushed by the panicking mass of students still stuck in the hallway. So, they all fell in step with her, passing through the kitchen while being careful not to touch anything. The last thing they wanted was to get in trouble for being where they weren't supposed to be, after all. When they reached the other side, the hallway was completely empty. Well, looks like we'll have a much easier time getting out, mused Gyro. Still, I wonder what this was all about, frowned Kirishima, who could have possibly trespassed onto UA's grounds. The media answered flatly Shinso. They probably found a way to make their way through the gates despite the security, and now they're causing trouble. Well, it's true that they were pretty stubborn this morning, but could they really have gotten in so easily? Wondered Siro, puzzled. I mean, UA's security system is one of the greatest in the country. Surely they'd have something planned to handle an issue like that without causing a general panic amongst the students, right? The panic was mostly due to the fact that no one knows what's going on and, last I've heard, there hasn't been a breach in security for years, replied Rukia, thinking it over. Though, I don't know about the journalists. Maybe one of them had a quirk that... Oh, look, a teacher, suddenly exclaimed Kirishima, pointing ahead. We can just ask him. Everyone looked up and found a man stepping out of the teacher's lounge. However, Rukia instantly noticed that not only had she never seen him before, but also that he was wearing a hood and mask that completely hid his identity. For pro heroes, that wasn't unusual, but that guy wasn't a hero, that much she was certain of. He was the real trespasser. Hey, sensei, called out Kaminari, waving his way. Can you tell us what's going on? She smelled it, the powder. She saw it, the weapon he was hiding in his sleeve. Get down. Without thinking, she threw herself on Gyro, who had been standing just before her, forcefully pulling her down. The two of them fell on the floor, and she heard the others scream as a gunshot echoed painfully in her ears. Then another, and another. After the third gunshot, only retreating footsteps followed, until they could no longer be heard. After a few stressful seconds, Rukia suddenly realized what had happened and she sat up, looking at her friends in worry. Is everyone okay? Was anyone shot? I am fine, choked out Gyro, still on the floor beside her. Ditto, grunted Kaminari. But that was scary, gasped Mina. I got shot, but the bullets didn't get past my quirk, exhaled Kirishima, obviously a little shaken up. Thanks for the save, man, wheezed out Siro, still stuck underneath the red-haired boy. In the confusion, Kirishima had apparently gotten the same idea as she did, and he had tackled both Siro and Ashido to the ground while hardening his body, thus granting them some protection. Then, without any warning, Shinso jumped to his feet. I'm going after him. Go warn the teachers. What? No. But he had already started running in the same direction the intruder had gone, and Rukia let out an uncharacteristic curse. Damn it. I'll go and stop him. You guys find a way to warn the teachers. Right. You got it. She started running, hoping she'd catch up to Shinso in time. She understood the need to prove himself, the desire to show to everyone that he could be a hero, but now seriously wasn't the time. Whoever that intruder was, he was armed and dangerous, and he wouldn't hesitate to kill them if he got the chance. She knew, she had sensed his killing intent earlier. Don't do anything stupid. Don't do anything stupid. She practically skipped the entire second flight of stairs, making a barrel to soften her landing before getting back to her feet, using the momentum to go even faster. She practically burst out of the emergency exit, getting blinded by the sudden sunlight for a moment. Then, not wasting any time, she started looking for Shinso. The good news, he wasn't far. The bad news, he wasn't alone. Shinso, he had apparently managed to stop their intruder, whose gun was now hanging loosely in his hand as he faced the boy, completely brainwashed and unmoving. I got him. Grinning smugly, he turned to Rukia. See, I can. Watch out. She pounced, tackling him to the ground. A gunshot followed, and she felt the bullet fly a tad too close to her head for her liking. Her heart was beating fast, almost as if it was going to burst out of her chest at any given moment, and she lifted her head just in time to see the trespasser flee through a hole in the wall. Just as he passed through, though, he paused and looked back at them. Yellow clashed with green, and she could swear he smiled under his mask before he fully disappeared from sight, escaping without even a scratch. Damn it! Shinso shoved her off of him, glaring. I had him. Had you not shown up? Are you stupid or just blind? She snapped, roughly poking his forehead. You didn't have him, he had you. He was messing around so that he could shoot you. He answered me. I had him under my control. Then why didn't he drop his gun? Why did he shoot? At that, he couldn't give her an answer. Heaving out a frustrated sigh, Rukia rose back to her feet, dusting her clothes. Then, she glanced back to the hole in the wall. Giving chase now would be pointless, and her tracking abilities weren't refined enough to be of much use in the city. The best she could do now was wait for the teachers to show up and tell them everything. Thanks. Startled, she looked back at Shinso, who was now sitting with his head lowered. He was obviously as frustrated as she was. For saving me. The word left an acidic taste on his tongue. He was a hero. He wasn't supposed to be saved. He was supposed to be the one doing the saving, and yet he had been too weak, too reckless. His classmate had almost been shot because he hadn't realized he had fallen into a trap. She could have died and it would have been my fault. We're not ready yet to face people like that, I mean. The adrenaline slipping away, Rukia just felt tired now, and she plopped back on the ground next to him. That's why we're students here. We're in the hero course in order to learn how to handle that kind of situation, so making mistakes is a natural part of the process, too. Don't beat yourself up over it. You almost got hurt because of me. That's not the kind of mistake we're allowed to make. And yet that's the only kind of mistake people like us will really learn from, she replied, her tone bittersweet. People like us. People who have too much to prove. He paused at that and looked at her, really looked at her. Frankly, compared to some other students in the hero course, she didn't stand out at all. While her appearance was unique, her quirk in and of itself wasn't really of the flashy kind, and though she was physically very strong, it didn't match her shy and restrained personality. And yet, on the field, it was almost as if she became a different person entirely. Someone who has too much to prove? Well, there was no denying that. Having nothing more to say, Shinso simply nodded, and the two fell into a comfortable silence while they awaited the arrival of the pro-heroes. And that's what happened. Headmaster Nezu sighed. I see. I understand the situation better now. For something like this to happen, I'm truly glad none of our precious students got injured. He then offered them a small smile. Albeit I cannot condone the recklessness of your actions. I suppose you wouldn't be students of the hero course had you not attempted something. That does not mean you were in the right, warned sharply Aizawa. You should have just let him escape instead of endangering yourselves of the sort. Shinso, you've got good potential, but you're still just a student. Don't be hasty. Your quirk isn't as infallible as you seem to believe, so don't get ahead of yourself just because of your sudden transfer. Shinso lowered his head at that. Yes, sir. And Rukia, you should have known better than to take your classmates through a restricted passageway. He added sharply, it's not because we're clueless that it wasn't on the map. And also why only so many emergency exits are available for the students. Next time around, follow the procedures. There's a reason rules and guidelines have been put in place. I understand. It won't happen again, she assured, properly chastised. Good. Also, don't go spreading any details. The last thing we want is for everyone to know that an armed individual broke into UA and shot at some students, he remarked, pinching the bridge of his nose. He appeared even more tired than usual. It'd only cause more panic and worry. And who knows what those stupid journalists might say. You may discuss the matter with your classmates, seeing as I doubt they would drop the subject so easily. But we'd appreciate your discretion on the matter, added Headmaster Nezu in a softer tone. All right, get out of here and go back to class, urged Aizawa, shooing them toward the door. And don't go causing any more trouble, you hear me? Yes, sir. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Everyone was worried about the incident, and reassuring them took a fair while, but by the end of class, things were back to normal. If anything, the only thing that had changed was that Shinso was slightly more friendly, sparing a comment here and there, and occasionally volunteering during the lessons. Looks like he's starting to get along with everyone. Too bad the same can't be said for Bakugo-san. Todoroki-san also keeps his distances. I should probably try talking to them some more. Maybe they're just shy. But imagining Bakugo and Todoroki shy, of all things, was a tad too much. Snorting under her breath at the thought, she finished preparing the rice. It was her turn to prepare dinner, and she made a lot more than usual, hoping to make up for today's incident. I hope he's not mad anymore. Placing the dishes on the table, she then heard footsteps in the hallway. A normal person wouldn't have noticed, but her enhanced hearing gave her an edge, even with Shota-san's silent walking technique. Then, she heard the door unlock, and she quickly went to greet him. Shota-san. She quickly joined him as he started taking off his shoes. You're home just in time. I just finished preparing dinner and, whoa. Without any warning, he pulled her forward, and she stumbled against his chest. A little startled, it took her a second to realize he was hugging her. Confused, and a little taken aback, she however latched her own arms around his waist. Shota-san, is everything all right? She asked, a little scared of the answer. Then, a terrible thought crossed her mind. Was anyone hurt? Is it Uncle Hisashi? Aunt Nimuri? Who? His hold tightened around her, cutting her off. Stupid girl. It's you I was worried about. We heard the gunshots, and we feared the worst. And then the others told us about how you had gone after the intruder, and there was another gunshot. To be fair, I went after Shinso-san. It was a rational decision, right? She gently pointed out. She now understood what exactly was going on, though, so she relaxed and hugged him properly. But I'm sorry for worrying you, Shota-san. I'll be more careful next time around. You better. I won't forgive you if you die so stupidly. She let out a short laugh at that. Don't I know it? Shota-san quickly released her after that, apparently reaching his daily quota of physical contacts. After what, they settled down for dinner, a companionable silence taking over their little apartment. They didn't have much, mostly because neither she nor Shota-san was really materialistic people, but that didn't really matter to her. What mattered was that they had each other, and Rukia was happy with that. For today's hero basic training, it's turned into a class with 3 instructors, me, All Might, and one more person, announced Aizawa, ignoring the confused whispers the students instantly started exchanging. We'll be doing rescue training, disasters, shipwrecks, natural catastrophes, and everything in between. Whoa, sounds like it'll be a lot of work this time around too. Looks exciting. That's the duty of a hero. My arms are ready to rumble. No one can beat me in water, ribbit. Boy, I'm not done talking. Everyone instantly fell silent, and Aizawa sighed. Talk about a noisy bunch. You can decide if you want to wear your costume or not this time around. Consider the fact that some costumes might also hinder your abilities, depending on the situation. The training will take place off campus, so we're taking a bus. Now I'm done, start getting ready. Hey. While he left the classroom, the students started moving to either go and get changed into their sports uniform, or to grab the suitcase containing their costumes. Seeing as her own costume allowed her greater freedom of movements than the sports uniform, Rukia wasted no time in grabbing the suitcase with the number 3 plastered on it. I just hope things will go smoothly. She couldn't help but think as they exited the classroom, the others chatting excitedly around her. The break-in was barely a few days ago, while we were told that nothing was missing from the teacher's lounge. That guy surely didn't just break into the school to shoot at some random students. What's going to happen next? You all right over there, Rukia? Yeah, no, I'm fine, she assured, offering a quick smile at Kirishima. I was just overthinking, is all. Don't mind me. Still thinking about what happened 2 days ago. He easily guessed. Kind of hard no too. It was an actual villain who somehow broke into UA, one of the most protected facilities in the country, a place that's filled to the brim with pro heroes and heroes in training. But he didn't take anything. She scratched her head, a tad frustrated. I just don't understand what we're missing. It looks like something bigger is going on, and I can't shake off the feeling that something bad is going to happen. Well, I guess I've been a little on edge in the past few days too, but what happened shouldn't make us go completely crazy with paranoia either, you know. He lightly knocked his knuckles against her forehead. Don't worry too much in there. A smile suits you better than a frown. Surprised, she then smiled, relaxing a bit. You're right, I shouldn't let this get to my head. Thanks, Ijiro-kun. He simply grinned back. Anytime, Rukia. Many had decided to put on their costumes, if only for the sake of wearing it one more time. It's not like they were allowed to wear them outside of their hero basic training classes, so they had to seize the opportunity when it presented itself. Only Shinso was wearing his sports uniform, seeing as he still hadn't received his costume. Ada suddenly blew into a whistle, gaining the other students' attention at once. Class 1A, gather around. Form 2 lines by your student numbers in order to make boarding the bus go smoothly. Hurry up. He blew a few more times into his whistle, and Kaminari's sweat dropped, leaning over to Yaoyorozu. "Oi, aren't you supposed to be the class rep?" he whispered. "What's he getting all worked up for? Ada-kun is merely a very earnest person." Even if she said that, though, Yaoyorozu also looked a tad exasperated. "At that point, I believe it would simply be easier for everyone if we went along with it. If he goes overboard, then I'll handle it." In the end, it's not like there was any harm in letting Ada handle the heavy management job, even if she was the class rep. Plus, it was kind of hard to be the one to put a damper on his spirit when he simply acted in the best interests of the class. He was a very eager and very sincere person, as everyone in the class had quickly learned, so she'd just feel bad if she told him off and reminded him of his position as deputy class rep. In the end, though, Ada's thorough instructions turned out to be quite worthless. I didn't think it would be this type of bus. I should have thought ahead. Don't mind, chuckled Ashido, patting his back in comfort. The bus wasn't set up with dual seats placed in rows, but with individual seats lined up against the walls at the front and dual seats at the back. So, everyone ended up scattered around a bit, not really bothering with any sort of order. Barely 5 minutes after they departed, though, Rukia somehow found herself sitting next to Bakugo. "How did I end up here? I was supposed to sit between Ijiro-kun and Mina-chan." About a minute or so after they left, Jiro had ended up feeling a little carsick, and Rukia had volunteered to exchange seats without really thinking, since she was the closest to the front. Now, though, it was a little awkward. To tell the truth, Bakugo and her hadn't spoken since that first time they met, back at the entrance exam. "Should I say something? Should I just ignore him? What do I do? What are you staring at?" he asked abruptly, startling her a bit. "Want my picture? So sorry. It's just, well, I just thought that your costume looks really cool. Sorry." There was a moment of silence following her mildly panicked answer. Then, a few of their classmates chuckled, and Kaminari openly snorted. "Count on Rukia to apologize for complimenting someone. It's just like her." "Oi, Bakugo, don't go being a brute with her. Yeah, don't bully Rukia-chan." Shut up, extras. I didn't do anything," he snapped, annoyed. He then turned his glare to her, and she gulped. "And you, what's up with that shy attitude? You didn't have any problem telling me off during the entrance exam, so what's up with the stuttering crap?" As much as she sometimes wanted to snap at him for being a jerk, she still hadn't been able to shake off that memory of him at the supermarket. He had been so nice, so gentle. It was a shockingly different personality from the one he presented in class, and she simply didn't know where to stand anymore. In the end, he wasn't a bad guy. He was just greatly blinded by his own ambitions. And she could, to an extent, respect that. Though, he didn't have to be such an ass about it. "Boy, I'm talking to you. Are you deaf, dumb mutt?" That got her to react, and next thing Bakugo knew, she was snarling in his face, her pupils slightly dilated as her fangs grew just long enough to be dangerous, and her hand tightly grabbing the front of his shirt, her sharp nails almost piercing through the material. "Do not call me that," she growled, her grip tightening. "I'm ready to tolerate a lot of crap, Bakugo-san, but not this. I couldn't care less for petty insults, but don't go treating me like some fucking rabid pet, do you hear me?" "Oi, enough messing around. You two," suddenly interfered Aizawa, standing at the front of the bus. "We're here, so break it off." His abrupt intervention instantly broke the tension that had grown in the bus, and silence took over as the white-haired girl released the jerk with a huff. They had seen her angry once, back during their first hero basic training class, but it had been on screen, and they hadn't been able to hear a word of what she was saying to Shinso. Now, though, it was the first time they actually witnessed her anger, and it had been downright terrifying. It was apparently, as the saying went, "It's always the quiet ones. Everyone, I have been waiting for you. Welcome." The bus had barely stopped moving that Rukia was already back on her feet and out of the door, leaving the others even more confused and worried about what had just happened. Her sudden and uncharacteristic outburst had shocked more than one of her classmates, and even Bakugo was now strangely subdued and quiet. Unfortunately, just as Kirishima joined her outside, they were greeted by 13, the space hero, meaning he would have to wait a little more before getting some answers. "Let's go inside without delay," urged 13, gesturing to the large, circular building behind them. "I'm sure you are as impatient as I am to get started." The other students answered with positive shouts, forgetting about what had happened on the bus. Kirishima did shoot a worried look at Rukia, but the girl wasn't paying attention to anyone, simply moving along with the crowd as they started heading inside. Once they entered the building, though, he also quickly forgot about the incident. "Whoa, holy crap. This place is huge. It looks like Universal Studios Japan. Amazing." If it had appeared big on the outside, it was absolutely gigantic on the inside. The large, circular space was entirely occupied by disaster simulations of all sorts: shipwrecks, landslides, earthquakes, grand-scale fires, windstorms, and everything in between. And the roof was dome-shaped, and entirely made of glass panels that let the sunlight shine inside the entire facility. To say it was a breathtaking sight would be an understatement. And even Rukia's tense shoulders relaxed a bit as she slowly focused back on reality. It is a training ground that I made with different types of accidents and disasters. It's called the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short. The students froze a bit at the obvious plagiarism, but Aizawa didn't look bothered in the least and walked up to his fellow teacher while looking around. 13, where's All Might? He was supposed to meet us here, he remarked, a tad annoyed by the absence of the noisy number 1. At his inquiry, 13 leaned closer and lowered their voice in order to answer without the students hearing whatever they were saying. However, even if she wanted to, Rukia couldn't simply not hear them. Even with the excited whispers and the odd exclamations echoing all around her, her enhanced hearing easily caught the answer. It looks like he did too much hero work on his way to school and ran out of time. Ran out of time? Even if All Might was late, he would still show up, wouldn't he? So, he's resting in the lounge. The lounge, so he's not late. Then what did they mean when they said he had run out of time? He said he should be able to come for the last hour of class, though. I see. That's the height of irrationality, but I suppose it can't be helped. Saying this, Aizawa suddenly turned around and spared a mild glare for the wolf girl. And Rukia, stop eavesdropping. She instantly flushed a deep red, her ears flattening against her head. So sorry. She hadn't expected to be caught red-handed, but then again, it was Aizawa, the man who had raised her for the last 6 years and who knew her better than she knew herself. So, really, she should have expected it. He heaved out a sigh, facing the rest of the students. Well, no matter. All Might will be joining us later. So, let's get started. Let's see. Before we begin, let me say one thing. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Everyone, I am sure you already know about my quirk, black hole. In short, I can suck up anything and turn it to dust. I have used my powers to save many people, mainly from disasters such as the ones you are going to be training with today. However, it is also a power that can kill easily. Instantly, the somewhat childlike eagerness of the students died down, the brutal statement acting like a slap. Some of you also have quirks like that, right? Quirks that can hurt, quirks that can kill, quirks that can do even a lot worse than that. Rukia couldn't help but look down, rubbing her throat a bit. In a superhuman society, personal quirks have been certified and stringently regulated, so it doesn't appear to be a problem at first glance. However, please do not forget that there are many quirks that can easily do more harm than good with a single wrong step, a single mistake, or even a single moment of inattention. At that, Rukia glanced at Todoroki, distinctly remembering the day of the attack on the supermarket. What he had attempted to do was noble, but recklessly using his quirk in an area filled with civilians had almost killed a woman, merely because she got caught in the crossfire and ended up stuck under one of his blocks of ice. Had she been any unluckier, she could have been crushed there and then. Apparently thinking the same thing, Todoroki briefly glanced her way, then quickly averted his eyes, his jaw clearly tensing up. With Aizawa's physical fitness test, you discovered the large margin of possibilities your powers had to offer. And with All Might's person-to-person combat training, I believe you experienced firsthand the danger of using those powers against others. So, the class I am offering you today is a fresh start. You shall learn to use your quirks to save people's lives. 13 spread their arms, gesturing to the entire facility behind them. You do not have those wonderful powers so you can harm others. I hope you leave here with the understanding that you have powers in order to help others, and I hope this training will help you grasp the full extent of your future responsibilities as heroes of this society. They then offered a small bow. That is all. Thank you for listening to the end. Almost instantly, the students before 13 broke out in cheers and applause, obviously fired up by their little speech. However, while Rukia had also greatly been touched by the heartfelt lecture, she had become a little distracted by the end of it. Her guts were churning in an almost painful way. Her chest felt hollow, and a cold sweat was now running down her back. Something's coming. She could feel it. Goosebumps covered her arms, and her nails and fangs instinctively extended a little. And her tail was swinging left and right in a nervous manner. Her ears kept twitching, trying to pinpoint the source of this growing, unsettling feeling of wrongness, but everyone around her just kept cheering, all blissfully unaware. There's something wrong, very wrong, really wrong, something's coming. Rukia, she snapped her head to Kirishima, who startled a bit as their eyes met. Her pupils kept on dilating and narrowing, and beads of sweat were now rolling down her forehead. Are you okay? You look a little pale, he insisted, honestly worried. There's something wrong, she managed to choke out, dread filling her guts and almost making her want to puke. What do you? A crackle of electricity, loud, static. The lights dimmed down, then stopped working. It's rung. Down below, in the middle of the facility, space seemed to distort and spin into a dark, eerie portal. Then, a hand passed through, pushing apart the dark tendrils in the warped reality, revealing an eye as red as blood. Rukia instantly fell on all four, the fur of her tail bristling as she lifted it in a sudden display of aggressivity. her lips pulling up to reveal her sharpened teeth as a snarl escaped her throat. Fur grew on her forearms as her nails fully shifted into claws, and she kept on growling as she lowered herself to the ground, ready to pounce. Rukia, what is she doing? Rukia-chan, what's wrong? Everyone, gather together, instantly ordered Aizawa, his bored expression having shifted into one of genuine alarm. Don't move from here. 13. Look after the students. Rukia's animalistic growls grew louder, more aggressive as the darkness spread below, and numerous threatening-looking fellows stepped through. The students tensed up when realizing that something was very wrong if their classmate and their teachers reacted in such a way. What's that? Who are they? Is it another part of the lesson? What's going on? Don't move, repeated Aizawa, putting on his visors. This isn't part of any simulation whatsoever. Those guys down there are the real deal. The real deal, echoed worriedly Mina. Kaminari paled. Wait, you mean villains, confirmed Todoroki, gritting his teeth. They're villains. The thought sent chills down almost everyone's spines. Villains, Inoue. And so soon after the other incident, even though they were supposed to become heroes, this was just too much. It had barely been 2 weeks since school started. They weren't ready yet. They barely got any training in. And they were just starting on the basics. And what were they supposed to do against actual villains? The trespassing the other day was the work of these scumbags after all? Grunted Aizawa, his jaw clenching a bit. This is crazy. For real, sensei, what about the sensors? Inquired Yaoyorozu, keeping her cool. We have them, of course, but something seems to keep them from working. What if the villains appeared only here, and not around the entire school? Suggested Todoroki. If the sensors aren't responding, that means they have someone with a quirk that helped them bypass the entire security network. He narrowed his mismatched eyes at the slowly approaching enemy. An isolated area separated from the main campus during a time when a class is supposed to be here. They might be fools, but they're not dumb. You're telling us this was planned, Todoroki? Gulped Kirishima, tensing up. Wait, doesn't that also mean that no one else but us knows they're here? Exclaimed Hagakure, clearly agitated despite being invisible. 13. Begin the evacuation, then ordered Aizawa, moving forward. The bandages around his neck suddenly started floating, as if animated by a will of their own. Try contacting the school, by any means necessary. If the sensors haven't been triggered, then it's highly possible that they have someone with a radio wave-type quirk interfering. Kaminari, try establishing contact with the school with your quirk, too. Why yes, sir. What about us? Asked impatiently Bakugo, cracking his knuckles. What do we do? Nothing, hissed Aizawa, making many freeze in place. None of you are ready for this. I'll be going ahead and keep them occupied while you guys make a run for it. That snapped Rukia out of her growling fit, and she straightened up, baring her teeth. No way. I'm coming with you. You're staying here, and it's not up for discussion, he warned seriously. She jumped back to her feet, clenching her fists. You can't possibly fight all of them by yourself. Even if you'll be able to stop them for a little while, you're not a melee fighter. No matter how many quirks you erase, there's simply too many of them. Even if you last for a few minutes, you'll eventually become overwhelmed by their numbers. Determined, she stepped forward. I'm coming with you. Stay here. The air was knocked out of her lungs, and she collapsed to her knees, gasping in pain. Her tail now between her legs as her ears flattened in a clear display of submission, she lowered her head, frustrated tears brimming her eyes. Rukia-chan, what's wrong with her? Are you okay? Ignoring her state and the worry of her classmates, Aizawa gave one last nod to 13 before taking off, jumping over the flights of stairs to cover more distance more quickly. He left behind his students in hopes that he could buy them enough time for them to escape and alert the teachers back at the main campus. As for the students, well, they could only watch in a mix of horror and awe as their teacher threw himself into the fray, effectively knocking down 3 of them with a single attack. He was moving fast, each move was perfectly calculated, and seeing an actual pro in action up close was a nerve-wracking, chill-inducing experience. Unfortunately, not all of them were blissfully ignorant of the real danger they were in. This isn't right. He won't make it. Struggling, Rukia somehow managed to rise back to her feet, though her legs were visibly shaking. I need to help him. Arc. She fell once again, but this time around, Kirishima managed to catch her. She was panting, visibly in pain, but anger was also evident in her eyes. What's happening to you, Rukia? Asked worriedly Kirishima, helping her stand. Can't disobey him. Directly, she gasped out, breathing in deeply. Damn it, we don't have any time to waste. Students, run for the exit. Urged 13, ushering them toward the automatic doors. You heard the teachers. Hurry up outside. Ordered Ida. Come on, Rukia. Let's go, urged Kirishima, pulling her along. Just as the students started running toward the exit, though, Rukia's eyes went wide, her heartbeat picking up. Don't. Everyone, fall back, she exclaimed, alarmed. Her panicked shout did manage to make them stop in their tracks, and they all looked back at her with puzzled expressions. Before any of them could ask her what was wrong, though, a dark portal suddenly opened up on the floor, barely a few meters ahead of them. Next thing they knew, a faceless villain that looked to be entirely made out of shadows and slithering tendrils of darkness appeared between them and their only way out. "I'm afraid that escaping isn't an option," he stated simply. "Nice to meet you. We are the League of Villains. It may be presumptuous of us, but we have invited ourselves into the home of the heroes, UA High School, in order to have All Might, the symbol of peace, take his last breath. I believe All Might should have been here. Has there been some kind of change?" "That's why that guy was there the other day," gasped Kaminari. "They infiltrated the school in order to get their hands on the teachers' schedules," realized Shinso, narrowing his eyes. "Isn't that right, villain?" There was a moment of silence during which the shadowy villain stared at the boy before he averted his eyes to 13, who was standing protectively between him and the group. "I am here to play the part I was given. Please, do not get in our way." Shinso cursed under his breath. If his target didn't answer him directly, then he couldn't use his quirk to brainwash him. Just as 13 was about to use their power to get rid of the threat, however, 3 of the students threw themselves at him. Fists raised, claws out, explosives ready. Kirishima, Rukia, and Bakugo didn't think twice before starting their own fight. "No, don't." But it was too late. An explosion followed, dust and smoke rising and completely hiding the foolhardy students and their opponents. "Did you consider you'd get beaten by us before you did anything?" taunted Kirishima. "Don't look down on us just cause we're students, you piece of shit," added Bakugo. "Don't get in your way. We should be the ones saying that," snapped Rukia, crouched and ready to pounce. "Oh dear, that's dangerous." The smoke dissipated and the dust fell back on the floor, revealing a very much unscathed villain. The shadows had merely dispersed before coming back together, his body apparently entirely made out of darkness, untouchable and impossible to beat up. "That's right. Even if you are students, you are excellent golden eggs." His yellow eyes narrowed. "My job is to scatter you and torture you to death." "Oh no, everyone, get back." Even with 13's warning, though, it was too late. In a matter of seconds, the entire group was engulfed in complete darkness, the students yelling out in shock and fear. Rukia gritted her teeth, her claws sinking into the floor in an attempt not to be blown away. But the pressure was too much and, in a matter of seconds, she received the brunt of the blast and was sent flying. Then, the next thing she knew, she was falling. Holy crap. Flipping backward, she somehow managed to land on her feet, then made a few barrels before stopping herself just a few centimeters away from the edge of the caving roof she had just crashed onto. Panting a little, it took her a few seconds to realize that she was no longer with the group, but that she was still in USJ. Slowly getting back up, she quickly understood that she had landed in the collapse zone, or the earthquake simulation. She was surrounded by crumbling and destroyed buildings, ruins, flipped cars, broken windows, the whole shebang, really. Oh, and villains, too. Kind of hard not to notice them. "Hey, looky here. We've got ourselves a girly." "Woo, talk about a beaut," she growled, her partial transformation activating at once, and the 7 villains now surrounding her paused upon noticing her razor-sharp claws. "Well, looks like a feisty one, grinned one of them. "This is going to be fun. Let's beat her up." "Beat me up? Because I was teleported so suddenly. Shota-san's order no longer has any hold on me. That means I have to get out of here and go help him at once. I don't have time to waste messing around with you. Come at me and let's get this over with." "Hold on, Shota-san. I'm coming." "Ooh, crap. This is bad. Kaminari, get your shit together." "I'm trying, Gyro." "Enough, you two." Yaoyorozu cut in, creating a fighting staff. "This isn't the time nor the place for petty arguments. We have to fight and defend ourselves." Now stuck in the mountain zone, the 3 of them were completely surrounded by villains, who had apparently spread throughout the entire facility. There was no doubt that many of their fellow classmates were currently stuck in similar positions, meaning they had to do their best to beat those villains and gather back together if they wanted to win. Losing meant dying. Winning was their only option. "Ugh, this is the worst," groaned Kaminari, taking the staff Yaoyorozu was handing him. "Less whining, more hitting," retorted Gyro, wielding a short sword that had also been provided by their class representative. "The faster we get this over with, the faster we can go back with the others." "Kyoka-chan is right," nodded Yaoyorozu, taking a defensive stance. "We are going to become heroes, are we not? Then let's act accordingly." At that, Kaminari straightened up. "Right, let's do this." Ice spread all over the ground, effectively freezing a few villains in place. In one of his rare displays of emotions, Todoroki was openly glaring at them, unimpressed and annoyed. "It's pathetic to lose against a single child. Get a hold of yourself. You're an adult, are you not?" When the darkness had taken over, he hadn't expected to suddenly find himself in the middle of the landslide zone, and even less expected the villainous welcome committee awaiting his arrival. However, he didn't let his shock take over and, keeping a level head, it barely took him a few seconds to immobilize half of his opponents. This is ridiculous. I need to get this over with quickly. Gah. We're completely surrounded. Stay calm, Hagakure-san, urged Ajiro, clenching his fists. We need to evacuate the fire zone as quickly as possible and regroup with the others. Can you try to find us an exit while I handle those guys? Because the villains slowly closing in on them didn't look all that friendly, and he doubted they'd simply point them to the exit if they asked nicely. Gulping, the invisible girl then gave a firm nod, though he couldn't see it. All right, I'll do my best. Please be careful, Ajiro-kun. You too, Hagakure-san. On which they both moved, running into opposite directions. Thanks to the boy's distraction and her invisibility, Hagakure easily slipped between the ranks of the villains and quickly made a run for the next street. Just as she was about to turn the corner, though, she paused and looked back at Ajiro, who was now fighting the villains. Her grip on the wall tightened slightly. I'll come back quickly, Ajiro-kun, she promised internally. I'll come and help you, so please, stay safe. Well, it looks like we're in quite the pinch. Despite the surprise of suddenly being transported into the squall zone, Takoyami kept his cool and calmly assessed the situation. Villains had infiltrated USJ, apparently looking for All Might, and he and Koda had been separated from the group. It was logical to assume that their classmates had met the same fate and had been scattered throughout the entire facility, meaning they had to quickly reunite with them in order to beat their foes. Unfortunately, it was easier said than done. We've got 2 of them. Let's get them. Don't let the kiddos get away. With Koda nervously fidgeting, their backs turned to one another, Takoyami quickly calculated that they were surrounded by 7 villains, all with unknown quirks, and with the clear intent of either beating them up or actually killing them. Neither option sounded particularly pleasing, however, meaning they simply had to win. That's what heroes did, after all. Ready, Koda? Takoyami asked simply. MMN. Shinso barely had the time to curse before his body hit the water. A little stunned from his abrupt plunge, it took him a few seconds to gain back his senses and realize that he really needed air. Instantly swimming back up, he was about to breach the surface when a shadow suddenly started approaching. His eyes went wide when he saw an actual shark swimming straight at him, but just as he thought that he really was going to die, none other than Asui rammed into the shark, which happened to have a human body. Now that he paid attention, a villain. Then, the girl's rabbit tongue tied itself around his waist, and next thing he knew, his body was flung out of the water and onto a boat, choking out some water and breathing in some much-needed air. He then heard someone else crash just a few meters before him. Looking up, he found Uraraka in a state very similar to his own. Asui simply landed on the railing between the 2 of them. Are you all right, Shinso-kun? Achako-chan. She asked simply. Why yes, thanks to you, Tsuyu-chan. Choked out Uraraka. Where are we? Asked Shinso, working on regulating his breathing. Still in USJ, I believe. Asui glanced behind her. We landed in the shipwreck zone. Did that shadow guy scatter everyone like that? Most likely, grunted Shinso, sitting up. There are villains in the water, meaning they were waiting for us. There are probably villains situated in every disaster zone. This is bad, shuddered Uraraka, rubbing her arms. There's too many of them, and we've been separated, and then what do? We fight, answered simply Asui. She looked as calm as always, and her cool tone rubbed off on Uraraka, who calmed down a bit. We won't be safe for much longer, even if we stay aboard this boat. The best thing to do is fight our way out of this zone, and regroup with the others. Their numbers are troublesome, but they're not all that coordinated, or even all that powerful, pointed out Shinso, narrowing his eyes at the shark man still in the water. That's why they scattered us, to pick us off one after the other. If the entire class regroups, we have a better chance of making it out of here alive. Uraraka gulped, steeling herself as she rose to her feet. All we need is for someone to escape the facility, right? As long as someone gets out, they can contact the school and bring other heroes here. Regrouping with the others is the best way to ensure our survival, stated firmly Asui. We must hurry out of here and go help our friends. You're saying that, but we might be the ones needing help. After all, warned Shinso, his grip tightening on the railing. I counted 10 of them, and I'm ready to bet that there are more. I could try flying one of us over the water and out of the shipwreck zone. But it'd be risky, suggested Uraraka. If one of them has a long-range quirk, we'd be no more than easy targets, easily completed Shinso, shaking his head. No, I think I have an idea. For it to work, though, we need to use their own plan against them. Their own plan, echoed Uraraka. What do you mean by that, Shinso-kun? Asked curiously Asui. At that, a grin that strangely reminded them of their teachers stretched his lips. Pick them off one after the other. Shoji-kun, is everyone here? Can you locate them? Everyone's scattered, but they're all in the facility. At Shoji's answer, the few students around him relaxed, but just slightly. While they hadn't been caught like the rest of their classmates, they weren't out of danger. The shadowy villain was still standing between them and the exit, and they needed to figure out a way to either get rid of him or get past him. And, although they could still count on 13 and their experience, Ada sincerely doubted they'd be able to simply wait things out on the sidelines. Plus, sticking to said sidelines wasn't very heroic. "This guy is dangerous," grunted Sato. "His quirk is the worst," added Zero. Deputy Class Rep called out 13, keeping their focus on the enemy ahead. "I entrust this duty to you. Run to the school and tell them about what is happening here." "T13-sensei," protested Mina. "What are you? The alarms are not sounding. And our phones don't have any signal." "The alarm system is based on infrared rays. Even though Eraserhead is erasing people's quirks left and right, the alarms are still not working, which means they must have someone with an interference quirk who hid right when they arrived. It would be faster for you to run than for us to find that person." Ada shook his head. "But it would be a disgrace to abandon my duties as deputy class rep and leave everyone behind." "Go ahead, emergency exit," retorted Sato, moving forward with his back turned to him. "If you can get outside, there are alarms. That's why these guys are only doing this inside, right? As long as you go outside, they won't follow you," added Zero, taking a defensive stance next to him. "Blow away this fog with your legs. Use your quirk to save others," urged 13, going to stand at the front. "We'll do our best to open the way for you," assured quietly Shoji. "You can count on us," beamed Ashido, determined. Genuinely taken aback by their apparent faith in him, Ida then nodded firmly. While abandoning his friends did leave a bitter aftertaste on his tongue, he understood the importance of the mission he was given, and he would not fail. Everyone depended on him, and he would not let them down. "Stop getting in my way." Rukia grabbed the nearest villain and literally threw him over her shoulder, right into the three foes who had been standing before her and trying to cut her off. There was simply no end to those guys, and she feared that she was running out of time. Who knew how much longer Shota-san would last while fighting all of those people? He was strong, and he had experience, and she knew he could take care of himself. But he wasn't infallible. If their numbers were anything to go by, the villains would clearly overpower him at one point or another, and she held no doubt that they'd finish him off as soon as they got the chance. "Faster, I need to go faster. Damn it, they just keep coming. Get the girl. Stop her already." She bared her teeth as three more pounced at her, but just as she was about to deal them the same fate as the others who had tried to stop her, a loud explosion echoed above their heads. The girl's eyes went wide and she instantly jumped away as glass shards and pieces of concrete and metal fell from above, and the villains also backed away. In a split second, something big hit the ground, which trembled and cracked under the impact, which also created a large cloud of dust. As it settled back down, though, some tension vanished from Rukia's shoulders. "Aijiro-kun, Bakugo-san." "Oh, Rukia," gasped the red-haired boy, only now noticing her. "Teachi, there's even more small flies here?" Grunted Bakugo, glaring at the villains. Arg. Underneath them, what had crashed onto the ground wasn't a piece of debris or concrete, but another villain, much larger than the others. They had apparently kicked him through the wall and used him as a mean to soften their landing, and thanks to his anthropomorphic quirk, the villain didn't seem to sustain any serious or lethal injury, save maybe for a concussion. "If you're also here, that probably means everyone else was scattered throughout the facility," she remarked, quickly going to stand back to back with the other two. "Right, we need to get out of here and go help them," nodded firmly Kirishima. "Talk for yourselves." "I'm going after the boss," warned Bakugo, cracking his knuckles. "And I'm going after Shota-san," she replied, crouching into an offensive position. "The others can take care of themselves. If we help him take down the boss, then it'll be like nipping the problem in the bud." "Well, I guess you have a point," relented Kirishima. "One way or another, though, we need to get out of here first." Because, of course, the commotion had drawn even more villains to them, and they found themselves completely surrounded once more. However, now that Rukia had other people to watch her back, she felt a little more at ease. "We'll get out of here together. And then we're heading straight for the boss and Shota-san." Determined, she exchanged one look with the two boys, before her lips twisted into a grin, which they quickly returned. Then, at once, all three of them pounced forward, taking the enemy head-on. With a snarl, Rukia tackled two of the villains to the ground before using her hands to propel herself upward and kick another in the face. Using her claws to block an incoming blade, she then quickly snapped it in two and kicked the guy in the chest. A few ribs cracked at the impact and he collapsed, but she didn't spare him another thought and moved on to the next. Elbowing him in the guts, she then brought her elbow upward and knocked him in the throat. He stumbled back, and she used the opportunity to punch him in the face. Then, reacting instinctively, she dropped low to the ground, just in time to avoid a metallic ball full of deadly spikes. Jumping away, she barely managed to avoid the dangerous weapon a second time, then jumped back to her feet and faced her new opponent, a large, burly guy whose hands had been replaced by those spike balls on chains. "Not so tough when facing someone stronger than you, he taunted, the spike balls spinning around. "Stronger than me, Smirking, she hunched her back and spread her arms. "All right, let's test that." You're leaving yourself wide open." His arms moved, and the 2 spike balls were sent flying at her. She instantly started running up to him, avoiding both the weapons and the chains, and not wasting a single second. She kicked him in the crotch. A resounding crack followed as the guy's face went white, and a small whimper escaped him before he collapsed to the ground. "Well, that's one less. Rukia, watch out." Her sharpened instincts warned her of the danger just as Kirishima's warning echoed in the air. Spinning around, she somehow managed to catch the 2 spike balls that had been about to hit her behind the head and crush her skull. Struggling a little, she then let out a snarl as her claws dug into the iron and effectively ripped it apart. Panting a little, she dropped the mangled weapons to the ground and, upon seeing his utterly destroyed limbs, the villain fainted. He didn't feel any pain, so they can probably be repaired like any normal weapons. Though, talk about being unlucky. What kind of quirk is that? Seriously? Rukia. Kirishima suddenly ran up to her. "Are you okay?" Yeah, I'm fine." She lightly nudged the now unconscious guy. "He was weak, they all are. If that's really all there is to those villains, then I'm not worried about our friends." The Chihuahua's right. They'll be fine," nodded Bakugo, carelessly kicking away one of the unconscious bodies. "I want to take care of that warping bastard and the boss." Rukia gasped. Did you just call me a Chihuahua?" "Guys, not the time." Sweat dropped Kirishima before shaking his head with a smirk. "But all right. Believing in your friends is manly. I'll follow you guys." So, dread suddenly filled Rukia's guts. But not the same as when she first felt the arrival of the villains. No, this one was colder, sharper. It made her stomach turn and her mind go blank as something stirred and pierced her heart. Gasping for air, her eyes went wide at the familiar, yet alien feeling. She had only felt it once before, and it could only mean one thing. Rukia, what's wrong?" asked worriedly Kirishima. "You've been acting weird since earlier." "What? Shota-san," she choked out, tensed. "Shota-san's in danger." Not wasting another moment, the white-haired girl took off without another look back, ignoring the worried shouts of Kirishima and Bakugo's cursing fit. She needed to move faster, get to Shota-san. Shota-san needed her, he needed help, he's in danger. Shota-san, calling out to him gave away her position. She was well aware of it, and his name half came out as a howl as she suddenly escaped the collapse zone. She didn't care about subtlety right now, though. All she cared about was finding Shota-san and helping him. Just as she ran past the few trees surrounding the central area of USJ, though, she saw them. The villains. The boss. Shota-san. He was bleeding. He was bleeding and hurting, and he was trapped underneath a gigantic monster that had broken both of his arms, and he was bleeding. Her cry instantly attracted his attention, but also that of the rest of the villains. And she found herself freezing when she finally realized that she had just, quite ironically, thrown herself to the wolves. Ooh, the boss, she could tell it was him. She could tell because of how he stood, how he spoke, how he smelled, a new player. Man, these kids are good. Annoying, too. A hand covered his face, and he kept on scratching his neck. A student. No, not only that. Your daughter, perhaps. Let him go, she growled, her claws itching to draw his blood. Let him go. So hasty, so loud. Still scratching his neck, he suddenly paused, and she stiffened when his single visible eye bore into her own. I know. How about I kill him? He's obviously very precious to you. Maybe if I kill, you'll stop making so much noise. She stiffened. She could feel his killing intent. While it wasn't that of a cold-blooded murderer, it was almost childish, which sickened her even more. Was all of this merely a game to him? Was he hurting people just for fun? Namu, he suddenly called out, his gaze still locked with hers. Crush him. The sudden order sparked something in Rukia. It suddenly felt as if everything was moving in slow motion. And her eyes widened as she realized that, if she didn't move right now, she was going to lose the only person she couldn't live without. Panic and anger rose as a single thought hammered against her skull. Save him. Her limbs started shaking, and it spread to her entire body. Save him. She moved without thinking. Save him. Dad. Save him. It felt as if her entire body was on fire, and, at once, darkness submerged her. The last thing she saw was the face of the boss closing in, and the last thing she heard was a wolf's howl. It had taken a fair bit of effort, but, thanks to Asui's speed and Uraraka's anti-gravity, Shinso had managed to trap the villains one after the other, slowly reducing their numbers until a few were left. Once that was done, he used his brainwashing ability to turn them against each other, and, in a matter of seconds, an all-out battle between previous allies broke out. While they were distracted, Uraraka used her quirk to make them float while Asui used her own to transport them safely to the other side of the large pool. Just as they thought it was over, though, they heard it. Shota-san. That's Rukia-chan, gasped Uraraka. What's happening? Asked worriedly Asui, careful not to be seen. The three of them went to the very edge of the pool and hid behind the ledge, lowering themselves into the water. A few meters away, their teacher was currently trapped underneath a large, muscular creature, and a man with severed hands attached to his face and his arms was standing next to them. Even further away, on the complete opposite of them, stood none other than Rukia. She appeared uninjured, but she was clearly agitated. Ew, a new player, mused the handman out loud. For some reason, Shinso instantly pegged him as the boss, maybe because of the dangerous aura emanating from him. Man, these kids are good. Annoying, too. He was scratching his neck, probably a nervous tic. A student. No, not only that. Your daughter, perhaps. Let him go, growled Rukia, her claws growing even more, if possible. Let him go. So hasty, so loud, still scratching his neck. The man suddenly paused, and she stiffened when he turned to look at her. I know. How about I kill him? He's obviously very precious to you. Maybe if I kill, you'll stop making so much noise. She visibly tensed up, and Uraraka slapped a hand over her mouth. Asui was also tensed, and Shinso simply gritted his teeth. He wanted to help, but the situation was too serious, too real. They couldn't do anything. They were just students. Damn it. Namu, the boss suddenly called out, still staring at the wolf girl. Crush him. This time around. Uraraka let out a choked gasp, her eyes instantly closing. Asui also averted her gaze, but, for one reason or the other, Shinso couldn't bring himself to do the same. It happened in the span of half a second. Dad. Rukia pounced with tremendous strength and speed, and Shinso's jaw dropped when pristine white fur suddenly grew over the girl's entire body. Bones cracked loudly, and a howl echoed throughout the entire training facility, as, out of absolutely nowhere, Rukia's entire body shifted into a gigantic, white wolf.